The story begins with a boy named Konohana Jin, recalling his older sister who was the type of person who blames others in the name of justice. She scolded him for not eating the food their aunt had given, but when he asked her to eat it, she remained silent. It was strange because the food wasn't even that good, yet she expected him to eat it while she didn't. She always guilt-tripped people and made them do her work, using her so-called justice as a tool for blame. This was why he wanted to live apart from her. While they were on their way somewhere, she kept asking him if they weren't at their destination yet. He didn't answer her because he was sick of how many times she had asked. Ever since he got his license, she had been ordering him to fetch her or to bring her somewhere constantly. When they arrived, he was checking the drinks and bento. His sister asked him which one had the sake, but it was the heaviest one, so he told her to try lifting it. They only got the sake bag and started walking while there was a ton of luggage in the car. Jin calmed down and started carrying them. He had already made it this far, so after waiting just a little bit more, he would be going to a university outside of the prefecture, and he would finally be free from his sister. As he was thinking about that, a huge explosion happened, and he suddenly found himself in the middle of a forest. The parking lot was gone with his car and there was complete silence. He wondered if they were supposed to be camping out or if he was dreaming. He took out his phone, but there was no signal. He tried to calm down and decided to walk to see the city. As he walked, the only thing he encountered was a river. He decided to go a little bit more and saw the sea. Even though he walked a lot, he didn't meet any mountain climbers, let alone a city. He was confused as to what was going on, but then got distracted by his growling stomach. Thankfully, he had water, tea, coke, snacks, and bentos for 4 people. He started eating while he was observing what was around him. He hadn't seen any trash around for a while now and wondered if there was a beach without plastic garbage. Also, he knew he had to prepare for spending the night soon. In the first place, this place was so wide, so he didn't think he would be able to make it back in time. He was glad he brought a cutter to set up their place to watch the fireworks. Through his older sister's tyranny, he was forced to go to a fireworks display. Even though he was invited by his friend to go camping by a mountain stream, he regrets putting off watching the survival program for later. It was also something that he could use if he wanted to make his escape from his older sister into reality. He was trying to light a fire by rubbing the woods, but he couldn't muster enough strength. But he should hurry because he had to make a fire before the sun went down. After a while, he noticed smoke coming out. He put some bushes on it and managed to fire it. Luckily, he brought his jacket so he wouldn't get cold. He was exhausted. He tried to calm himself down by saying that when he woke up, he would be out of this dream. But when he woke up, he was still in the same place, so it was confirmed that he was not dreaming. He noticed that the fire was burning out, so he put more wood. After a while, he decided to go in the opposite direction with the hope of seeing the city. After which, he needed to gather dead tree branches again. He somehow got bitten by insects too. After walking for a while, he reached a cliff, which meant that the land was surrounded by the sea, making it an island. The reason he couldn't see any more land was because he was at the other end of the island. At this point, even if he got on a boat, he didn't know where he should be going. He collapsed on the ground after realizing the reality. He didn't even know if there was someone else on this island. After gathering his strength, he continued walking. He wondered why he was experiencing something like that. He just went along with his sister and went to see the fireworks display that he didn't even want to watch. After all, he still wouldn't be able to see the fireworks anyway. He had to pick up dead tree branches soon, even though he didn't know why he kept thinking that he needed to gather them. He ended up arriving at a waterfall. He saw the place where the water was gushing out from. It was close to the riverbed. He decided to gather up some branches and go home. The smoke produced by the fire might have been discovered by somebody else. He started cutting some wood to prepare a house because it seemed like he was going to be there for a while. While making the house, he wasn't sure about its strength. He wondered if he should increase the pillar or fortify the wall with soil and stones. When he got hungry, he ate his last bento, which meant he had to find food tomorrow. He suddenly heard a rustle and peeked at the back of the house. He guessed that it might be a rabbit or a wild boar, so he decided to hurry up and fortify the walls. The next day arrived and he wanted to take a bath. He went to the river and he caught a fish. Since it was peaceful and there were no other people, it was easier to catch it. He cooked the fish and started eating. It didn't even have any taste because there was no seasoning. He remembered that he also needed to do something before he ran out of drinks. He wondered if he should drink the spring water bit by bit until he got used to it. He decided to do his best to build more of the house tomorrow and went to sleep. The next day he made a lot of progress. He covered the ceiling with twigs and leaves. It was kind of dark inside, so he thought about making a window using some plastic bags. Today he dug a drain and piled up stones as preventive measures for rain. He then found a ragged rock. He knew what it was, but he needed to put it on an open fire to make it warm. It may come in handy because it gets cold at night. He wondered if he should make it so he could take a bath. He started warming up the rock and put it inside the water. It was really hot, so he had to be careful. While cleaning himself, he wanted to make something that looked like a pot because he was getting tired of grilled fish and crabs. The leaves were turning red on the mountain these days. He was glad he got to take a bath, but it was getting a little cold now, so he dressed up. He did some pottery and became able to cook a few stewed dishes. It was good to know because it lets him eat more kinds of food. After that, he finally finished his house. There was still room for improvement, but it was a success. Before he knew it, snow had piled up on top of the mountain. While walking in the forest, he noticed some mushrooms, but he didn't know if they were poisonous, so he had to go. He went to his house and made a fire. Before long, it will snow there too, and it will be difficult to catch fish. He wondered if he could make some dried fish and dried seaweed. He was able to somehow manage himself till now, but he didn't know how long he would be able to move. Just as he was thinking that it started to snow, he lost hope and was almost sure he was going to die like that all alone. Before he fell asleep, something flinched in front of him and started to apologize while spinning around his head. It said that it got him involved while it was summoning a hero, and this was not the world that he knew. That was something that Jin didn't expect. Jin had no idea what it was saying, but he told it to return him, but apparently it can't do that. To begin with, he could only go into this world just before he died. It suddenly started screaming, saying that it could still feel his lifespan from back there. Jin said that he didn't know what it was talking about and asked where the hell he was if this wasn't the world he knew. This was a world with magic and swords. Jin didn't believe that because on the mountain he hadn't even seen any monsters or dungeons. He asked if it was a spirit, and it said that it wasn't just a spirit he knew. It used to be a god. Since it summoned a hero, its spiritual power as a god decreased significantly. After summoning, its existence became unclear, but its power would come back eventually. It said all this about the hero, but the truth was that summoning any living thing was fine. The purpose of the summoning was to connect that world to this world for a moment. In the instant the two worlds connect, God's power is consumed, and for the world to escape destruction due to extreme materialization, this world needs living things from that world, which would also save this world from extreme spiritualization. Jin couldn't understand a thing from what it was saying, but didn't stop it. It said that finally the heroes that could be summoned here have limited qualifications. The number of people that should be called was 3. They were summoned just before they died. It added that it didn't realize that he got caught up with Haruka and the others. Hearing his older sister's name, Jin was shocked and asked if his sister was a hero, and it confirmed him. 3 people matched the number of people between his sister and her friends. He questioned if he was supposed to die as well, but earlier it said he still had a remaining lifespan on the other side. Suddenly, 7 people appeared in front of Jin, and one of them told the ball of light that it was too slow. His name was Van. He said that they were going to listen to his wish and then deal with this later. There was also a dog laying there. The light ball said that Rish failed and some power was left lingering around the passage. It already told him that the spread was wider than usual. It said that it wasn't its fault, but even Jin knew that it was its fault. Van repeated that they would deal with it later. An old lady asked Jin who he was going to choose. The other boy said that since it was impossible to return him to the other world, they were going to let him choose a guardian deity in this world. Usually the summoned person was gifted protection, and the remaining lifespan he would have had in that world would be bestowed to him as skills or as items that he would need in this world, such as physical ability, magic, fascination, gold, or anything that he desired. Van's power was the fire attribute where destruction and restoration were present. The other guy was Rudel with earth and stillness magic. The old man was Kadal, and he ruled over flora and order. The little boy was Ish. He oversaw water and healing. The old lady was Pal for the land and harvest. The little girl was Mishto for light and wind, as well as romance and caprice. The beautiful lady was Halalfa, and she oversaw light, love, and beauty. And lastly, that dog was Rish, whose power was now mostly gone, but he was for ice and darkness, though he didn't have any more power to bestow on him. The light ball explained that his powers were on the verge of vanishing, and he was even brimming with confidence before. Jin asked if the powers could overlap. They said that in this world, after birth, people vanish. They were the only ones who were in there, but other people were powerful. It was rare to be a god until your power was already reasonable enough to be treated as such. They asked who he preferred, and he wanted to choose all of them. Kadal explained to him that his lifespan in that world was insufficient to receive all their powers. Putting it another way, it negates and weakens the divine protection that was given. There was an exception if they compromised or were always close to each other, but they only occasionally see each other, so he wouldn't get any advantage from it. The power received would manifest its nature based on the disposition of the god. If Van bestows strength on an individual, it will show immediately. However, if he gives magical powers to him, the latter power bestowed would get a different effect. Mishto continued to explain that it was the same as if she was fascinated with him, but then started to feel affection. If she got bestowed by Pal, she would experience friendship. But if it was Halalfa, it might be love or obsession. Jin was as confused as ever. Kadal told him to think about what he wanted to do, and they would bestow him the necessary power for it. He said that he wanted to live comfortably, without any desire or restrictions, and without getting involved with his older sister. And he also wanted to have a power where he could freely look around this world. The light ball said that his sister Haruka was doing good, and her sense of justice was strong. It was the reason why it chose her. But all Jin could think about was how she used justice as a tool. He then realized that Haruka also received abilities, and he asked what it gave her. When it responded that it gave him domination and all magic, Jin was 100% sure that he didn't want to get involved with her. Considering his requests, Kadal explained that the powers that would be bestowed on him were magical ability, martial arts, production, healing, cooking, storage, transition, exploration, appraisal, mental fortitude, language, freedom separation, and hero killing. Jin said he didn't want to get involved, but he was confused about the hero killing skill. But he still confirmed that he was okay with those abilities. Kadal gave him a sword because it was necessary if he wanted to live in this world. That was all a kill blade that could cut almost anything. They also gave him something that was going to be useful at the destination they would transfer him to. It was a power that aided vegetation growth. Kadal said that they were so grateful that he didn't have any complaints even though he was suddenly taken here. Jin noticed the puppy and wanted to take him with him. Van said that Rich's power and sight were almost gone. That's why he couldn't bestow any power. So in that case, the only thing he could bestow on him was himself. Jin didn't mind that and wanted to take him anyway. And finally, the last thing they would give him was where he would be transferred to a safe and comfortable house. The abilities he had were compatible and should be a good addition to his disposition. When Jin opened his eyes, he was in front of a big house. He was amazed by everything. There was amazing scenery, and the temperature was also warm even though it was winter earlier, and the house they gave them looked more like a mansion than a house. When he was about to enter the house, he saw his reflection, and it was different than the other world. He knew he should get used to this world's appearances and attire, but they should have told him if they were going to change him too. When he entered the house, he started looking around and everything was spacious. He looked in the kitchen and he had a big food storage that would never go out of stock even if he used it often. There was husked rice, Chinese cabbage, potatoes, tea leaves, miso, soy sauce, and all kinds of beef, pork, mutton, chicken. It was like he was in a dream. He even had fish swimming. He wondered if that water was connected to Japan because he always ate the same thing on that island. He couldn't help but feel hungry when he saw those ingredients. Firstly, he wanted to take a bath and then eat. The bath was so relaxing because it had been a while since he had a proper bath. That reminded him of something. He wondered how he could polish rice. He decided to see if he could use the skill he received. When he got dressed, he used his appraisal skills first. He learned that he needed to open the water gate so the water turbine underground would be able to move. It was amazing that he could understand how to use it. When he prepared the dinner, he put a bowl of it in Rich's place. Rich bestowed himself to him. It was the only power and protection he could give. From now on, he decided to improve the power he received. He patted him and told him that when he was better, he would give him meat to eat. He continued preparing his dinner. He was making sirloin steak and dried cabbage, which was a weird combination, but he wanted to eat. But he could smell a violent odor of fish and crabs in here. The dinner was ready, and after he prayed, he started to eat. The food was delicious. It was already amazing with salt and pepper, flooded with gravy and eaten with freshly cooked rice. The cabbage was also soft yet crunchy. He was glad that he survived. When he lay down on his bed, he thought about how he didn't have to worry about the fire going out anymore, nor did he need to be frightened of beasts coming. He was going to live in this unknown world. But as he was so comfortable, he had a hard time falling asleep. In the next scene, it had been for weeks since he was living by himself in his home, and he did nothing but eat, and time passed with just him idling around. He also slept a lot. Thanks to the healing, his body feels healthy, but he couldn't even get up and about. It was likely an effect caused by the rigorous life he had on the island. However, his abilities from the gods were full of amazing things. Through appraisal, he could make basic dishes based on only the main ingredients. The skills were designed to be convenient in that he could make any recipe he knew with any ingredients. But his knowledge of food was limited, so he wanted to do various cuisines that could be found in this world. As he was trying to decide what to eat today, decided on making ramen, but even though there were dried bonito flakes, it was raw and he wanted to dry it. Though in the first place there was no wheat to mill. He ended up cooking fish, rice, and a good soup. Since he used wheat a lot, he wanted to grate it quickly into flour, but he couldn't even store it since there were no containers or sacks. He received money and a map from the gods, so he wondered if he should go shopping. He looked at the map and tried to decide where to go. He remembered the recommended place and used his transition ability to take a look at the place. Not even a minute later, he was in front of the frontier city, Kanum. Kanum was close to the forest where monsters dwell, and naturally, adventurers tend to gather in places where monsters constantly appear. Seemed like this was a perfect place to earn gold and become stronger by defeating monsters. His status right now was an independent knight, but registering to the Adventurers Guild should make his visits to this city easier. When he entered the city, he felt like he was standing out. He wondered if it was because of the brand new clothes or the appearance he got from the gods. He decided to buy a hoodie first. He felt more comfortable after wearing the hoodie. The money in this world that he got from the gods should be almost the same amount as how much his big sister got. As he was walking, he noticed a potion bottle which amazed him. He could probably make one by using appraisal to know the materials needed for it. He then saw a food stand and wanted to try this world's food, but the bacteria shown by appraisal seemed dangerous, so he stopped. When he saw a fine grape trellis, he remembered that he needed some farming tools too. He wanted to buy a harrow, and then asked the lady if he could get a grape trellis outside. The lady didn't mind him taking some with him. He then asked if they had any weapons. The lady said she knew a good store if he was looking for weaponry. She asked if he was a new adventurer and recommended picking the leather armor. Jin thanked the lady and left to see the weapons store. He was amazed at what he was seeing and felt like he was in a game. He touched a sword and wondered if it could be swung easily. Appraisal helped him see various items, but he didn't know which was good, so he chose a random one. He wondered if that weapon belt for the sword and knife were enough. Afterward, he bought armor, which was a little expensive to have a fair amount of protection, and some leather items. He went to an inn because it was pretty late at night. After all, transition cannot be used in the city. He didn't have any worries as he was in the inn anyway. He decided to go back home to drop off the things he bought and then be back again tomorrow to visit the guild. The next day arrived and he went to the guild to register. The receptionist girl asked if he was going to pay the registration fee or do a commission once without a reward, and he decided to pay the fee. She told him to wait for a moment while his adventurer's tag was being made. While he was waiting, he looked at some records in the demon forest. The monsters in that forest were possessed by the animal's evil spirits, and this gives information on the easiest places to go out from the forest's topography. A man came and asked him if he was the one who requested an escort to study adventurer's basics. He confirmed him and stated that he also wanted to ask for some advice regarding his abilities because he didn't know how strong he was. He was unsure about one person being his escort. The man introduced himself and his name was Dean. His rank was 2-starred silver and he needed to guide 5 of his juniors. While Jin was amazed by his rank, he introduced himself, but as he was too focused on him, he accidentally said his name was Jean. A girl came and told Dean to not choose randomly. Dean told her to shut up and reminded her that he was done being another noble's companion. Jin wondered if they gave favorable treatment to nobles' requests there. He felt obligated to state that he wouldn't like to be involved in something troublesome, but Dean said it was his fault and decided to settle it right away. He told the girl that tomorrow Chris would be back, and that guy would gladly take on that request. But the girl said that if the request were concentrated on Chris, then the nobles would only have him secured as their point of contact. She then glanced at Jin. Dean told her that he would never be their contact and they shouldn't rely too much on one adventurer. They should engage with the guild. She seemed like she wanted that to happen too, but they only had 2 people with silver rank there. She asked if he could at least cooperate a little. Jin was confused because she kept looking at him as if she wanted him to intervene and he just wanted to go home now. A woman came and told her to stop because she had been relying too much on his brother. The woman's name was Kana. Dean thanked Kana, but she said that it was his fault for spoiling her. He may refuse to educate his juniors, but he would have to choose from the list of candidates that the guild had brought up. Kana then apologized to Jin for showing him something improper. He was thinking that he was extremely familiar with what was happening. Dean and the girl, Emil, were siblings. When heard about them being siblings, he felt a natural response of rejection because it reminded him of his older sister. Jin stated that he was withdrawing his request now. Emil seemed pretty happy with that and she thanked him. She told him to call out a party that looked promising, but he corrected her that this wasn't what he meant. He said that he didn't need any escorts and he would like to withdraw his request for that. Kana apologized for the inconvenience they had caused and informed him that the charge for his request would be duly returned. He said that it was okay and instead he wanted to take the adventurer's manual with him. He went out after getting the manual and took a deep breath. Every sister for him was a landmine even if they were older or younger. He would not endure being in that kind of connection again in this world. Suddenly Mishto appeared and asked if he was not going to use separation. Jin was shocked to see her, but she pushed him because he was the only one who could see her right now. Talking to her through his consciousness was fine and she said that he should do the same when another spirit or guardian comes. He asked if she could hear what he was thinking and she confirmed with him. She added that he was only consciously talking to her. She joked that thinking about something naughty was fine too. Jin was unbothered by her teasing and stated that using separation seemed like it would take effect without stopping. He didn't hesitate to use it to sever his connections with his older sister though. She informed him that he could use it whenever he wished, and they also got stronger that way. However, expanding the target of separation too much would weaken its effectiveness. Jin was puzzled, so she explained that if he used separation in one target, the people around that person would stop talking about Jin, and since he was trying to affect many people, the effectiveness would be lessened. She just told him to not forget that information she gave him and to use it however he liked. Jin thanked her, and after smiling cutely, she disappeared. He wondered if she took interest in him because he didn't use it even though he had that ability, or if it was because of giving advice. He decided to focus on his plans and go out to see the demon forest. According to the manual, a rabbit monster would appear right before the entrance of the forest. The record in the library stated the importance of the horns on monsters. The weak monsters were often called hornless, due to their horns being tiny. With what he had equipped now, he believed that he could likely go against some without dying. He didn't have any escorts anyway, so he decided to try using his sword. He could put in anything except creatures in his storage skill, so he hid the all-kill blade in it too. He saw a rabbit, but it wasn't a monster, it was just an ordinary one. But behind him, a monster rabbit was coming at him. He dodged its move, and realized that it was a hornless rabbit. Fortunately, he managed to cut the rabbit with one swing. He wondered what would happen if he used the sword he brought from the shop, and when he tried it, he still defeated it in a single swing. He used his appraisal ability to look around. The grass was beautiful, and he also saw raspberries and gooseberry gummies. Unlike the mountain on that island, this forest seemed fun and was abundant. He saw a mushroom, and it was the same as the one he saw on the island. When he used his appraisal skills, he realized that he could eat it. Suddenly, he flinched and felt a monster's presence. It wasn't a rabbit for sure. When he looked behind, he encountered a large horned bear. In the next scene, Jin looked down upon the dead bear, surprised by how easy it was to defeat. Mishito suddenly appeared and asked if he wasn't going to use magic. He stopped with a jolt. He asked her not to suddenly appear like that. He realized that he had forgotten about magic, and he thought at this level there was no need to use it. However, he wanted to try it out, and he started to look for a monster. Mishita said there was no need to walk around to look for one and told him to try using search magic. Jin said he was given so many abilities that he hadn't paid much attention to. He tried the exploration magic and found one. He thought if he used it right at the start, it would have been easier. Mishita wanted to help Jin more, so she told him to imagine what kind of magic he wanted to use, and drew out the attributes he needed. He asked what she meant by saying attributes. She said all of those attributes, such as Van's fire, Rudel's earth, and stillness, were attributes that Jin possesses. When the rabbit monster started to dash to him, Jin first tried to imagine and then attacked him with a wind slash. Jin saw it on the ground dead, and realized thanks to Mishita the magic appeared. Mishita told him once he got to know them, the other spirits would lend him their power. People who could use magic were rare, so she told him to use it with care. Then she disappeared. Jin decided to go sell the monsters off to the guild. Once those were stowed, they would be transported closer to the gate. He started to think of a way to carry the bear to the guild. He had put its head in a sack and was carrying it on his back. He saw a man and asked if he could assess it for trade. He was shocked and asked if he had come there in that state. Jin said yes, and then the man told him it didn't suit his face, and it was amazing yet rough-looking. Jin said he just thought it would have been better than walking around with the sharply cut section exposed. There were a lot of dismembered monsters hanging around. The man told him to put it down. Jin wondered if it was because of mental fortitude that he was able to drain the blood from a rabbit and cut a bear in half. When he was on the island, he was at his limit handling fish. It would have been an unbearable sight in his previous world, but now he had mental fortitude. When the man looked at the bear, he said it was great that all of its pelts could be used. He told Jin he was not only strong but also had skills. He said it would fetch a higher price in the Adventurers Guild, so asked him if he was okay to sell it in a trade guild. He said he was told the same at the counter, but it was fine. Jin thought about Dean and Emil, and realized those siblings were in the Adventurers Guild, so he didn't want to go anywhere near them. The man asked him to give him a quarter of an hour. He said he got it and asked if there was anywhere to learn how to make potions. The man said for the potions, the headquarters next door had recipes. First he said the Doctors Guild, but then he realized magic potions were more likely to be with the alchemists. He said some things were only handled by individual guilds or persons, but most of the knowledge they wanted to spread was generally entrusted to trade guilds. Jin seemed surprised that there was such a convenient system. Jin told the man he was going next door for a while and asked him to do the appraisal with the intent of selling everything. When Jin got the potion recipes, he started to look over it. There were all kinds of recipes from imperial court dishes to baking a brick. The potion itself seemed easy enough to make. He thought because of divine powers, he seemed to have physical abilities better than the average person. He thought he could heal his injuries with recovery magic and healing, but he wanted to make it look like he was using potions to heal himself. On the way back, he decided to get some tools. The man Jin left the bear with appeared and told him there was a magic stone and asked if he wanted to check it out. He thought a magic stone was in the guidebook. A magic stone was seldom obtained from corpses of monsters. The reminder of the spirit that remained in the heart turned into a gem, and it was expensive. It was really small. Jin said he thought it would have been the size of a ping pong ball. The man said it was a red spinel. The redder spinel, the more expensive it was. The man asked if it was also for trade and said with its size and color, it could be used by someone strong in fire magic. Jin said he didn't mind trading for it. Even if he didn't have it, he could use magic anyway. When Jin left there, he decided to walk around and eat before night fell. When he saw the food, he seemed pleased. There was a lot of bread offered there, sauerkraut and sausage or ham and cheese sandwiches. He stared at the counter and it seemed like a well-grilled one should have been fine. He bought one sausage and enjoyed it. Then he saw, brought, and ate some dried fruits which he found sour. He thought he could boil it with sugar and use it to make candy, or maybe he could also use it in meat dishes. Then he saw a brown sugar seller. He thought they broke it off in clumps and then sold it. The weighing scales were nice and retro and it smelt like sake, which was a Japanese beer. He wondered if drinking alcohol would be alright or not, and wondered what the legal drinking age was there. As Jin was walking around, he saw a large group of people and wondered what they were doing. He saw a whole roast pig which was sandwiched in bread. It looked tasty, so he ate that too. The pork was fragrant on the outside and juicy on the inside, though the bread was disappointing. A whole roast was sectioned per part in the pantry. He thought he would get a pig later. Finally, he arrived at home. Jin saw Rish in his bed and told him he was home. He wanted to eat a lot more food, but maybe it was because of his stay on that island that made his stomach smaller. Today, he was able to hunt monsters and make money. He used up a bear's worth of potion tools and tried to heal Rish. He thought Rish was not sick or injured. His existence itself was getting fainter. He heard that healing did not work, but he was still using it on him. He hoped he would get better soon. Then he put his dog to sleep. Before eating the meal, Jin prayed and then thought about the cloth in Kanem, which had such poor quality that he had ended up not buying any, and since he had been given language, he wanted to read books from this world. He decided to go to the royal capital today. When he arrived at the capital, he found it huge. It was his first time in the capital, so Jin asked a man if there was a guide map he could use or a person who could guide him. He handed him a simple guide map and told him if he wanted to shop, the trade guild could show him around. He said they might have taken him for a ride and had him buy all sorts of stuff. Then said if he went straight ahead, he would see kids hanging out in the square. He told him to pay any of them a fee and they would guide him around. But it could have been hit or miss. He understood, gave him his payment, and told him to keep the exchange. When he was about to leave, the man said the well in the square, there should have been a kid named Leon with ash blue hair. If he was there, he told Jin to ask him. Jin came to the royal capital of the neighboring country in case something went wrong, but it was surprisingly small. The buildings were all connected, so he arrived at the square. Beside the well in the square, there should have been a kid named Leon with ash blue hair. He saw a kid and wondered if he was him. He asked if his name was Leon. The kid glared and approved that he was Leon. Jin thought his face was scary, but still asked if he could guide him around. Jin was explaining himself to Leon. Jin said the reason he inquired was because he heard from the guard that he did guided tours around the city. Jin was afraid and got suspicious that something was off. He thought of the possibility of being tricked by the guard. Jin told Leon he might have mistaken him. He said no, and it was also a sort of destiny. Leon said he was free, so he would guide him around. Unlike how he looked, Jin thought he was quite friendly. Jin asked Leon if there was a must-see place. Leon said, speaking of a must-see place there, that was the view from the top of the stronghold where civilians could not enter it. Jin thought about how to retort with what he said. He was a civilian, but he had seen it, and he suggested a place he could not enter. Instead of those sentences, he just asked if he had any recommendations for clothing or a dining hall. Leon wanted to eat quickly, and he said he had an acquaintance who ran a clothing shop that was famous in its way in the capital. Jin wondered why he was making such a scary face. On their way, Jin asked Lean why the walls of the houses were stuck close to each other. He said besides the fact that the land within the city walls was limited, the width of houses along a road was taxed. Sharing a wall to split the tax half and half was the norm. Jin asked what else was taxed. He said the city tax, transit tax, and also glass tax. He couldn't hide his shock that glass was taxed. Leon said glass windows were luxury items. In the private houses there, Jin would hardly ever see them. Come to think of it, Jin realized he didn't see a lot of glass windows even in Kanem. Jin saw a large building in the square and asked what it was. Leon said he was talking about the Bough of Spirits. Leon said akin to how spirits liked it, plants were grown in the inner courtyard. It was a beautiful place with clean water running at all times. Jin realized they had faith in the spirits there. Leon suddenly stopped and apologized, telling him that he should have been showing him places like that. Jin said it was okay and that he would pass by on his way home, but thought he was just not suited for guided tours. An old man appeared, and Jin wondered if he was a butler. He had a lot of questions, but he called Leon young miss. Leon turned to Jin and said his name Note, who was from his childhood. Note was the Alderhide family's butler. That wasn't what Jin was most concerned about. Then Leon asked Note why he was there. He said someone was after him and told him to get out of the city quickly. He said all arrangements had been made. Jin saw another person named Lilith. The note told Leon to, for now, get in the wagon. However, Leon said there was no reason for him to run away. The note told young Miss that was a strategic retreat. When Leon resisted to stay, Note punched him on the stomach and said they didn't have time to dawdle. Then he told Miss Lilith that young Miss was hurt. Lilith got angry and asked him why he didn't use a potion. Note said the young Miss had left the Aldehyde family, she could spend none of the family fortunes. Jin watched everything in shock and wondered what was happening. Lilith told him they needed to move before there was an uproar. Jin told Lilith he didn't understand, but if they were wounded, he gave the potion and said if she was fine with it, use it. He said it was a potion he made, and though it was a trial product, he checked it with appraisal, so it should have been fine. Lilith asked who he was. Meanwhile, Note told her they were on their way to Tem's shop. Lilith took Jin's hand and said she would take him there. Note grabbed Leon, who he called young Miss, and made him drink the potion Jin gave. Jin asked if it worked and said he was a little uneasy about using it on another person without first trying it himself. Lilith thanked Jin, and Note told him that he had their gratitude. Jin started to think he didn't care about the clothing shop anymore. He just wished they would have let him get off. Leon woke up and asked where he was. Note told him that they were inside a wagon. Leon told Lilith he was pretty sure that he was banished from the family, but he didn't remember doing anything that would have made him a fugitive. Lilith said he had always been honorable, but his younger brother was uneasy because he was still alive. She said he didn't only unjustly banish him, he made up another charge against him. Jin was trying to understand what was going on. He wanted to avoid troublesome things. Rather, he wondered why someone who was injured was in a family feud, and they told him she was a young Miss. When they got out of the carriage, they saw a man named Thame. He welcomed Leon as the master of Aldehyde. Leon said it had been a long time, apologized, and said he didn't have a lot of time. Leon wanted him to assist Jin with clothes. Then Leon turned to Jin and apologized for the unfinished tour. Jin thought this wasn't a time to apologize. Jin asked Leon if it was better to leave soon, and Leon told Thame that he would leave it to him. Lilith apologized to Jin for the late introduction and said her name was Lilith from House Deviland. She gave her a ring and said if he encountered any problem, come and look for her. However, she was sure it was going to be bothersome around her too, so he probably would want to stay away for a while. Jin said he would take it for now, then asked who the young Miss was. She said Leora, then realized he was calling her Leon, was a girl. He was shocked that she was a girl, and her real name was Leora Aldehyde. Lilith told Jin that Leora was flat-chested, looked tough, and was stronger than most men by a long shot, which was why a lot of folks thought she was a man and called her Leon. She said, "Then pardon me," and left. Thame apologized to Jin for involving him in this affair and said they would prepare remuneration for the clothing, so they only asked him to keep it quiet. Jin said he didn't have anyone to tell anyway. That aside, that clothing shop didn't have any clothes, but he was a bespoke tailor shop. Meanwhile, a few girls appeared and wanted him to let them take his measurements. They asked about the clothes and buttons. Jin felt tired and found a place. He thought it should have been okay there to do exploration magic. It was quite handy SNCs he could look for not-so-popular places. He said he was able to buy sheets and bed covers from the fabric shop beside the clothing store. He decided to go to the next store, which was a bookstore, but he thought he would eat first. He ate his meal and went back to his home. Reach was lying down, and Jin caressed his head. Then he decided to read the books he bought. He wondered if he could make a lamp, and he didn't have alcohol for fuel, but he had rapeseed oil. He thought if it was reflected on cleanly polished metal, he could make a glass. Then he recalled what Mishto said. He was going to imagine what kind of magic he wanted to use, then he was going to draw out the attributes he needed. Jin raised his index finger and said light, which appeared right on his finger. He thought it was convenient. Today was a sudden flurry of activity, but he got a lot out of it. Jin thought that scary-faced young man wasn't a man. It seemed like she had her priorities a little skewed, but she was a good, upstanding person. He didn't know what happened to her after that, but he prayed for her safety. Jin was calling Rish and telling him that they were heading back now. It had been a few months since Rish woke up. At first, he found it hard to even walk, but now he had recovered considerably, and even his fur looked better. In these few months, Jin inquired from a farmer and learned about raising livestock and making cheese. He moved to and from the country inside the forest and helped out with carpentry. He was concerned about the smell of the medicinal herbs, so he planned to build more dispensary sheds. Before winter came, he wanted to make it comfortable enough to stay indoors. He thought he should have gotten on with gathering raw materials for the building expansion. He didn't buy a cork oak seedling and wondered if he should have planted it. Then he decided to use the growth powder on it. It suddenly became way bigger. He thought he had used it on the grape trellis too, which had gotten amazing. He wondered if it would be a great raw material. Jin thought he should have gone shopping in Canaan. He wanted to deliver the game he had left in storage. Getting a room every time he delivered goods was troublesome for him. He had been of two minds about it, but he wondered if he should have rented a house in Kanam. Lately, Pinkhead, the younger sister of those siblings named Amil, was following Jin. He seemed to have stood out since he had unloaded a bear and potions wholesale on the trade guild. Being thought of as strange when he was seen purchasing home goods was another. Since it was established that he was staying in an inn, he was sure enough to rent a house. He saw a real estate agent and they moved around several properties together. When they came to one of the properties, the man told him because it was a new building, it was cheap and it was also on the good side of public safety. Jin thought in this world it seemed that the old houses were better. It was said that the previous homeowners would have made improvements so that it would be more comfortable to live in. He looked at the walls and saw there were even gaps in the walls which would have been unthinkable in Japan. He thought he had a house and also had transition magic, so before touching it up he should have helped out there and there to obtain knowledge. Jin told the man he decided on this house and requested him to take care of it. After renting the house, he assessed in carpentry and cheesemaking and assisted in plasterwork. When he was on his way, he ignored that Emil was still following him. Suddenly, Emil stopped Jin and asked if he was possibly going to the demon forest. She said the forest was dangerous when it was colder. He said he had already taken it into account. Emil asked him not to push himself as his life was more important than money. Jin said he was not pushing himself, so asked her not to worry about him. When she was after him, she tripped and fell on the floor with a sad expression. He wondered why she wasn't discouraged. Then he continued to go on his way. On the way, Jin saw Emil's older brother Dean. Dean stopped Jin and said he knew that coming from him was a bit much, but wondered if could have also shown up in the Adventurers Guild. The higher-ups were scolding Miss Kana, he said. Jin asked why was Miss Kana. Jin said because they said an excellent adventurer was taken by the trade guild. Jin said that the cause was Dean and that sister of his. Dean said he knew it was his fault and he was sorry. Jin thought the cause was certainly Pink Bro, but the creepy words and deeds after that were on Pinkhead. Jin said it was fine with him to drop by the Adventurers Guild, but he had one condition. He didn't want to let his sister come near him. He said when she saw him in the town, he didn't want her to follow her, go around him, get in his sight, or talk to him. He got that, but asked if her sister was cute. Jin thought his sister's filter was amazing and said she felt creepy to him and she wasn't his type. Dean asked if Emil wasn't his type, then what kind of person was his type? Jin said if he were to choose, he would have said someone who was the opposite of his sister. One with a no-makeup look and didn't scream girly while he was kinda imagining Leora. Dean looked at him suspiciously, and Jin said he wasn't describing someone who looked male, so he took back what he said. As Jin thought, he wanted someone who looked a bit feminine. As an apology, Dean wanted to show Jin a place where a rare plant grew. He asked if he wanted to go there. Jin was interested, and he had plans to gather medicinal herbs today, so it should have been okay to go with him. He thought if only he weren't such a sister lover, he would have been normal. When they arrived, Jin found a herb named Kinka, which was a ridiculous plant that was used to add fragrance to the alcohol that rich people drink. Jin thought it was a bit grassy smelling or earthly smelling and wondered if it would taste good. Dean said he didn't know, but he could get away with it with rich folks. Dean suggested Jin catch an adequate rabbit and make lunch out of it. Since Jin could not use transition or storage magic, he had to accept it. After Dean caught and cooked the rabbit on fire, Jin told him there were no futile moves when he fought. Jin found it educational. Dean found it embarrassing because he was strong enough to hunt bears in succession. Jin said he only relied on brute strength. Again, Dean looked at him suspiciously. Jin knew he had no muscles or height. When they were eating, Dean suddenly flinched as he heard a rustle. Then Leora appeared. She apologized and asked if she surprised him. Jin asked why she was in a place like this. Leora said she was there to hunt a bear and draw water. It wasn't what Jin wanted to ask, but he could not say anything about her fugitive status with Dean there. He wondered if it would be bad to call her by name. Dean asked if they knew each other. Jin said yes. She said her name was Ash and was pleased to meet him. He said his name was Dean and that was how they met. Jin thought he was right not to call her by name. Leora turned to Jin and told him she would surely pay him back for the potion. He said she didn't have to, and he also made him show him around when she was wounded. Dean grinned at her, and for now, he wanted her to eat the meat. She said no, but eventually ate it. They all sat down around the fire. Dean told Leora if she was able to hunt bears, then she should have had enough to pay for the potion by now. She said the inn fees were a little steep. A gold coin a day was quite a lot. Dean asked her what kind of inn she was staying in. She said one with just a bed and table. Dean said she was being ripped off and asked why she didn't realize that. Leora said it was introduced to her by a pink-haired receptionist at the guild. Jin wondered if it wasn't Emil. Then Dean said Emil was working hard and she didn't have any bad intentions. He told them it was the inn's fault. Jin said it was extremely difficult to listen. Jin said only his relationship with his sister was creepy. He asked why the logic didn't get through to him when it came to her sister. Dean said after all she was doing her best, so it wouldn't have done for the people around her not to help her. He repeated that she was pretty cute. Leora understood that she was Dean's younger sister. Then Leora got angry and Dean told her that she was making a scary face. She said she didn't know if he would believe her, but there was a spirit beside your sister. She said a mark received from the influence of that spirit was floating above Dean's head. Dean said he could not see anything. Jin said generally it was only strong spirits, but to see a mark was weird. Dean was shaking and Jin wanted him not to look at him with a serious face. Jin said it looked like an artificial flower. Jin tried to uproot the flower from his head and he wobbled. Leora said it was a form of mental domination. Because the effect was suddenly cut off, he just lost consciousness. Leora asked Jin, aside from seeing it, if he could also touch it. He said he could do it when he put his mind to it. Usually he could only see Rish, his dog, so that it didn't affect his daily life. It seemed that the spirits who were called gods could be seen if they decided to show themselves. She said he was the first she had met aside from her father. Jin asked if her bloodline was able to see them. She said yes, but in the family it was only her father and her who could see them now, but they could not touch them. She told him to be cautious since that ability would be coveted. He said he would take care. Dean whined and Jin asked for the time being if they should have started with silencing that one. He thought if they left him there, then a bear might have eaten him, but then he wanted to leave him there as a joke. He thought he didn't say anything, so he didn't think Dean found out. Jin asked Leora, by calling Ash as she introduced herself like that, if she was okay with her ability to see being found out. She said she was saved by him and asked if Dean was his friend. He said no, and it was only the second time he had met him properly. She started to think aloud and said if they left him there, then a bear could eat him. Jin realized their train of thought was the same. She said that was an error in her judgment. She would just resign herself to this situation. Leora, by another name Ash, seemed like a person who would get the short end of the stick. As they were on that subject, Leora asked Jin if he could see the spirit that followed her. He tried to see it and a bird was continuously pecking her. He was shocked that she was being extremely pecked. Seeing the bird pecking his head like that, Jin wondered if it hurt him, to which he responded that there was an unbearable dull pain. Jin then noticed that there was a band of light around its neck that looked like a collar. He used appraisal, and apparently its name was Ru, and it was a captured spirit with the objective to make Aldehyde Ru Leora more manly. She explained that it was a spirit that his father attached to her when she was 7. He now understood why it was dull because it had been so long. He asked what it was for, and she responded that it was so she would become an outstanding successor. Jin was confused because she had a younger brother. She heard that it was because her father was drunk and woke up next to a woman, and then it was sent over to them after some time. Luckily, their country didn't differentiate between male or female successors as long as they were firstborn. However, their family had served in the military for generations. Her father attached a spirit to her, so when she trained, there wouldn't be any difference between genders. Although he was saying it in such a good light, Jin wondered if it wasn't strange to be more manly. But she didn't seem to understand what he meant. He said that it was better to release that spirit because it was desperately pecking him. She explained that it was originally meant to be released 2 years ago, but his father collapsed. She asked if he could release that spirit. Jin asked if they should try it when they get back to town. She accepted his suggestion and mentioned that she wanted to show her gratitude, whatever the outcome was. Jin knew she didn't have any money, so he asked about her lodging and she said that she was going to hunt bears. A while later, Dean woke up and started to apologize to his sister because he spoiled her too much. Ash responded that he was under the influence of an evil spirit and that was no different from being left astray. In the guild, she saw that only men had the mark. There was also a person with a single petal. Perhaps because he was with Emil the longest, he had more petals and was under a stronger influence. Jin seemed uncomfortable because a scene of men with flowers blooming on their heads was very disagreeable. Dean apologized to Jin too and continued that if people suddenly collapsed like he did, the guild would be in chaos. So he decided to discuss it with Kana, and then take Emil to the Bower of Spirits. Jin remembered that Ash was supposed to take him there when they met. Since he didn't know a lot about it, he decided to just keep mum. Listening to their conversation, it seemed that each city had its Bower of Spirits, though they differed in design. It was a place to approach spirits, but it was also where they could be cast out. Dean informed them that he needed to go back to town now to lay the groundwork. He told them to use a conveyor if they were going to hunt the bears. Jin didn't know about the conveyor, so Ash explained that it was a person who transports the game that an adventurer catches. He had already requested one for today, so he gave one to Jin. Dean then told him that the fact that they could see and touch, he would never snitch on them, so they didn't need to worry. As Jin knew, he knew that he could touch the mark of the spirit. After he left, Jin and Ash went back to back and sliced monsters together. She praised the way his moves were fast and efficient. Jin felt good hearing that, but he thought he should be saying that to her. Ash was serene and her clean and methodical use of the sword was powerful. He only mimicked that with martial arts and physical ability. There was a problem when they called people to carry the monsters. They couldn't carry all of them because the carriage was cracking. They had to carry the rest of the wolves themselves. They weren't able to hunt any bears, but Ash said that amount of wolves should be enough even though they had a lower price than the bears. She apologized for troubling him. Jin asked where she wanted to try it, and she said that she might lose consciousness longer than Dean, so she suggested the inn. Jin asked what would happen if she was unconscious for days and where her butler was. Ash explained that he went off on his own and they were supposed to rendezvous in Canaan, but she didn't know when he would arrive. Jin invited her to his house if it was alright with her, and she accepted it. When they arrived, he showed her the place she could sit. As she was looking around, she said that he had good taste, which made him glad that he repaired his rental house in Canaan. He then noticed that he smelled like the wild since he carried those wolves, so suggested a hot bath. He told her to wait there while he prepared the bath. A lot of bathhouses had steam baths. There were also places where they had bathtubs, but when he did the appraisal, he was apprehensive about the sanitary conditions, so they were out. He decided to use the washtub for laundry. After preparing everything, he told Ash that the toilet was behind the last door and he would be upstairs. He decided to use this time in transition to change his clothes and also prepare a guest bed on the second floor. He wanted a bathtub in this house too. After everyone cleaned up, Jin prepared some tea and snacks and asked if they should begin. She seemed ready, so he sat in front of her and poked the bird. It didn't seem to stop pecking on its own. He thought the solution could be removing that collar on its neck, but when he did that, Ash passed out and collapsed on him. Her chest was too flat for Jin, so he didn't feel the least bit excited. He put her to bed and started talking with the bird. He asked if it can't take revenge on this person for being constrained. He was actually glad it went easier than expected. He didn't know when she would wake up, so he decided to let her stay there in the meantime. In the meantime, he decided to furnish the third floor too, so it doesn't look out of place. The night came and he finished all his work, but Ash was still sleeping. He then started patting Reach and apologized for not taking care of him lately. It didn't look like Ash would wake up anytime soon. Suddenly, Mishto, Rudil, and Pal appeared in his house. He was happy to see them, but wondered why they were there. Rudil apologized for the suddenness and stated that they had a request to make of him. Pal continued and asked if he could give names to the spirits who fled here. Mishto said his sister was using a large amount of magic, but the way she used it was so reckless. She can't see spirits, so it might be unavoidable, but she had an obsessive yet fickle nature, and they were suspecting that she would do something rash within a year. A lot of the little spirits have been used up and disappeared. She heard that Namina had already warned her, but since that one tends to get carried away easily and could absorb power, it was ineffective. Namina was the ball of light that caused him to come to this world. So since it can absorb power, it wasn't proactively stopping her. Mishto said that if Namina regained power and his sister could see spirits, she was worried she would dominate every one of them thoroughly. They knew that he didn't want to involve himself in that situation, but the spirits were so noisy that Rudale couldn't stand it. The actions or directions of the hero shouldn't be limited too much, but if this situation continues, it would have an impact on many places. Jin couldn't understand it too well, but he wondered about the impact. Mishto explained that he should see the spirits here for himself. She told him to look outside the window. He took a deep breath and used his ability to see the spirits. There was so much that they were squeezing the window he was looking at. He couldn't believe he was living in the middle of all these. Mishta said that since his sister's dominance affected them even just by being near her, they came and gathered to where Jin had liberation. Jin asked what he should do, and Pal explained that it would be good to give them names as they wouldn't be subject to anyone else's domination, and could scatter freely. That all depended on whether the magic of liberation was stronger than the connection between the person and the spirit. If he created a bond beforehand, the spirits would probably choose him. He seemed pretty uneasy about naming this amount of spirits. Pal said that he could name them anything, and if they don't like it, he could just change it. In that case, any name without thought was alright. If the spirit liked another person, they could receive a new name at that time anyway. There seemed to be a contradiction somewhere, as Jin thought. For spirits, it would be the order of the person they liked, him, then his sister. Rudel told him that those spirits which he had given a name would lend him their power if they wanted, so he could just give them numerical names. When he accepted it, Misto suggested going outside because they made it so that Jin's house could not be entered without permission. She makes the spirits get in a line. He started naming them by their colors and naming them. 2 hours passed and he still hadn't done it yet, so he decided to take a break. He then remembered that he should check on Ash's condition. He used his transition ability to escape his house, but it didn't work because Mishto was there asking who was Ash. He showed her Ash and explained that he freed her from this spirit. He was keeping her safe because she collapsed. When he looked at Mishto, he saw her concerned face. She said that it was a maiden's crisis. When she said that, Jin wondered if Mishto clearly saw her as female. He told her that he didn't have any intention of laying his hands on her. She said that she didn't mean it like that and started doing something. After a few seconds, she said that it would be fine with that. She said that there was no need for her to go to the toilet until she woke up. He thanked her because he didn't think of that. She then asked what the bird's name was. He said that when he checked with appraisal, it said Rue. Seemed like its contract binding had been terminated so a new one could be made. She said that the bird wanted him to name it. The breast feathers were soft and fluffy, so he thought about naming it Fluffly, but he gave up on that idea immediately. He was looking at the bird to find something, then suggested the name Azu, and it looked like it liked that name. It was blue in Italian. He took it from Missouri, but if he liked it, then it was fine. He asked Azu if he would mind watching over Ash. Both of them were constrained under a contract, but they were together. Ash might feel sad if the little bird disappeared. Now that they handled that, it was time to go back and continue with the naming. When they went back, Kadal and Ish were there too. He continued naming them, and when they were all done, they told him that they would leave it to him if they increased again once or twice a month. Jin was relieved, but then a huge light appeared. Redial told him to wait and informed him that it was fine to open his eyes now. He added some darkness to weaken the light. Ish explained to him that it was the effect of them lending him their powers. Until recently, Jin remembered that just saying light was enough, and Mishto did say before that to use magic. He must imagine it. It was time for dinner, so he looked at his guest and asked if they would like to eat. They started telling him the things they eat, which sounded pretty unbalanced to him. He prepared a good dinner and they all started eating. He looked at everyone and couldn't believe how surreal this scene was, especially Ish, who was eating salt. It was just plain salt, so Jin had a hard time believing that he was okay. He wondered if the spirits could eat food. Mishto explained that human-like spirits could eat various things but could not taste them. Those that weren't humanoid varied depending on their attributes. The water of morning or evening dew, or the fire of a bonfire or a hearth, or even the scent of flowers. Reach came and Jin told him to wait while they were eating. Suddenly, Rudel asked what he was scheming. Jin was puzzled, so Mishto explained that they couldn't even get close to Reach before, but they did slightly distrust him. Jin was pretty surprised. Kadal explained that before Reach lost his powers, he was a powerful deity who shook the heavens and split the earth. He gratified his desires and scorned all counsel. All who stood in his way were bitten to death. Jin couldn't believe this cute little thing was an alpha dog. As they were confused, he explained that an alpha was the #1 leader, and dogs were supposed to follow the leader of the pack. If there is one who doesn't, they become stressed and ferocious. To put it in human logic, one needs to be a perfect leader, otherwise both parties will be unhappy. For example, one should not hug another above the shoulders, or humans should eat first. They must live by acting in accordance to human rules. But Reach was a spirit and a wolf. He said that wolves were the same and asked if spirits were different. Kadal said someone's appearance could reflect their personality, but that wasn't always the case. In his memories, Reach could speak and was highly intelligent. Jin couldn't say anything because intelligence and instinct were different, but for now, Reach was just a cute dog in his eyes. He said once he started speaking, he would think about it and thank them for their concern and the warning. After that, they all thanked him and left the spirits to him next time as well. Everyone except Rudel was gone. He took a look at Rish and called him a solitary wolf, and then left. Jin was confused once again, but if that was an act, that would be a surprise. He decided to take a bath and sleep. The next day, he came to the pottery town to order a bathtub and some tableware later. A man named Malcolm greeted him and stated that he looked like someone with an idea for new merchandise. Jin introduced himself and gave him an idea for a bathtub. Malcolm said he recently received an inquiry from a noble in the neighboring country about a bathtub, and this was a godsend. When they said they wanted a clawfoot bathtub, he just started making a prototype. Jin was sure that he was talking about his sister and her friends. Malcolm said that he had never made one of those before, but it should be worthwhile, so he wanted him to let him help develop it. Jin thought it should be fine since he would be making it. With separation, news of him shouldn't reach his sister, but he never thought he would get involved like that. When he went back to his house, Ash woke up and thanked him. Jin asked if she could move or hurt anywhere, and she responded that her back hurt a little bit. It was probably because she was sleeping the whole time. She was confused as to why it was evening and didn't realize how much time passed since she collapsed. Jin informed her that it was the third day and she apologized. Jin told her that he gave the bird another name while she was asleep. She asked what he named it and he told her. She smiled and said that it was a good name. If it accepted him, then that means the spirit liked him, so there was nothing to apologize for. The thing Jin was shocked about was that she had the most beautiful face and he almost couldn't recognize her. While they were talking about Azu, all he could think was that he looked like a beautiful girl, but rather a beautiful young man. Girls like Pinkhead wouldn't be able to leave her be. He warned her to not get tricked into someone's bed, but she responded that it would mean he tricked her because she was literally in the bed. He told her that he didn't trick her, so she should think of him as safe. Since her body was fasting, he decided to go make her some soup for now, and once she had eaten, she should rest some more. She asked if it was okay if she stayed there for the night, and he responded that he wasn't so heartless as to toss her out at night. He told her to hurry and get better so she could take back the rent money she was scammed out of. She also thought about paying rent to him for letting her stay there. The next day, they met with Note, and he seemed pretty happy that she was safe. While they were talking, Jin looked around and saw some spirits following them. but there didn't seem to be a man with an artificial flower on them. Dean came and told him that since he made him meet him when it was difficult, he wanted to treat him to a pint as an apology. He then met Note, and Note introduced himself as a butler until a few years ago, and now he was an adventurer. He said that he had a connection with Lord Ash as something of an uninvited attendant. Dean said that 2 or 3 people wouldn't make a difference. He said that his younger sister Amil went to the Bower of Spirits to have her spirit cast out. A lot of people in the guild collapsed, but now it was a bit more settled. It would be a sore spot for the guild, so he asked them not to spread it too much. Amil would start again from the bottom, and if she cannot fix her spoiled attitude, she cannot return to reception. A spirit's prank could happen to anyone, and if it wasn't intentional, one would be given a reprieve to start over. Even if it was only a prank on a spirit, there were instances when it could become a horrible tragedy. This time, it was only because Dean, who was a close relative, noticed and dealt with them. After that, it was handled leniently. Ash was warning him. If he says anything about them, it would jeopardize the magnanimous treatment and the understanding of the people around them. Ash looked like an airhead, but she was smart. They also asked Dean to handle the formalities when Ash's money was returned. Also, Dean said if he stayed with his sister, he would probably spoil her, so he was staying at a lodging house. It was a nice place, so he asked if they would want him to introduce them to the manager. Note said they had been looking into renting a house post-haste, but he asked if it was possible to request a 2-bedroom house for a short stay. While sipping his beer, Gene remembered that the legal drinking age was 15 years old, but there was still a guilty pleasure to that. Dean asked Gene if he would like to accompany a mid-level adventurer once. He wasn't strong enough to stand out, but he was someone who fulfilled requests for certain, and he could introduce himself. Gene accepted, and then they decided to meet up tomorrow at the same time. Dean added that both Gene and Ash were strange, so they better be careful not to fall for anything weird. Seeing Ash's reaction, Dean told her to unwrinkle that brow if he thought it was weird. Gene agreed about Ash's wrinkled brow, but he was still confused. Dean said they both had good looks and weird ones would surely approach them. In the next scene, Gene woke up and noticed that it was snowing outside. He prepared his breakfast and started eating in silence. He recalled the days when he was in the mountains in winter. When he finished his breakfast, he started to clean it up and prepare for Dean to introduce an adventurer to him. In Canham, Note and Ash were waiting for Gene. They wanted to ask about the potion fees from the other day. Gene said that he didn't give it to her, expecting compensation, but she was still insisting. He said that once she had found a place to live and her life was stable, he would come and ask for it. But even after she had found a house, he was sure she would have a lot to buy for it too. She understood him and apologized. Dean came with an adventurer named Letzi. Gene introduced himself and stated that he was looking forward to working with him. Letzi informed Gene that he wasn't great at speaking formally, so he wanted to speak normally. Gene was pretty surprised. Letzi suddenly started whispering to Dean. He told him that he couldn't stand that feminine look and asked him to do it, but Gene could hear them. Dean told him that he already screwed up once and that he can't do that again. Letzi was also wondering why both of them were good-looking. It was the god's fault, but he couldn't say anything. Gene called Letzi and he said, "Let's go with an attitude." Gene asked if he had a complex about good-looking guys, but Dean had no idea. With that, Gene's first request to have an adventurer accompany him finally happens. In the forest, Letzi explained that he hunts rabbits at this time of year since their fur and meat are in season. Large bears, when sold to the rich, sell for a lot, but small bears, on the other hand, don't. He would rather hunt rabbits since they were easier than the small bears, which needed a great deal of effort to catch. He usually looks at the bulletin board to check the price of the meat. If it was too cheap, he would just sell the fur and go home. Horned monsters were hard to sell because their meat was tough, but their fur was quite strong on its own, so the fur sold pretty well. But lately, the rewards for hunting bears have declined. Gene figured that this was probably Ash and his fault. Letzi showed him the grass and explained that he could figure out which direction his prey had gone by looking at how the grass was disturbed and split. If he looked closely and observed, he could find the traces of animals. Gene was impressed by how professional he was. Letzi continued to explain that most rabbits' hide lines move in unison, while their forelimbs move independently. Their hind limbs were also significantly larger than their forelimbs. He asked about the paw prints, and Letzi explained that those normally belong to a fox. They always walk in straight lines, leaving paw prints like those. With these kinds of paw prints, it was hard to tell whether it was a monster or not. Those belonged to horned rabbits. Gene asked how he knew that, and he said that there were some claw marks in the snow. It seemed to be chasing its prey, so it was likely a monster. Gene thought he could just use search and leave the rest to his sword. He wondered if he did many things in front of Dean. Letzi said if it was a regular rabbit or fox, he could hunt them with a short bow, but that was not possible with monsters. When one rabbit appeared, Letzi caught it easily, and told Gene that it was easier if it was a monster since it would come charging at him. He was once again amazed by Letzi. Letzi decided to show him how to hunt a fox next, and they continued their day with this. When they got back to the guild, The woman in there thanked Letzi for nicely skinning the rabbit furs. Jin noticed that Letza was a talkative person. They started drinking to recharge their energy, and Jin thanked Letza for what he taught him that day. Letza said that he was a weird guy and asked if it was okay to learn his method of hunting instead of Dean's, but then responded to his own question by saying that with his thin arm, his method would be better for him. Dean was buying his drinks today, so he told him to drink more. At night, when he went home, Jin was still thinking about his thin arm. Starting today, he decided to eat protein and train his muscles. The next day, he went to check if his bathtub was completed. The shop owner was glad that he was there. He showed him what he made, and Jin loved how it came out. He thanked him, and the man asked how he was going to carry it. He hadn't thought about that until now. He wanted to take it home using storage, but he can't use it in public. He asked if he wanted to rent a carriage for now, but he said that he already had something prepared. The owner told him to wait while he wrapped the bathtub. He and one of his workers helped Jin to carry it to somewhere that was not public, and when they left, he used his storage power. It was difficult to use storage for big objects. Jin then went home and started building a place to put the bathtub. After a while, he was done with the bathtub, and he seemed pretty satisfied with the result. Ash came and apologized for bothering him and explained that she was here for a gift since she was moving in. Jin was happy that she found a house and asked where she was going to live. Ash pointed at the building that was right in front of his house. Jin said it was a good neighborhood, so it was nice to have her here. Ash apologized suddenly, and when he asked the reason, she said that Note found the house, but she didn't remember telling him where he lived, yet he found one next to his. Jin thought it was just a coincidence, but she said that it was most likely her fault. When she was talking to him at that time, she was happy. John was confused because her face didn't show that she was happy. Jin decided to invite her in the meantime because it was cold outside. They went inside and he offered some tea. She gave him his gift and it was a delicious-looking tart. When Jin tasted it, he stated that it was the best one he had in this city. She said Note recommended it. Note was a very competent butler. She then noticed that he was making something, so she asked if he had done something, and he responded that it was a bath. She was confused, so he decided to just show it to her. Ash was shocked to see the bathtub. Jin explained that you could fill it with hot water and take a bath in it. She had never seen something this lovely before. Jin said that the walls weren't dry yet, so once they were dry, she could try it out. She then asked if it was okay if she called Note. Jin was okay with that, so she did, and Note came. He seemed surprised to see the bath. When she said Jin told her she could try it when it was ready, his face didn't seem too pleasant with that. He totally forgot she was a woman and a young lady. He asked if that was a problem, and Note responded that as a servant, he should refrain her from doing so, but he was also curious. Ash told Note to go to the kitchen, and when they went, Note said there wasn't any smell, which was strange to them. Jin now understood why they were acting like that. Note said that the toilet was walled off, so the smell from the sewage didn't leak. He asked which workshop he asked for this, and Jin said it was him. As Note seemed puzzled, Ash explained that Jin was the one who made that. Note was shocked, but then asked if he had thought about publishing or registering this invention at the guild. When Jin said he didn't, he told him to register it quickly, and later money came in like crazy. In the next scene, Jin is freezing outside. He came to the lake to make some bedding for Ash and Note, but he needed to make a downcoat for himself as well. He wanted to go home as soon as possible, so he started right away. He made sure not to make any noise so they wouldn't run away. He caught one and then reeled it with the rope. He also realized that the birds were drawn to the smell of blood. He used his transfer ability to go back. He decided to warm up a bit and then head out again because he still needed to hunt more. He then knocked on Ash's door, and Note greeted him. Jin asked how the movie was coming along, and Ash responded that it was going well. He happened to be around to help guide workers like a foreman sorts. A lot of craftsmen ended up dropping by and it was getting quite crowded. He gave them the bedding he made as a housewarming gift and informed them that it was made from horned goose feathers. Note and Ash were quite shocked because it was quite a luxury product. Ash thought they were too difficult to hunt. Note added that this was a bit much for a housewarming gift. Jin said the only cost to him was the arrows and rope. He didn't realize it was such a big deal. He then asked them to join him for dinner. Note told Ash to enjoy himself, but Jin informed him that he was also invited too. Note was surprised because for him, he was just a mere butler and he couldn't sit at the same table as his master. Ash didn't care about that at all and he had been invited too, so she asked if it was okay if he joined them too, and Jin confirmed him. Jin prepared a good dinner and also made his version of the tart he had made before. He also said that this roast was made with the meat from those horned goose. They prayed and then started to eat. When Ash tasted the food, she was amazed by how delicious it was. Note also stated that the turnip soup was exquisite as well. Jin noticed that Ash looked a bit scary when eating, so he tried to assume that she was happy. He started to understand what her facial expressions meant. He said that she looked happy, and she confirmed with him. She said that delicious food puts her in a good mood. Jin was about to serve them the tart he made, but then a spirit came and destroyed the tart. They were all shocked and confused. Those two spirits were the ones he had named, who he had tasked to keep other spirits away. He didn't know where that black spirit came from, though. Ash didn't look like she knew anything about that, so he decided to not reveal his ability to see the spirits to the butler. He had to fake something to explain them. He said that it could be because of the temperature shock or something like that, and then said that he would go get some hand towels and another tart. In the kitchen, he tried to decide on what to do with the spirits. He thought they could be confined by glass or other certain materials. He put one of them in a pickle, and he was glad he brought some bran to the Canham house. He was sure this enamel-glazed container would do. He thanked Rose and Khan for their great job and promised to make it up to them later. Note came to the kitchen and explained that the spirit was his familiarity and apologized for ruining his tart. Jean was relieved. Note said its name was Quinn. It was a spirit of snowy nights, and it usually stays a bit further away so no one notices it. Jean asked if Ash knew about it, but apparently she didn't. Note said that his family, the Pardills, were a branch family to the Alderhides. A branch family was not allowed to surpass the main line. Ash thinks Note could only see spirits. His gray hair and amber eyes were quite similar to Ash's, as Jean thought. He asked if she didn't know he could interact with spirits. They had already been disowned by their families, so he wondered why they weren't just free. Jean told him that the next time he brought a spirit, it would come in through the front door. After settling that, Jean went back to prepare another tart. In the next scene, he was visiting a very lively port town. While the seafood was drawn, this country neighbors the one his sister and her friends sent to. So in a way, this was an information-gathering trip. Mishto and the rest were talking about how they were doing whatever they wanted with magic. Spirits who had their energy drained by humans could possess animals as a means of self-preservation. They say monsters were formed from spirits holding grudges. That's why he was there, to see if there had been any change in the environment. He wondered if there had been any news of a hero going wild with magic, but he also wondered how he could find out. He started listening to a customer and a shop owner talking. The customer asked if those Schlumptus guys were still raiding their fisheries, and the owner confirmed him. He said that some of his boys came home injured as well. They mentioned something about a hero or a saint, but even so, it wasn't like they were benefiting from their existence, and they were just causing trouble for them. While he was listening, a hand reached for Jean's jacket, but he already knew that was coming, so he grabbed the man's hand and his money dropped out of his hand. The man escaped right away after losing the money he just stole, and Jean didn't care about him. He thought about how his sister hadn't changed at all. He decided to get some food and go home. He made fresh oysters, and with appraisal, he could eat without worrying about getting sick. While he was thinking about marinating the leftovers in oil, Rish came. He asked if he wanted to play, but the fish smell from his hands didn't appeal to Rish. The sky was getting dark, so he tried to make it lighter, but he couldn't control his magic, so he was almost burning his eyes. He decided to do some training tomorrow before heading to the guild. The next day, he went to the demon forest area and started his training. He made a fireball to kill a horned rabbit and realized that he was more powerful than he thought he was, which meant that he needed to be able to control this properly. He used various powers such as wind slash and water bullets to kill the rabbits and felt he had improved a lot, but he realized that he had overdone it with hunting. He could probably keep them all in storage. When he entered the guild to check the quest board and see what was in demand, he saw Dean arguing with someone. He wondered what was about and started listening to them. Someone was telling Dean that he didn't see any three-horned monsters at all, and the demon forest was completely deserted of them. Dean said that they only send a survey team once every 2 years, and he didn't care if he didn't find any horned monsters. It wasn't a request, and they were not going to take that risk. Chris, the man arguing with him, threw his fist to the table and told him that 3 horned monsters were formidable beasts and were an indicator of the presence of black-tainted monsters, and if they were too late to see what was going on, they would get much too strong. Jean wondered who he was and tried to remember if the name Chris sounded familiar. Ash came back, and apparently, this Chris guy knew her. He said that he would understand the severity of the situation, but Ash responded that it was up to the guild, not her. Jean then figured that this man could be the other adventurer who would like to help the nobles that Dean didn't want to deal with when he first came to the guild. He sounded like a hassle. Chris saw Jean and asked who he was and called him Evening Twilight. Jean didn't seem to like that expression, but Ash agreed that he was a bit like the night. Chris introduced himself as the 3-starred silver rank. As they shook hands, Chris asked Jean if he would accompany him on the search for 3-horned monsters. Jean obviously didn't expect himself to get caught up in something weird. Dean interrupted Chris and reminded him that he was the one who wasn't able to find any 3-horned monsters. He was having a hard time holding back his laugh. Chris responded that it was true he didn't see any, but he couldn't stop thinking about this disturbance in the demon forest, so he would stake it all on this intuition of his. Dean asked if he had a hunch, and he responded that it was intuition. He told him to spit it out and asked why he was rushing. He said that they could do it in the spring too. Jean was confused as to why Dean was suddenly so open to the idea. Note approached Jin and informed him that Chris was being possessed by a spirit. There was a possibility that it was an oracle-type spirit and the people around them could not see it, so it was being put down as a feeling of intuition. Jin now figured out everything. People who could actually see spirits were few and far between, so if it seemed like you were the recipient of a spirit's favor, it was taken quite seriously. Sometimes the effect might be more subtle, like being immune to sunburn or perhaps being blessed with greater physical ability. It seemed this blonde Chris could intuit a bit about the future. Contrary to the whole investigation angle, this was just a hunt for three-horned monsters, so Chris would need a silver rank or two, and Dean would end up being called in. Chris knew that Dean owed the guild for the whole business with his sister, so turning down a request from the guild would be bad for him. Dean asked if he was looking to recruit people with experience hunting twin-horned monsters, and he responded that they would only be subjugating a single monster, and they wouldn't be staying in the forest for too long. Considering their town and the neighboring cities, he would like to get gold ranks in this if possible. The atmosphere in the forest was simply not normal. Ash told him to get to the point already. Dean turned to Jin and wanted him to join them for this forest expedition, even though he knew he already owed him one. But Jin refused without thinking. Dean offered him to be a baggage handler and he could just run away if things get dicey. He said that he would like to see what was happening inside the forest, and he didn't intend to force him to do anything. Jin was a little curious, so he accepted his request. Dean was going to ask Ash to join them too because it would be good to have people they knew tag along. If that was the case, Note would join as well and he wouldn't say anything about this. Before he left, Dean said he would like to get out there sooner rather than later, but venturing into the forest through thick snow was not very efficient, so they would wait until spring, and he would send a request via the guild. Jin didn't get too much information from the port city. If his sister was using overwhelming amounts of magic, that could be the reason behind the disturbance in the forest. Both he and his sister had been in this world for a few months now, and he didn't know if he would laugh or cry if his sister's action had affected the environment all the way out to the demon forest. Jin had always hated having to clean up her mess. Tomorrow he decided to go a bit deeper into the demon forest. Tomorrow came and he started looking around at how those spirits were holding up. He used his vision to see them, and they were all there. For the most part, they were the kind of spirits that gathered around his house. There were a few black ones and also a few that looked kind of beaten up. Some of them were getting smaller or even disappearing. He saw a black spirit eating the other one. Apparently it was trying to make up for what it had lost from other spirits, but it didn't change the fact that it was something unpleasant to watch. Healing didn't work on spirits as they were empowered by their contracts like Rish and the others, so he would have to name them like that other time. He started naming them until he got exhausted. Spirits weren't rushing to him like they did before. So, naming those spirits who don't want to be controlled takes a lot out of him. It was tiring chasing them around, so he decided to continue this tomorrow. He went to Donoso's place and asked if he was available. He was sitting with his 3 kids and they all seemed happy to see him. Donoso hugged Jin while expressing that he was glad he could make it. He said that he had bought some souvenirs, wine and whatnot, and cake too. The kids were so happy with what he brought and they all hugged him. He realized that this family really liked hugging. Donoso apologized for having him do this, and Shiva, his wife, thanked him and wanted to enjoy the cake all together. The Donoso family were farmers and they had become friends while they taught him about cheesemaking. While Donoso was crying about the wine, Jin asked what they were doing. He responded that they were peeling beans because it gets cold in the winter, so they do things by the fire. And they fix farm equipment like that too. He decided to lend a hand too and he thanked him. When Shiva cut the cake, she served everyone, and they all seemed to enjoy the cake. Donoso's daughter liked him so much that she said that she was going to become Jin's wife one day. While Donoso was saying that he would never allow this, Shiva liked that idea. Jin stopped their argument by saying that he wasn't looking to get married yet, but then Donoso got offended and asked if there was something wrong with his daughter. The other kids also wanted to marry into Jin's family and hugged him while he was trying to figure out what was with their grip on him. Seeing them being in love with Jin, Donoso wanted to marry him too. While everyone was laughing at how silly the situation was, Jin realized that his family was nowhere near as nice as this family. And the time passed like that. Spring arrived in no time at all, and it was time to leave for the expedition. Chris greeted Evening Twilight, Jin and Moonlight, which was Ash, when they arrived. Letza was also there and he heard that Jin had gotten involved with Chris, so he told him that they would take care of the fighting, but he needed to watch out for himself too. He was also a bit concerned about his lack of experience. But when Dean mentioned that he hunts bears, he was shocked because he thought Ash was the one who kept hunting bears. Ash explained that this all started with Jin. That reminded Jin that he hadn't sold anything at the guild recently. Dean said the guild wouldn't let him accompany them if they didn't have some idea of his ability. Chris started laughing and said that his hunch about him was correct. Jin couldn't help but stare at Chris's spirits because she was happily stroking his cleft chin. Kana came and told everyone that they were looking forward to working with them. She thanked Jin for cooperating with them even though they had greatly inconvenienced him in the past. She also wanted him to let her examine his bag's dimensions. She gave him a Godspeed potion on behalf of the guild, and with that, they were ready to go. While walking, Dean asked what was so special about his bag. Ash also wondered about the thing wrapped up at the top. Jin explained that he made it himself out of leather and the top roll was futon bedding. Ash thought it would be a hassle if monsters were to attack, and it was also heavy, and it would be hard to throw it down before a fight. Jin responded that it was easily detachable, and he had made it so it could be fastened with those belts and clips. Chris concluded that his own bags would be more likely to hinder them. He looked so serious, but Jin couldn't see him like that because the spirit was enraptured by stroking his chin. They continued throughout the forest and cut down monsters. After a while, Dean suggested taking a break for lunch. Thanks to the good weather, they were making quite good progress. Jin took out kitchen utensils and ingredients like dried chicken, onions, and mushrooms. He seasoned them with salt and pepper, and it was done. He also prepared lots of sandwiches. Dean's mouth was watering while looking at the food he brought. Jin said he could have some because he wouldn't be able to eat it all anyway. But he didn't expect everyone to dig in. They all seemed to like the sandwiches. Dean preferred the harder loaves, but this meat was delicious. Letza asked what was coating the meat, and he responded that they were breadcrumbs. He explained that the meat was dipped in flour and eggs, then coated in breadcrumbs and fried. Note took some notes from him to use later. Ash asked the other meat, and Jin explained that that was also fired in oil. It was seasoned with salt and pepper, garlic, ginger, fish sauce, and brandy. After they were all full, they continued their way. Jin noticed that his shoes were getting dirty, so he wondered if it was because of the way he walked because Note's shoes were pristine. He decided to copy his gait. Chris informed everyone that from this point on there would be wolves as well. They were not as strong as bears, but they hunted in packs. When it gets down to it, he tells Ash and Jin to not wait for them and to take the initiative when appropriate. Even though he was annoying, Chris was attentive and looked out for his party members so Jin could stand him. They had a pack approaching them, and Jin noticed that they were ganging up on him. He concluded that they knew he was the weakest member here. When the wolves started coming at him one by one, he sliced them very easily, leaving everyone in shock. Chris thought he was showing gaps in his defense to lure in enemies because he was just that strong, but he was just not used to being on guard. Dean said he didn't look like a fighter, but he was more than meets the eye. It made Letza inadequate that he and Ash were meant to be new adventurers. Note told Ash that the other monsters would be attracted by the smell of blood, so they should take those horns quickly and move on. After getting the horns, they continued to arrive at their campsite. When they arrived at their campsite, Jin prepared an adequate tent for the team. Dean was confused because even though he said he didn't like camping, he was a bit too good at it. Chris examined the tent and called him a genius at using waterproof sheets to make a wall and a roof. Jin said that he might not like camping, but he didn't say he was not good at it. After all, he lived by himself on that island for almost 2 months. Ash noticed that he used some moss as a cushion and she decided to go find more of them. Chris and Note joined her because it would be nice if there was enough for all of them to camp with. Jin couldn't believe they were going to strip the mountain of moss. That would be frowned upon back in Japan. Dean informed Jin that they were going to go catch some fish for dinner. In that case, Jin decided to make some soup for all of them, which sounded great as it would be pretty cold at night. Tonight's meal would be tomato soup with shredded meat, chickpeas, and lots of vegetables. He prepared the soup and then got the dough ready. While he was kneading the dough, Dean was confused and thought he was doing some kind of ceremony. Jin got the dough ready and decided to let it rise for a bit so he could make breakfast with that too. When the menu was ready, Chris asked what that one circle food was. Jin explained that it was pizza made with cheese, bacon, and some asparagus that he found in the area. That was his first time hearing about a dish called pizza. Dean thought it was the ritual-like thing he was doing earlier, but he didn't understand what he meant. When he tasted it, he really liked it. Note said it would be delicious with other ingredients too, and Jin responded that tomato sauce would be good too. Note seemed confused, so he wondered if this world had ever seen a tomato yet. He put dried tomatoes in the soup, but they didn't say anything. Chris said he would make a fine wife, and he seemed genuinely upset about that. Dean wondered what Jin's preferred type was, and he remembered that it wasn't his sister, which he wondered if it was because she was too flat for him. Ash seemed upset that Dean had a pretty big chest. That was not something a woman should aspire towards, but he didn't say that out loud. To stop the misunderstanding, he stated that he was still adjusting to dealing with people, so he wasn't sure what his type was. He had only been around people that he didn't trust. He had people confess to him a few times before. Letza asked if they said they were just joking afterward, and Chris seemed upset imagining him like that. Dean claimed that they might be embarrassed after confessing to him and ended up saying something like that. Jin said the first time he was 6, the second he was 10, and the third time he was 14, and all of them were different people. Dean asked if he was sure he wasn't cursed because 3 times seemed a lot. Letza responded that not all women were like that. He knew that, and he knew he had been in a bit of a unique scenario, so he was trying to work on it. His sister was the root cause of all this. The first time was a friend of his sister and was clearly put up to it by his sister, and all the other times were also by people who were somehow associated with his sister. He thought she looked at him like he was her property and that she enjoyed teasing him. It was a real pain in the ass, so after the second time, he just went along with the act from then on. While Chris was telling Jin to cheer up, it seemed like Ash was the one who should cheer up a little. At night, Jin was watching the stars while drinking his tea. Even though it was spring, it was still quite cold at night. Azu came to his shoulder and then he heard Ash informing him that she would take over the night watch. When Jin offered them some snacks, she thanked him for everything. She said that even that coat was light and comfortable. He responded that he made it for himself as a hobby, and besides, she had already repaid him for the potion. He was confused by her gloomy face and thought she might not like the biscuits he gave her. Suddenly, she told him that he was a nice guy, and she was sure he would be happy. He was confused, but he still thanked her. She continued to say that she was sure those confessions were just a set of pranks that happened to coincide. Jin knew what she was talking about and wondered if she was just trying to make him feel better. He responded that he had met some good people, so he was working on his distrust of people. She said that she was glad to have been part of the process. After confirming her, he informed her that he would let her take care of the rest. While going to his bed, he thought about her. Ash was a bit of a straight shooter, but it was still embarrassing to hear someone compliment you to your face. She was almost the opposite of his sister. She was quite open and honest. While smiling, he decided to get some rest and be ready for tomorrow. In the next scene, Jin prepared another feast for the team, and Letza realized that they were eating better out in the field than they did in the city. It had been a few days since they left, and they had been hunting, scavenging, and slowly making their way deeper in. They still haven't encountered any twin or three-horned monsters. When Ash mentioned that Red Inn would be nice here, Note agreed with her. Jin got confused and wondered if they were talking about red wine. Chris was surprised that he could cook bread in a pot. He had made a black mountain goat liver pâté to go with the bread. The liver paste was made with salted water instead of milk to remove some of the gamey smell. It should be high in iron as well as vitamins, which were harder to come by with a more protein-heavy diet out in the field. He was probably the only one who cared about keeping to a healthy diet here. Chris wondered if they were going to sleep by the river tonight, and he responded that they weren't going to sleep there. He just made a steam bath. He explained that while they were out hunting for food, he used some flexible branches to make that, and it was a dome with some sheets over top. He used rocks for a bonfire inside, and when you pour water over those hot stones, you sweat out in this sauna and then jump into the river. Chris was amazed by how unrivaled he was when it came to traveling in comfort. That was indeed a subtle compliment to him. He told him to feel free to use it. When he got outside the tent, the rest of the group seemed curious too. He asked if they would like to use it as well, and they all were willing. They ended up all using the steam bath, and it was quite late now. The sheets needed to be dried, so he would have to sleep without cover tonight. After he hung the sheets, he noticed that there were quite a lot of spirits out, and they seemed to like gathering under the moon. He had asked one of his spirits to help them keep them away from him. He had been noticing more and more black spirits. He would love to name them and take care of the issue, but it would be a problem if anyone saw him. The next day, they continued their way to the forest, and Dean mentioned how great he was feeling after last night's steam bath. Chris agreed and added that they were making better ground than before. Suddenly, the Dean noticed something and told everyone to stop. There was a three-horned lizard in front of them. Forget seeing a twin-horned monster, they were going straight to the three-horned ones now. Those three-horned lizards were quite tenacious. To take one down, they either must go for the spine or the heart. Even so, they should probably stay put until Dean gives them the word. Most of its skin was tougher than a bone. Their best chance at taking it down was aiming for the spine through its throat. Dean told Chris that they would be splitting up. When one of them was on its right and the other was on its left, Dean attacked it and told Chris to attack. Chris successfully defeated the wizard by stabbing its throat just like Dean said. Ash and Note were pretty impressed by their work. Letza was still shaken up even though it went fine. That was only possible in a two-man team. It was hard to learn something from that. Letza said that regardless, three-horned lizards this deep in the forest confirmed that they had definitive proof. They had only been here for a week, and monsters in this area usually don't have horns or have a single horn at most. They had done their job here, and they were quite close to the next campsite. They would head there, then turn around and head back to town. Chris asked Jin if he could help him dismantle that. Letza also noticed that Jin was good at dismantling. He had been practicing his hunting skills. He was still bothered by the black spirits. There were more and more of them, and this area was smaller than the training grounds in the woods, but there were even more spirits present here. He wondered if horned monsters were being possessed by large black spirits. There were a lot of questions to which there was no answer. Jin asked Letza if he had lard left because he was dying to fry some up. Letza had plenty of them, so he said that he would go try and find some wild asparagus while everyone was out hunting. Letza told him to not go too far away from him because if the monsters were hungry, they were quite unpredictable. Jin thanked me for the heads up and continued his way. He saw the last few mushrooms from the winter months. There was a garlic mustard plant as well, so he thought about making pasta tomorrow. He decided to use search to make that easier for him. He used that while dismantling the lizard, but he was going to use it again now just in case. He saw a fox with 2 horns. It was not discouraged by the fire and making a beeline straight for them. He decided to let Letza know about that and went back. Letza said that he had covered it in cedar leaves to mask the smell. He gave Jin to mask his smell too, and once he got this on, they would hide downwind. Jin noticed that the fox was coming at them faster than he expected. He told Letza that it wasn't as tough as a lizard, so he should be able to take it down. Letza was shocked, but it was too late now. He was right in front of the fox and it was going to be one-on-one against this monster. As the fox charged towards him, Jin braced himself and swiftly took it down with ease. Dean arrived on the scene, curious about what had just happened. Letzi mentioned it was a fox, but he wasn't asking that. Letzi explained that Jin took it down, which was shocking. Chris heard that and once again started praising him unnecessarily. Putting aside how amazing Jin was, Dean stated even though they thought it was only lizards, this event proved otherwise. Those kinds of lizards don't particularly like to venture out long distances, but those foxes were different. If it were a 3-horned fox or wolf, they would make their way to town quickly. Chris added that judging by how there was a 3-horned lizard in this area, it was likely that a 3-horned fox could show up as well. And now they had also seen a twin-horned fox. They cannot afford to take their time leisurely getting back to town, so Dean tells everyone that they are going to head back first thing in the morning. After settling that, Jin started cooking dinner. He was surprised that they willingly went out of their way and hunt birds because they liked the fried chicken he made. Letza mentioned that over this past week he had eaten better than when in the city. They spent their evening like that and went to sleep. There weren't any incidents on the way home and the expedition was over. Korea thanked them for their hard work and told them to follow her to the guild so they could give their reports. Jin was looking forward to going to his home, so he asked Note and Ash if they could bring his share of the reward later. Ash accepted but wondered why he was rushing. He said that he wanted to go home and prepare a bath, and he told her that she could drop by later to bathe as well if she would like. Dean overheard them and asked him if he was heading off. He told him that they could talk about spirits later. Jin went back home and prepared the fireplace. He was exhausted. He told the spirits to let him know if any guests showed up. It seemed keeping a fire running in both houses allowed for the fireplace spirits to communicate with each other, so if anyone dropped by while he was at either house, he would know about it. He used his storage ability to heat the bathtub and head to the other house with transfer ability. Reach was there and he was pretty happy to see him. After petting him for a while, he told him that he was going to take a bath first before they played. He had to wash up 3 times to get all the dirt off. While Reach was on his lap, a fire spirit came and informed him. He went to the other house and replaced the water inside the bathtub with some more hot water. Note and Ash were at the door waiting. He greeted them and they gave him his share of the reward. He informed them that he had prepared the bath for them. The first one to bathe was Ash, so Jin brought some tea and a cake to share with Note. Note wanted to know where he purchased his bathtub from. He responded that it was from Eddie in the Kingdom of Pasteur. Considering ordering, fabrication, and delivery, Note guessed that it would take 6 months at the least to get a bathtub, so they would have to stick with a wooden bathtub for the time being. He also wanted to buy the robes he lent them, but Jin was going to give them to them anyway. Note informed him that it was decided that a strike team would be formed, including Ash and Note. He didn't want to take those robes for free, so he gave him a bag of coins, but he refused. However, Note insists he takes the money with a scary face, so he has to accept. Ash finished her bath. Jin told her to sit and have a cup of tea while he got the next batch of hot water ready. She asked if she should help, but Note stopped her because a butler could not possibly have their lord help them with a bath. After 2 minutes, Note excused himself to take a bath and Ash and Jin were alone. He had never seen Ash with her hair down before, so he felt a little weird. But when he looked at her face, she looked like she was about to kill someone. He asked what was wrong and she asked if he saw the spirits in the forest. She hasn't seen spirits like that ever since that one court mage went rogue. Jin mentioned that he had never seen anyone using magic before, and asked if it was very rare. Ash explained that spirits lend their power to people either because they were called upon by some sort of contract or spell. They say out of 10 spirits, only 2 would be willing to help. Beyond that, you could bind them with contracts or spells to force them out or destroy them with magic. A spirit's power was its existence, so when it was suspended it disappeared. So those spirits ceased to exist. And that black shade was proof that it held a grudge towards humans. Not only did it then have the chance to turn an animal into a monster, but it also did not help anyone around it. Jin wondered if that would mean those people would eventually become monsters as well, and Ash confirmed that they would. That would also mean his sister was becoming a demon lord, not a hero. He started to feel like it was best to avoid using magic altogether. Ash responded that when spirits were active, they could get more power than they had spent. To recover, yes, but also to grow. And active use of magic helps to stabilize spirits in their world. It was something elaborate and deliberate. It seemed spirits were drawn to magic because things that would flicker away and cease to exist were given permanence. So if he doesn't push those spirits too far, they would be more than happy to help. Azu had every opportunity to become one of those black spirits, but he chose not to be there for Ash. Hence, she couldn't help but compare every one of those black spirits to Azu. Jin realized that Ash was shaken from seeing those spirits turn black. He told her to wait there for a moment and came back with a plate of sweets. He asked her not to tell Note about these. She had never seen anything like that before. Jin asked her to give them a taste test for him. She looked like she was caught up in those spirits, and it wasn't good to brood like that for so long. She thanked me for the food and started eating. Her cheeks got red when she tasted the sweets. She seemed pretty satisfied with the things she was eating. She said that they were all delicious and asked what the red thing was she was eating. Jin responded that it was called a strawberry. A young lady probably shouldn't be eating things that they didn't know, so he was the one at fault here, but he was starting to worry about her. He wasn't quite used to comforting people, so all he could think of was offering sweets. And she looked like she was happy, so he was happy too. While sipping her tea, she realized that she was really happy right now, and she didn't think she would be so easy to please. Jin told her that there was nothing wrong with that, and Azu seemed happier now as well. She seemed relieved by his words. The next day, Jin saw Letza and mentioned that he heard he was going to be heading back into the forest. Letza asked if he would be able to make him a bag. Letza heard he did that for Dean and Chris as well, so he wanted to have it too. Letza mentioned that there was a good chance it would get stolen if it stood out too much. While Jin was taking his body measurements, he explained that this time, silver ranks would be forced to participate, and unless they were on important business or injured, the iron ranks had been summoned to help out as well. If you join those hunts, you will usually earn a star or two for your rank. What Jin understood from what he said was that there were a bunch of iron ranks that were strong enough but might not have the stars to rank up, which sounded like a good deal. He thought you could just get stars for completing the request. Letzi explained that stars were for guild work, community service, and that kind of thing. Poor behavior hurts your chances of getting stars. He would never know who would sign up to complete a request. They were just small fries after all. According to Letza, the way you earn stars depends on your rank. As a bronze rank, he already had enough stars to attempt the rank-up exam after completing the delivery of a few potions. Letza heard that bronze ranks could join if they were recommended by a higher rank. Jean, Hard, Ash, and Note were taking part in Chris's recommendation. He was not going to participate in that. Jean asked when he was going to head out, and he responded that after a month, depending on Amadeo. Jean was puzzled, so he explained that he was a gold-ranked adventurer. The guild called in a few favors to pin them down for this request. Amadeo was also teaming up with a magic user who was going to rank up to gold soon. Jean was interested now. Letza continued, explaining that the guild thought there wouldn't be many strong monsters this time around. 1 or 2 at the most. Letza thought they believed Amadeo would be enough to handle anything that happened. In addition to that, Amadeo states that he could see spirits, which was something that Jean didn't expect. That night, Jean went to the demon forest to hunt monsters to get enough materials to make bags for everyone. He saw a black spirit behind him and immediately caught it and named it. For Ash's peace of mind, he decided to go ahead and name black spirits whenever he saw them. Now it was time to get busy again. In the next chapter, Jean decided to accompany Ash and Note out shopping. He also gave them the leather bags that he made. He ended up making bags for everyone, but with his penchant for manufacturing, it wasn't nearly as strenuous as they thought it was. He thought it was a little bit early to be out shopping because the expedition hadn't been for quite a while yet. He heard it was up to that gold-ranked adventurer Amadeo to decide when to head out. Ash responded that there were more and more strangers that they didn't know yet, so they might not be able to get what they wanted if they waited until the last minute. Jean remembers Letza mentioning that some possibly unsavory people would be called up to join the expedition, and it took them no time at all to try and provoke him. While the man was asking him to buy them a drink, Jean kicked his stomach and beat him. Chris came and asked if he was okay. Dean and Letzi were also there. The other people who saw him kicking the man started whispering and calling Jean the Black Bear. Jean was confused but didn't say anything. To lighten the mood, Note asked everyone to continue this in a nearby restaurant. They all got a drink and Jean asked what they had been doing since their investigation. Chris responded that he had been meeting with the guild while Dean had been on the run. Letza had been helping Chris out with gathering herbs. Jean gave a suspicious look at Dean. He didn't want to throw stones, but they were the ones who set up the request. Dean stated that he was searching for a new place to stay. Chris asked if he was moving out, and he responded that he was staying with his sister, but they started living a bit more frugally because he was spoiling her too much. But now their mother had gotten involved and was taking complete control. The guild was drilling the basics into her again, and it wasn't a good thing for him to be around her to rely on. As he was explaining that Ash was completely unfazed and only thought about hunting bears. This made him wonder what that was earlier about a black bear. Dean explained that they were talking about him and Ash, who were strong like bears. Note mentioned that some people get the two of them mixed up. Gene would have preferred to be called a wolf. Meanwhile, Chris was saying that a bear hardly fit his iris-like appearance. Dean mentioned that when it comes to wolves, it had got to be the king of wolves, Balmor. He would be crazy to want a wolf moniker. Gene didn't know who Balmor was, so Chris said he was a legendary adventurer, and he had been out of the adventure scene for quite a while even though his name was still renowned. He understood that Dean was quite a fan of his. Dean didn't disagree with that claim. He said that he became an adventurer because of Balmor. The fact that he became an adventurer for a pretty whimsical reason amazed Gene because he even made it to the silver ranks. He then remembered to give them their bags and they all thanked him. Dean was shocked that even the inside of the bag was made of leather, which would make it very expensive. Note brought money along, but it wasn't enough. Gene told them to just buy him a drink after they got back from the expedition. They promised to get him a keg for that. They arranged to have a little party when they got back from the expedition, and with that, Gene toasted for everyone's safety. After a while, Gene, Ash, Note, and Letza were the first to head out while Chris and Dean decided to drink a bit more. Gene asked Letza if he was heading in the same direction as them, and he responded that he was renting a room that was near the forest because it was cheap, but it seemed the rent was going to go up soon. The landlord wanted to do those toiled works that were all the rage right now. Ash's and Note's glared directly at Gene after that. They started talking like a salesman to convince Letza. The next morning, Gene woke up from his sleep, and while eating his breakfast, he decided to head deeper into the woods today. He used his transfer magic and arrived at the forest. It was time for another day of catching and naming black spirits. At least he was getting the hang of that, so it was easier. The expedition force would be passing by close to that area, so he wanted to see how Amadeo's companion used magic. He decided to ask those spirits to keep him updated on how the expedition force went. After that, he headed a little bit deeper. The map that the gods gave him cuts off at the east side of the demon forest. It seemed like it was a place that was without spirits, or at least was beyond the reach of the gods who he had made acquaintances with. The first thing he encountered was a three-horned monster. He used his all-kill blade and slashed the boar. He decided to have a wild boar hot pot later and store the boar. He then noticed some wild asparagus shoots and started gathering some for himself, Ash, and Note. Suddenly he felt something behind him, and when he looked, it was a snow leopard. Even though he was surprised and nervous to see one, he stayed calm. He noticed that it looked like it was trying to tell him something. A deer appeared right next to it and told him that the leopard had a favor to ask. It would like him to form a contract with Mazil. He had so many questions in his head. They weren't spirits because they had a horn, but they didn't have any black shadows, so it was confusing. He asked who Mazil and the deer were and stated that it was their friend. That was not much to go off of, so he asked if Mazil was on the verge of becoming a black spirit. The deer once again translated what the leopard said, and it said that in exchange it would form a sanctuary for him in any part of those woods he wanted. Sanctuary was a place that would repel hostility, like monsters or black spirits. He asked where it wanted him to go, and it told him to take a ride with the deer. The moment he sat on the deer, it started running like crazy. The speed was so intense that he couldn't even see where they were going. After a while, the deer stopped, making him fall to the ground. While he was trying to put himself together, the deer stated that Maisel was there. A sad little cute pony appeared behind a rock and asked why they brought a human there. Gene figured out that Ma was the name of the snow leopard. He noticed that the wound on its shoulder was starting to turn it into a black spirit, so he got closer to it and asked what was his name. He stated that he was going to form a contract with him. A named spirit must speak its original name to the contractor for a contract to be formed. Sometimes an entirely new name could be granted, like the spirits who gathered at his house. But he heard that some attachments to their existing names make them stronger. But Mazil didn't seem like it wanted to form a contract with him. It was clear that this one was a little bit stubborn. While it was stated that forming a contract with a human would be like tying a noose around its neck, Gene knocked it down with a single move and asked its name once again. It was still insulting to him, but Gene insisted on his question. It gave up and ended up telling its name. Gene suggested a deal to him. The contract sounded doable, so he let him name him. That drained a lot of his magic. Gene informed the deer and the leopard that he completed their request. The deer stated that it was a little excessive. He asked if the sanctuary could be put in a place that was scenic and easily accessible to spirits, like a big tree and decent undergrowth, like a spring. The leopard told him to go with the deer again, and Mazil mentioned that he never thought he would see a human ride Canele, the deer. John preferred a more comfortable ride, but that was all he got. It started running at an incredible speed again and dropped him off when they arrived. They took him to the place where they would create the sanctuary, and it was even better than he had hoped it would be. Kennelly informed him that they were going to set up the sanctuary now. As they were creating the sanctuary, Jin asked if horses would be able to approach this place. They said that no matter the beast or spirit, as long as they were contracted to him, they could enter. That was a relief for him. After everything was done, they both thanked for his assistance and left there. Jin noticed that there was a new addition to the map since he last checked. He figured that he could even add places he had been to this map, even if they were beyond the usual reach of the gods. But he thought there must be more to it than that. There were a few new places on this map that were outside of where Mazil would normally roam. He felt excited and happy about the possibility of a place with Japan-like flora existing. With that, his next task was to figure out what to do with that place. In the next chapter, Jin was in the trade city Naladid. He was there to examine buildings as a reference for something to build inside the sanctuary at the Magic Forest. Naladid was an island surrounded by ocean on all sides and was said to house some of the most advanced technology in this world. He saw glass panes and used his appraisal ability to look closely. It looked like they blew glass rounds and then linked them together on a flat surface. It was more transparent than anything else he had seen in this world so far. The glass he had been in Kanum was much thicker, and air bubbles were pretty noticeable. It was a green bauble that looked like a beach ball. He noticed a store that deals in parchment as well. The engravings on this document box were amazing too. There were even stores that sold accessories, silk, wool, and dresses. It was the most advanced trade city in the world. He noticed a red glad that had gold ornamentations. It was pretty pricey, but he decided to buy it. He came here to look at houses, but ended up looking at the goods. When a man greeted him, he noticed that he was a chemist and wondered what the medical care level of that world was like. He was also shocked by seeing cocoa beans. The shop owner stated that if he grinds this up and makes it into an elixir, it will prolong your lifespan. But it would be very bitter without adding sugar, as Jin said. He responded that some nobles like to drink that with sugar, milk, and honey. Because of that, the price has been going up recently. He was trying to tell him that he should buy it now because the price would continue to rise. 1 gram would cost him 2 mun, which was pretty expensive. But he ended up buying some. He wasn't sure if he wanted to go visit the more industrial areas. His appraisal told him that it seemed drying and fermentation took a lot of effort, and if it was this expensive here in Naladid, it would be more expensive the further away you get from there. He was also able to acquire vanilla beans, yellow and brown mustard, and turmeric. He already had some in the pantry at his house, but it would be good to see the difference between them. While walking, someone called him. When he looked behind, it was an old man who seemed amazed to see him. Jin got defensive and was ready to fight, but the man asked if he could tell him where he purchased his bag. Jin responded that this was a bag that had recently been patented by the adventurer guilds in the Azul region. It was quite convenient. The man seemed disappointed because the Azul region was a bit far from there. Jin told him that it would be faster to get the specifications and then craft it there. He didn't know the exact distance, but you pass mountains that had snow all year around. The man thanked him and apologized for holding him up. This was the 10th time that this conversation had happened. There might only be 1 or 2 people here with wallets large enough to go to Kanum in the Azul region. If their merchants would go to Kanum, the world would spread about the toilets there as well. He stayed at an inn yesterday, but their bathroom was just ajar, so he hoped the word would spread about the toilets soon. After deciding that he had looked around enough, it was time to get to today's main event. He went into a store and a lady asked what he was looking for. When he responded that he was looking for books about spirits, the lady was surprised because he was in the grocery store. He responded that he was looking for bargains. In particular, he was looking for a book that details how to catch spirits. Ash told him that this kind of book should be quite rare, and if it was to be found anywhere, it would be at Naladid. They might not be for sale, but she was sure that there was some out there. Hence, he had been roaming around these antique stores and other seedy stores. The lady told him that you don't see them very often around here. Nobles usually just buy the books to put them on display. The ones where he was after the contents were usually handled by seedier bookstores, and these days even merchants had their private libraries. He asked where he could find those seedier bookstores. The woman told him, and when he went to another shop, he asked if they had any books for perusal. The young worker asked if he would like to see them with or without contents. He was surprised that they had empty books. He said that they were wooden boxes with phalanx bindings. They could also be made into secret compartments. Jin asked for the ones with contents. The worker took out 2 books. One of them was a book with blank pages, and the other was a book that had been rendered unreadable by a spirit's prank. Surprisingly, the blank book was much pricier. The worker explained that a skilled craftsman could use it to record detailed processes inside. It was true, this manuscript had a spirit, so Jin wondered if it was constantly rewriting what was inside. While looking at the books, the worker stated that it was written in a special script that seemed to only be readable to its author. There were people out there who wanted to keep some secrets themselves, especially those who practiced magic or sorcery. It seemed that with Jin's language skills, he was able to read those characters. However, it was still hard to understand anagrams and metaphors with their specific meanings. He realized that there was more than just that book in the set. He asked if they had any other books with the same spine as that one. There were, but they were more expensive because they had pictures. Even if they can't understand those books, they could be still pricey. Jin told him that it was fine and wanted him to find them for him. Those books were a massive find. The spirits weren't sticking to it as a prank, but rather because they were safeguarding the original copy. These books had history, herbs, and spirits. He named them. He was incredibly happy that he found that. Now that he had accomplished all his goals there, it was time to go home. He went home and started reading. The first book was called The Risk and Advantage or Spirit Contract. The risks were mainly in the attributes of the spirit and the amount of magic power needed, which shouldn't be an issue for him. The advantages could vary from spirit to spirit, but the one shared benefit was that they would appear when you call for them. Normally, magic and sorcery pull strength from the spirits in the nearby vicinity, so you might not have a compatible spirit nearby. But with each contracted spirit, he could call them to him at almost any location, making magic more efficient, though he heard summoning a fire spirit to a snowy mountain can be very draining. He thought that spirits were just omnipresent and didn't differ too much from spirit to spirit, but it seemed they were all quite different. He had helped spirits name them, and they had been helping him out overall. He supposed even Mishto and Halalfa were both light attributes, yet still differed greatly. And that damn ball of light didn't fit the light attribute. Even if they were spirits, he was sure they wouldn't want to help someone who was tearing up the environment. In the next scene, Jin prepares a delicious breakfast for Ash and Note. They were going to be joining the expedition team today. They were going to be away from home for a while, and they decided to finish up all the perishable food they still had, so he had them over for breakfast. Breakfast in this world was mainly reliant on staples like bread, but if you had time you could use some fruits and a little meat with a cold soup on the side. He asked if they also cook in the morning, and Note responded that they would have some hot tea, but otherwise they buy from outside stalls. Many people go to work as soon as the sun rises, so they usually don't start a fire to save on firewood costs. When they finished their breakfast, they thanked him and were ready to go. Before they left, Jang gave them some lunch as well. It was heavy, but they could share it with Dean and the others. When they left, it was time for Jean to stock up on building materials. Now that there was a safe zone in the forest, he could take Riche with him. He took Rich, used his transfer ability, and went to the sanctuary. When they arrived, all the spirits fled away. Jean wondered if it was because of Riche. He told him that as long as he didn't pass the thin white barrier, it was fine to play. He started with some landscaping. He decided to build a small 2-story house there. He wanted one room on both floors because he would like to be able to go downstairs and have a nice cup of tea, and still be able to go upstairs and lounge when he was tired. He would also like a bigger outside area for Reach to be able to run around in. That way they could still be together even when he was out naming spirits. He shopped around for a few days looking for plaster, wood, and bricks, so he should be all set to build. After working for a while, he decided to take a lunch break. He called Rish and they both started eating their lunch. When Riche finished eating, he found a stick and brought it to Jean. Jean wasn't sure what to do with the garden. Riche seemed quite inquisitive, so he wondered if he would be happier if he added a wide variety of plants. He might add some vines and roses to cover the side of the house. He also would like to get a siphon to brew coffee with. Suddenly, he saw the snow leopard coming at him with the deer. Not only them, but the horse was also coming along. They started staring at Riche and then asked why he was in a place like that. Jean was confused. Apparently Riche disappeared 5 years ago, and word was that he disappeared because he failed to summon a hero. Jean asked Rishi if he used to boss them around, but his response was indefinite. There were a few possibilities with that stare. He didn't remember, he didn't want to remember, and it was too troublesome to think about, though it was news to him that they knew each other. He asked if that meant this was Rich's former home. A wolf would be more at home in a forest than in a city. The leopard stated that Riche was stronger than any other spirit and he was more free than any other spirit. His voice could reach every corner of the world. Jean realized that this cool leopard was a massive fan of Riche. He decided to let him ramble on while he kept working. He said that Riche protected this forest from humans who called themselves the Apostles of Wind. He even started crying while watching Riche. He said that every last trace of him disappeared about a year ago. That was probably because that was when he took him to his house. And that house had a barrier that isolated it from the rest of the world. He wondered if this was the reason why there only seemed to be forests further inland to the east, and only mountains on the western coastline. When he asked who the Apostles of Wind were, he responded that they were the previous hero and their followers. This made Jean wonder if every hero was a terrible person. The leopard mentioned that they were going to suppress Kadal's influence over forests, and then create a means to traverse over water. Now he felt bad for taking advantage of the resources at Naladid. He admitted that he ended up doing the same kind of thing and apologized. He started to worry that Riche would end up hating him. He started to pet his belly. The deer stated that it was a matter of severity. Even to this day, the forests have not returned to the west. The only safe places for humans to live were in towns and villages, which required deforestation and the carving away of nature. But a step into the forests, you would come across spirits, monsters, and wild beasts. They cut away at more and more forests, built more boats, and expanded the range of where humans could live and thrive. They must not have realized the dangers of deforestation. Mazil the horse stated that the current hero was summoned by the spirit of light, but they were far from peaceful. He went to check on the situation, but their great magic usage turned his once pure white body to this darkened color. But Jin had his gratitude because thanks to him, he was spreading the grief of potentially consuming his peers. Jin responded that he should thank the deer and the leopard because they set up this deal. There was some real nastiness out there, they said. Even if higher-ranked spirits weren't particularly lacking in any way, they were still compelled to grow and consume. While individually somewhat weak, they would be protected by the hero, and Mazil told him that he shouldn't get too close to the hero because they were much stronger than him. Jin responded that he would never get close to them. He had no regrets for asking for his food pantry, but he might have to get a bit more serious and become stronger. Cooking, craftsmanship, and the other gifts from the gods made him stronger, but they were not enough. He had to know how to fight. He asked Mazil if he knew anything about Rich. While he wasn't sure about how it worked, that map was given to him by the gods who protected and saved him. He believed what was shown on it was the extent of the power of these gods and any contracted spirits. And if that's the case, that may mean that Rich's influence on these forests is now quite low. Mazil didn't know any details, but the leopard kept saying that Rich was braver and wiser than any other spirit. In the next scene, Jin goes home and prepares his dinner. While he was eating, he was thinking about how he wanted to start a farm at this house while building the house in the forest sanctuary. He was hoping that eventually potatoes and tomatoes would become more commonplace in this world as well. So far, these vegetables could only be found and grown at that house. He was thinking of using appraisal on them to try and source the original varieties. From what he had read in those books detailing spirit, a good farm crop could be ensured by befriending the earth and water spirits in the area. He was not well versed in it at all, but it would be nice to breed crops. He dreamed about being able to eat something delicious in a restaurant that included those ingredients. He would have to make some more homes, cultivate some fields, and probably name some spirits. He was glad he had made the effort to train his body because if he tried to do that right after arriving at that island, he would have collapsed long ago. He finished his meal and started to work on his farm in his new house. Thus far, farming and construction have been going quite well. He had also planted a few vegetables from the pantry so the local spirits could take it from there. As a side note, he decided not to use the growth power this time. He then wondered how Ash and the others were doing in that expedition team. He wasn't too concerned about them since the guild hadn't been acting out of the ordinary, and other countries were sending their own teams as well. He decided to play with Riche. Riche was a pretty smart wolf. Jin thought about making a frisbee next time. It was about time for them to head home because he had got something he wanted to try out today. At home, he prepared parchment, ink, and his brushes. He was going to create magic circles. He saw these while reading that book the other day, and he had been wanting to try it out himself. He poured in magic power while crushing the ingredients, then added water and ink. After that, he applied it to the drawing compass. Now all he had to do was to draw the shapes from the book. He combined that with the symbols from the other books. He tried to decide on what kind of spirit he should try summoning. He started with an earth spirit, then a water, and then a fire spirit. They were all popping out from the paper before he finished drawing the magic circle. He warned them because he didn't want to ruin the paper. He had an idea and wanted to summon an ice spirit. But Reach popped out between his legs because he was the spirit of ice and darkness. If he doesn't need to go to the mountains for ice cream, he might make ice cream. He kept getting sidetracked from drawing, so he tried to focus and actually decide now. He had planted a field, so he hoped for a good harvest. He drew the symbol for fertility and poured in his magic. And there it was, pal, at his service. He thought this was a prank because it was hard to believe that he summoned them properly. I said the ink he was using was quite poor, and it was Van. Jin explained that he did that according to the instructions in the book, to which he responded that it must be wrong. The ink was only good for calling nearby contracted spirits. Mishto was also there, and she noticed that he was having a lot of fun, and added that it was so much fun to watch him. Jin was just shocked that they were all there, even the love god was there. She said that he brought many spirits there, so that's why they were comfortable there. So those small flecks of light were actually spirits. They were so fleeting, they were born in the morning and then disappeared by evening. In any case, everyone was there now. Ish asked why he didn't ask them about spirits instead of reading books. He didn't think they would teach him themselves. They did give him instructions at the start, but he didn't know if they would even look after him moving forward. All of a sudden, Van wanted to have a small match because he got bored just sitting around like that. Jin had to come along and they went outside. Jin made the first attack and he was defeated in a second. Van told him that he wasn't moving properly. Jin was confused. Up until that point, he had been trying to imitate the others, taking in other things to try and get stronger, but it seemed like it wasn't enough. Van told him that he was not in control of his movements at all. He had been imitating their physical actions without considering how to make it fit his own body, so he couldn't say his assessments of him were wrong. Van asked how he imagined his sword to be and told him to say the first thing that came to mind. He tried to imagine, and he had some fantasy or period dramas as he was from a peaceful world. The former was influenced by his sister, and the latter by the shows he used to watch with his grandmother. Period dramas impressed him more, but that sword was more like the one you would find in an RPG. Van understood him and took his sword. He started transforming his sword in his own hands. The sword ended up looking exactly like a Japanese katana. It was a bit longer than a proper katana, and the sageo was made with a chain instead of cloth. It was quite fitting for a fantasy world. Van stated that the sword was quite unusual. Jin explained that it was the sword of his homeland. Now he was ready for another round. They started fighting, and this time Van made the first attack. The previous sword was something straight out of a fantasy setting, so it was quite hard to know what to do with all the fancy ornaments. But it was easier to visualize moving with that sword, and he was having fun. Van noticed that too. Jin thanked him for complimenting him, but he was still no match for him. The all-kill blade was meant to be able to cut anything, but apparently it cannot cut its creator. But thanks to that, he could swing and slash without hesitation. He wondered if things would have gone differently if he had given his all to become stronger. Reach came and started licking his face. The other spirits were congratulating him for his good workout. He felt good when he was surrounded by those beauties. Rudale came with the book and informed him that, as expected, the book was based on incorrect assumptions. He told him to go to the temple in Thelmist after 7 days. That was an island south of the Caval Peninsula. Rudale promised to go and prepare a proper book for him. Jin realized that he would need to save some money to make sure he could buy this book in a week. Pal noticed that he planted quite a few crops. She said that she was going to help him out, and in exchange she wanted him to offer some of the harvest to her. Ish peeked out of nowhere and included himself. Jin was confused because they liked bread and salt, and spirits were unable to taste the things they eat. Ish explained that they could taste the things that they take an interest in. The crops he had planted here were interesting enough. He was still confused as to how that worked, but he didn't ask anything further. The next day, he went to Naladid and enjoyed his delicious truffle pasta. Naladid was a trade city with all those different delicacies. He came here today to sell the hide and horns of the fox he took down before. Thanks to the supply and demand, it could be sold for more here than in Canaan. Thanks to that, his money situation was under control. The next stop was a weapon shop. He wanted to try and find a similar sword to the all-kill blade, but that seemed difficult. He found something that might be similar. The shop owner greeted him and informed him that they had spirit weapons in the pack too. Jin was confused, so he explained that they were weapons that a spirit had possessed, or spirits that had become a weapon. Van made the all-kill blade, so this could mean it was a spirit weapon as well. The man added that the strength of the sword varies depending on the strength of the spirit, and they don't require maintenance either. Instead, you keep it in a place that the spirit likes. There were plenty of people who kept them in the bow of spirits. He usually keeps the all-kill blade in storage, but he thought about taking it out more often. They didn't give him any warnings on how to use it, so it should be fine, as he thought. At home, it became his daily routine to check on the expedition teams by scrying through a basin. These guys were probably the gold-ranked party led by Amadeo that Letze was talking about before. The image was clear because he had asked every spirit in their general vicinity to help. He was surrounded by women, and as far as Jin remembered, he was a duo with the mage. There were other groups like that too, but they were a bit more reserved. Those three seemed to be accompanied by spirits. He wondered if the lady in the robe was a magician. It looked like there was a light attribute spirit with her. For the archer, it was probably a green wind spirit. There were branches tangled around the bow, so it was probably more accurate to say she was a spirit weapon used, rather than having a spirit familiar. Then as for Amadeo, no matter how he looked at it, that was a prairie dog. He wondered where it came from and if it was from this continent. He had so many questions, but it was pretty cute seeing its butt wiggle like that. He then wanted to see what Ash and the others were doing. They were all together. There was Azu, Dean's spirit, as well as the spirit that was obsessed with chins. The butler's spirit familiar must be nearby as well. He remembered previously that Dean's spirit would hand around his boots, which was quite confusing. In any case, just to be safe, he left his spirit to Letze. But he didn't expect her to groom his beard like that. He would rather not have his spirit develop weird kinks. The worst part was that it was happening without Letze knowing about it. Come to think of it, the spirits of the gold-ranked party were pretty big. Seemed like they were not influenced as much by the black spirits as a result. He wondered how the gold-ranked party was doing now, and they were fighting a lizard. Amadeo split the lizard in two without any struggle. The woman with the robe started casting some magic on the lizard and took it down easily. Jin was amazed by them. He then noticed someone walking alone. He wondered if he was another member of the expedition force. Something seemed off about him. The guy took out his sword and approached the archer girl from behind. But before he could slash her, she dodged his move and stabbed him using her dagger. Jin was surprised. She was an archer, but she was also skilled at close combat. But Jin noticed that the guy was being possessed by a black spirit. The black spirit started coming at the archer, but it was repelled. After a failed possessing attack, the spirit returned to the previous host. They become more powerful after possessing a target, but cannot sustain that power without a host. He wondered what led to this person being possessed in the first place. He might have been attacking other members for a while, and the archer was able to see the reactions of nearby spirits. He wondered what she was going to do to the black spirit. This made him realize that he didn't know how to defeat a black spirit. He wouldn't know because he had been forming contracts with them. But he was sure you could defeat a spirit with a spirit weapon, but didn't know what happens if the spirit possesses a person. His questions were answered. The archer was going to kill the host. Jin was shaken to his core after he saw her killing him like that. He thought he understood this world, but here lives were cheap and violence was commonplace. He was shocked by the realization that he was so close to death at any moment. He tried to snap out of it by slapping himself. Spirits cannot be seen or touched by ordinary people. Even when possessing a host, damaging the host would also damage the spirit possessing them. He realized that the archer didn't attack the spirit when it left the host, even though she had a spirit weapon. Another member of the expedition team came and he was shocked to see him die. But when he sat next to the dead guy, the black spirit went for him. Archer started telling her something. Jin realizes that Archer cannot see the black spirits. In the first place, there may be different ways of seeing spirits. It may just be a color blur. Or maybe you could only see a certain type of spirit. This was his first time seeing a spirit possess a human. It was protruding from his body. He wondered if it was because it was just starting to possess him. He also wondered if the other two members of the gold-ranked party could see spirits. Letza said that Amadeo could see them, but it was likely very difficult to see a spirit that was possessed by another person. If they could see them, he assumed that they would quarantine immediately. He was trying to decide what he should do. It wasn't like he had an obligation to solve the problem. He had learned a lot there and he could sort it out in the future. But Ash and the others were nearby, so he couldn't just sit there and do nothing. He had made up his mind and taken action. He put on a robe and started talking with light and shadow spirits. He asked them to make the shadows darker near his face, so people couldn't see who he was, then asked them to lift him about 10 centimeters above the ground. Also, he told them to keep his hood in place so his feet weren't seen. Now that he was ready, it was time to head out there. Meanwhile, in the forest, Amadeo was informed of what happened. The archer girl stated that she wasn't quite sure herself. As she was trying to explain herself, Jin appeared right next to her. They were all shocked and asked him who he was and where he came from. Jin was smiling under his hoodie because it wasn't like they would recognize him even if he said he was Jin. But there was a problem. Ash and the others were there. He just hoped that they didn't recognize him when his face was obscured by the robe. He told spirits to change his voice and responded that he was there for the thing inside that person. It was the guy who had black spirit in him. As he was trying to understand what was going on, Jean put his hands on him and realized that his fingers were going inside the body. He assumed that he was just imagining things. With one move, he took out the black spirit. The magician woman asked if he was being possessed, but it was the dead guy who was acting strangely. Before he responded, he noticed that the man was still alive. He started to use his healing ability to save him. As he opened his eyes, they were all shocked because that was a miracle. Jin was relieved. Even he couldn't believe he recovered from that. The magician woman asked who he was once again, and wondered what was with those spirits around him. Come to think of it, it wasn't common at all for people to make contracts with spirits. He usually tells them to stay at a distance to not draw attention to themselves. They had helped him a lot today, and it looked like she really could see spirits. He eventually responded that he didn't know where that spirit came from, but she should keep an eye on the initial host. He noticed that Ash was staring holes into him, so he wanted to get out of there before he was found out. He turned his back when Amadeo told him to wait, but it was too late because he used his transfer ability to leave there. He was finally relieved. It looked like that black spirit didn't get too far. He decided to make a contract with it and let it go deeper into the woods. This spirit was the biggest one he had seen so far. Actually, that horse was bigger, but that horse, even when turning black, still had some semblance of self-control. Black spirits seem to consume other spirits in order to make up for the parts they were missing themselves. If they don't continually feed, they will continue to waste away. The horse said that if a spirit forms a contract or finds a host, its weakness will subside. The craving feeling persists, but the pain eases and they can eventually control their urges. Speaking of which, he had been stopping his contracted black spirits from consuming each other. He decided to head home, and when he did, he thanked the spirits for helping him. He wondered what happened in the meantime he had been away so checked. He was surprised to see them prostrating because they were the ones who almost killed them. He supposed he was being possessed, so they made the first move on the archer. He decided to ask Ash and the others once they got back. Just asking how it went should be natural enough. In the next scene, we see Denoso freaking out. Jin told him to shut up and take his clothes off. The kids wondered what was going on and he asked them to give him a hand. They made Denoso take his clothes off and Jin asked his wife to wash the clothes he brought. They were quite good quality, so she asked if it was okay if they got dirty when they look after the animals. He said that he would give them to her, and he also told her to clean Denoso too. Denoso was puzzled as to why he was there, and why he was the only one like that. Shiva didn't even bother him and promised to scrub him clean over at the well. When they left, he started. He was there at the Denoso house today for a reason. He had been observing and studying carpenters and masons the last few days. The more he saw, the more unsanitary it became, and he just had to do something about it. It was common to see filth on the streets. That was the reason why there were steps at the front door, to stop it from seeping under the door on rainy days. Horse manure and all that other stuff were making him pretty angry. The Denoso family sleeps on a straw mattress covered by a cloth. Other farmers might not even sleep on a straw mattress covered by cloth. Other farmers might not even sleep on the cloth, just bare straw in their barns. There are a lot of people in this world who just live in the moment, making decisions based on the now, as life is fleeting. He was not the kind of person who stepped in to do what was right, but at the very least he would like to be able to help his friends stay clean. While thinking about that, he felt like cleaning up, which is what led him to come here today. The Denoso family was probably the cleanest farming family out there. Other farmers, good-hearted or not, eventually let their surroundings fall into squalor. When he finished cleaning, Denoso was amazed by how clean it was. The only thing left was the repair of the shutters. Denoso said he would take care of that tomorrow, and he asked him to stay for tea. They told the kids to get a few eggs and clean up the quail. While playing cards, Denoso asked if he liked cleaning. When Jin responded that he didn't enjoy it at all, Denoso wondered why he did all that. He said that there were some places that he could not stand being unsanitary, so he went there on a whim to clean up. This sounded a little mean. Shiva came after preparing a good meal. When Jin asked what it was, they said that it was porotur with quail and leeks, which was Shiva's signature dish. These leeks had absorbed all that flavor. He used his appraisal ability to see the details. He decided to try and add this to his recipe repertoire. They all started eating. The Denoso family was the embodiment of what Zhang considered to be the ideal family. One day he wanted to have a warm family scene just like that one. But this dream seemed pretty impossible for him. In the next scene, Jin is in Thelmist. He heard that this place was known for its lace and silver work. He decided to go to the temple before shopping. He entered the temple and stated that he wanted some books there. The man who was in charge there was waiting for him. He knew Jin was the one foretold by Rudel. He said that he received a prophecy, but Jin was confused. Rudel said it to his face, so he assumed that counted as a prophecy. The old man leads him to a stone statue of Rudel. He suddenly opened a secret door, and a little boy appeared. They looked like Rudel, but slightly different. Jin was so puzzled by what he was seeing. He wanted to take a closer look and noticed that he was not holding a candlelight. They were light emitted from small spirits. He figured that the kid was also a spirit. To be able to create the illusion of a flame when it didn't exist requires substantial power. The boy started walking and he just tagged along. He was very excited to be in a hidden passageway to a secret area. They entered a big library and the boy asked if he was looking for books about summoning spirits. He said that he did, but he would also like to know about how this place came to be. The little Rudel gave him a book and told him that it had information on this place and how to navigate it. He showed him another room that had a table and a chair and left. Without waiting any longer, he started reading the book. Long ago, one of the southern kingdoms had a book-crazed emperor who would confiscate and hoard books from any merchants. Their library was even attacked by monsters and a dragon, but Rudel transferred the library there to save the books from burning. And thus that spirit became the keeper of this library. He noticed something that surprised him. Heroes had the powers that only the Luffa previously had. He wondered who the Luffa was, and the boy appeared and gave him another book. He was so scared but decided to let it slide. The book said that long ago, a group of people founded the nation of Basa. These were the Luffa people. They had the protection of the spirits, so, while they were a small nation, they were comparatively strong. But struggles lead to their downfall, and those left without the protection of the spirits crowned the sole remaining Luff woman as their queen. These people began to call themselves the people of Luff, and when the Luff kingdom fell, the royal line fell with them. In other words, there were two different Luff people, those from the kingdom of Basa and the people of Luffa. The people of Luff are also said to be skilled with spirits, though not as adept as the Luff people and their spirit-linked lineage. And as these countries rose and fell, there was no doubt that either the Luffa people or the people of Luffa had a hand in it. He wondered if they were some kind of undying existence or secret society. When he went home, Ash came and she looked like she had an attitude. Jin noticed that her hair was wet and asked if she had taken a bath. She said that it was from a basin. He said that if she had let him know earlier, he would have boiled some water. She said that she was in such bad condition that she didn't feel right asking to borrow it. Jin was quite aware of Ash's disposition at that point. After leaving that island and taking a bath, the dirt and the filth on him were caked and thick. Their expedition this time was longer than their last trip, so they weren't able to bathe. He said that he would boil some water now and asked where her butler was. She said that note was washing up right now. She apologized for bothering him, but she really couldn't stand this feeling. Jin made some tea for her while the water boiled. Ash thanked him but told him to keep his distance from her because she might be smelling. He didn't mind that but still respected her request. She then took out a bag and gave it to him. It was a magic iron. His sword was made from ordinary steel, so forging swords with magic iron results in a much stronger weapon. Jin accepted the gift and casually asked how the forest was. The first thing Ash said was that there was someone like him in the forest. Jin asked what kind of person they were with an unsteady voice. She explained that he had spirits with him and then he grabbed that spirit. They were so kind. Jin was flattered. Ash said that that wasn't the only similarity. They didn't seem to have a dominant element. That was actually because the spirits were concealing him through that robe. As Ash explained to him about the possessed man and the archer who shot him, as he listened to her, Jin asked how the man got possessed by the black spirit because that was what he wondered. Ash responded that there was a war going on between two nations in the Middle Plains. One of the nations, Chaldea, was said to have used magic on a large scale, so that might be the cause. Because of the long conflict, many have died. Jin asked if they would know that there would be some collateral damage from them even if they could not see the spirits. She agreed with him because it happened in the past as well. Jin was almost sure this nation was a bunch of idiots. Black spirits tend to flee so they don't attack the person who uses the magic, but she doubts Chaldea will have a good harvest this year. It seemed like Rosa the sorcerer was on the lookout for that stranger that looked like him. She was saying they might be descendants of the people of Luffa. Jin was speechless. He wasn't a descendant of the people of Luffa, so there must be a misunderstanding. Note came and brought some firewood. He thanked him because even most nobles wouldn't even have access to amenities like he did. He was amazed that this soap didn't have a gamey smell. Jin said that once Ash was finished, he could take a nice long soak and in the meantime they could bake something to eat after. They had time, so he thought about what to bake. Jin asked about the Luff-esque person out in the forest. Note responded that they had heard rumors that a hero had been summoned in the distant kingdom. He supposed the kingdom wanted to find them as a countermeasure to the hero. He had thought of it a flight of fancy to think that the people of Luf were still living in this world, but they had hit something of a lucky stake there. That was completely wrong. Jin asked if he was going to stay away from the guild for a while, and he confirmed him. He said that if they asked Ash to assist them, they would be put in an awkward position. They would be leaving after a short rest, so as long as they don't get caught up with them, they would be fine. In that case, Jin decided to ask Ash to help him out somehow. She prioritizes requests made to her first, after all. He wondered if he should make himself known and say he wasn't a descendant of the Luff people, but decided to think about that later. Now it was time to bake. He cooked slowly, turning often so it didn't burn on one side. Ash started peeking from the door, and when he noticed her, she asked what he was making. He said that he was making castella pancakes and a meat pie. Ash's eyes sparkled after hearing pancakes. Jin told her that they would eat together once Note finished his bath. After everything was ready, he served them the pie and the pancakes. Ash's cheeks got red when she took a bite. Jin was glad to see them enjoying what he baked. As agreed on previously, they all met up for lunch after they returned from the expedition. The expedition team seemed to miss eating fresh meat, as they were stuck eating a lot of dried meat during the expedition. Jin was still surprised that they still ordered so much meat. Ash wondered if that place made meat pies. She still has that meat pie from before on her mind. Dean remembered that while there were two-horned and tree-horned monsters this time around as well, one of them was a demonic wolf. Demonic monsters can be recognized by the dark haze that covers their eyes. There are many different types, but the dark haze usually doesn't spread and instead increases the size of their horns. However, if the dark haze does spread and cover the monster's entire body, it becomes a complete demon. When that happens, it's completely taken over by the spirit and becomes incomparably stronger. Chris said things weren't as bad as he thought they would be. The guild might have had an inkling of this kind of development. Hence, they had 3 gold-ranked adventurers participate. Jin didn't know that the sorceress Rosa was of gold rank as well. He noticed that Chris and Dean were staring at him. They seemed surprised that he was eating the meat like that. Jin told them to continue with their story. Letza's opinion on this topic was that this was all because Haldia had been using an excessive amount of magic. Rosa and the other two were talking about a hero being summoned in Shumtas. It seemed like Amadeo was planning to head out again and wanted to gather a bunch of adventurer parties. It had been a while since the last time a large expedition force was formed. Note asked if Amadeo asked them to join them, and Jin responded that he did, but he declined because he thought their person was a ladies' clash. Dean asked Chris, and he said that as a knight he could not possibly turn down the requests of a beautiful person in need of aid. Plus, it was better to be the head of a dog than the tail of a lion. Dean asked Ash, and she turned him down too. Jin was glad he discussed this with Note the other day. Letzi didn't even get an invite at all. Jin stated that this just meant they didn't have a good eye for people. He laughed it out, but Jin meant that. He thought he was just choosing people who had spirits accompanying them. Dean mentioned that with Amadeo's cronies it gets a bit messy. He asked if they found out that he turned down his invitation, and he responded that he might have to go regardless. They just told him to stay safe out there. Chris asked Jin if he would accompany them, and he said that he didn't want to camp outside so he was not going. Letza mentioned that the guild gifted a few of his bags to the gold-ranked party and they were very well received. Orders were flooding in. Jin was happy to hear that. After their lunch with the others, Jin went to ask if there were any houses for sale at the back of the Fox. The back of the Fox was the name given to the street where both he and Ash were staying. The butler recently mentioned that one of the lots had become vacant. The woman asked if he was currently renting and he said that he did, and he wanted to know about the people in the neighborhood before committing to buying a house. She asked him to wait for a moment and left somewhere. Jin was confused because he was just asking on a whim. She returned with lots of books and asked if he would be interested in buying one of those houses. Jin thought he had to be silver ranked or higher to purchase a house. She responded that both the Commercial Guild and the Apothecary Guild had vouched for him. That means they trust him if he does a lot of business with them. She said that he could buy the house as it is now, or he could go for a house that was a bit nicer. He was very happy with the house he was staying in, so if he could afford it, he would take it. She mentioned that a house at the back of the Fox was also available. It was owned by a guild and they were planning to put it on the market once the expedition ended. That made sense. Right now people are concerned about safety from monsters, so a house near the outer walls wouldn't sell. She also mentioned that there were rumors that the gold-ranked adventurer Amadeo was looking for someone. It was looking more and more likely that he would stay in town even after the expedition was over, so it was possible they would acquire it for their retinue. Jin was annoyed, so he took that house as well. He would just renovate it and then lease it out to a more permanent resident. And just like that, he purchased 2 houses. While walking out, he was thinking about what kind of renovations he should do. He came across Letzi and asked what he was doing there and if he hadn't gone along with the expedition force. He responded that the majority of them were from out of town, so he was sitting this one out. Mr. Gold's rank was a bit of a nuisance, but Letzi joked that he should be thankful that he was taking care of those monsters. He said that Dean and Chris had been pulled along, and Ash was out hunting bears. He knew about Ash since she lived close to him. That reminded Letza to ask if he could let him know if a house or a room became available. Jin asked if he was moving out, and he said that he had recently ranked up so he was finally able to buy a house. Unlike Jin, Letza properly worked his way up from the bottom to be able to acquire a house, so he felt pretty bad. Jin suddenly had an idea and asked if he could help him with something tomorrow. The next day, Letza came to his house. He asked if both he and Ash had a house there and wondered if he was renting out any of the rooms. Jin had heard of people renting out rooms and having access to their wells. He responded that he made potions now and then and would rather not share a well with anyone. There were a lot of things he would rather not have people know, but at the same time he would still like to be able to help people out. Jin asked what kind of house he was looking for. Letza said he would probably rent out the 3rd floor and attic when, ideally, he wanted 3 stories with a storefront. Jin asked why he wanted a storefront and he said that it would be for his wife. He didn't even know he was a married man, but he corrected him by saying that he hadn't met anyone like that. He said that getting a wife would come naturally, right after getting your own house for sure. Jin asked if that meant there was someone he liked right now, expecting that it was time for a love story. But Letza responded that if he was to spend time searching for a partner, he wouldn't have time for work. Jin took a break and prepared lunch for both of them. Letza liked the food and wondered what that faint sourness was. When Jin said it was tomatoes and olives, he asked what a tomato was. He forgot that he hadn't found any tomatoes in this world. Jin told Letza that he shouldn't just eat stuff without asking what was in it first, but he responded that if it was him who made it, then it was fine. Jin was flattered, but it made him feel a bit shy. The topic changed and Letza asked if he thought they were going to cause trouble. Jin responded that getting too involved with the gold ranks and their followers was sure to bring about trouble. Letza figured that he just wanted to avoid being at the same party because it would be a problem if he found out that he could see spirits. Jin agreed, but then realized that he had never told him that he could see spirits. He had no idea how he knew that he could see spirits. As Jin was just standing there, puzzled, Letzi smirked and asked if he knew what he was talking about. He said that he could tell because Chris didn't call him by his name, but no one else noticed. Come to think of it, Chris had never used Jin's name, and he never used Ash's name either. Letzi told him to just ask him to use his actual name. He might be a bit strange, but he was a nice guy. Chris seemed to get a lot of requests from the higher-ups. He also gets more because Dean turned some of them down. There was no doubt that he was a good guy. Though he was a bit too loud and boisterous for his tastes, it was a shame that he didn't know the reasoning behind why he was a man who trusted his intuition. Jin said if he told him why, everyone would know he could see spirits, but he was not a fan of holding this over someone. He wondered if it was not a secret because the people themselves didn't know. He asked Letza what he should do. Letza started laughing because he was in a real pickle, but he said that he knew there was something special about Chris, and Jin just confirmed his suspicions. Jin was shocked that he was just bluffing. He had Jin in the palm of his hand the entire time. Letza promised to keep an eye on the gold ranks for him and reminded him to rely on others sometimes. He thanked me for the meal and got back to work. Soon after, while tending to the crops, Jin continued to name spirits around the area the expedition force would pass by. He also managed to, with Ash's help, create a medicine for an eye disease. This was unheard of, so when he told the commercial guild, it caused quite a stir. After finishing the toilet work, he would have to remodel the new house. He had a lot of work to do, but first he was going to do his part as a person of Luf. He disguised himself and transferred to the forest. Other nations had started expeditions and hunted in the forest. Using spirits, these nations share information about the current state of the forest. Using that to his advantage, he had been going around the forest disguised to have them discuss sightings of his actions in the forest. He started searching for them and found them in a second. They were adventurers from the Empire, and they were surrounded by 2-horned foxes and a 3-horned badger. There were owls and bats too, and there was even a bear. That was way too many monsters. This forest was filled with them. The hunters were becoming the hunted. Come to think of it, Kana from the guild was saying that these days not enough survey teams were sent out into the forest. The bear attacked one of the adventurers, so Jin didn't just stop there and watch. He took action. He saved them from all the monsters easily. They were all shocked and asked who he was. He used his healing ability to heal their injuries. He told them not to push their luck in this forest and started walking away. The other adventurers were crying from the happiness that their friends were in one piece. That was getting annoying, so Jin decided to head home. And just like that, he had built up a reputation for showing up in this forest. Like that, he would spread rumors that he was heading northwest past the Black Mountains. He would have to ask some spirits to help spread this misinformation to Rosa and the other adventurers. After creating medicine, reading, and masquerading as a person of Luff for 2 months, Jin wanted Note to cut his hair, but Note turned him down. Letzi asked if everything was alright. Asking something like that out of the blue made him think that he wanted them to lend him some money. Jin was puzzled, so he explained that he seemed like one of those people resorting to selling everything for money. He said that he had plenty of cash, but he just thought he would ask a skilled and nimble butler to help him out. He dislikes getting his hair cut by the people at the bathhouses. Ash said that his hair was clean and quite fair, so it would be a waste to cut it. There was nothing special about his hair, so he wondered if it was something about the water. Letza said he was of good birth, so he suggested growing it longer, which was a popular thing these days. But he didn't want to deal with washing it. He had an idea of shaving his head, but Letza told him not to shave it all off and that he would help him cut it later. Jin was once again shocked at Letza because he was saying stuff as if he were reading his mind. They had known each other for a short time, so he wondered if Letza was sharp or if he was just easy to read. Note suggested hiring a servant, but that was not a good idea. Dean and Chris came, and they both seemed happy to see them all together. Letza was surprised that they had finished the request and congratulated them. The noisy boys ordered some wine, and Note asked how Amadeo and the rest were. Dean said it was 3 gold ranks. Amadeo was pretty strong, and he meshed well with the other 2. Chris admitted that he was quite jealous of their spirit weapon and wanted to be as loved one day. Jin was about to say that that was a grand statement, but Letza told him to wait. He said that you could get a spirit weapon, but if it didn't like you, then it was basically useless. When you can properly use the abilities of a spirit weapon, you are said to be loved by the weapon. Jin was surprised that they worked like that. He decided to do some extra special maintenance on the all-kill blade when he got home. Dean said his cronies just cannot help themselves. He knew they were in it for themselves, but they were throwing a lot of blind faith around. Jin was glad he didn't go. Chris continued to explain that this time there were also 4 heroes and the Empire let them do whatever they wanted. Jin was interested. Chris said that their intelligence gathering skills shouldn't be underestimated. He thought it was just his sister and those sibling friends of hers that became heroes, but apparently there were more people involved. The gods didn't say anything, but at the same time he wasn't exactly in a position to ask about that. They didn't even mention his sister until the Ball of Light let it slip. Regardless of their abilities, heroes didn't start out stronger than everyone else. They were meant to build their foundations, start drawing spirits to them, and then get stronger from there. But to hear that the 4 of them could do whatever they wanted was frustrating. Ash heard that spirits were less common the further west you went. He asked where the person responsible for reining them in was. Ash seemed so angry. Dean didn't know if he would go that far. The note said that the last appearance of heroes was 300 years ago. There were a lot of things that they just didn't know. Ignoring the specifics of what they had done, their actions had, according to the guild, greatly increased the chance of monster floods. The large-scale magic used in last year's war was unprecedented. Chris heard that the previous survey part found no abnormalities. It seemed like they had all come out of the woodwork at once. Dean wanted to avoid talking about that kind of serious stuff for now, and told Jean that they were going to head out to see who could drink the most. If Jean wins, he promises to take him to Moonlit Manor, and if Dean wins, Jean will have to tell him one of his secrets. Chris wanted to join in just to learn Jean's secret and offered to introduce him to Heavenly Bliss. Jean had no idea who Heavenly Bliss was or what Moonlit Manor was. Letsa seemed pretty into this bet because they were both super high-class brothels. Jean said he didn't care about the bet, and told Chris to use his name from now on. Ash told him to call her by her name as well. Talking about brothels in front of Ash was a bit uncomfortable. Even the expression on the butler's face was kind of scary. Ash stated that those brothels weren't high class at all. Jean was shocked when she said that. Dean and Chris were wasted after drinking that much alcohol. Everything went downhill. The butler didn't join in, but Letzi got caught in the crossfire. Jean was the only one who survived, so he had to get those guys home. Note agreed and said he didn't know Jean could hold his liquor so well. He used his healing ability and was just a bit tipsy. Note asked if he could look after Ash while he cleaned up. Jean said he could do that, and then noticed Ash. Her face was all red and it was obvious that she was drunk. Note confirmed him and mentioned that it was quite a rare sight. He asked if she was okay to walk and she said she was. He knew she was capable, but he still wondered if he should stay behind longer to help clean up. He stopped her from walking into a wall. With a trembling voice, she responded that she was fine. Jean held her shoulder and helped her walk because she would walk straight into a wall if he didn't do anything. While walking, Jean asked if something was wrong. When he looked at her face, he realized how she looked. Jean looked at her in wonder, but the only thing that came out of her mouth was a mumble. She then called his name again, and when he responded, she said, "Brothel?" Jean was confused, but she didn't say anything and just nodded her head. She then said the word hair, which confused him a lot more. But he realized that her face had really softened, and her shoulders had become more slender as well. And her dazed eyes from drinking made him feel a bit weird. Jean ended up telling her to not get drunk in public because it was dangerous. She frowned and didn't say anything once again. The next day, while cooking, Jean wondered if everyone was all right after the last night. He was sure the guys would be fine, but he wanted to do something good for Ash's hangover. He knocked on their door and he asked Ash, who didn't look good, how she was feeling. He said that he brought some bread and sausages, but her stomach was hurting, so it wasn't a good idea. In that case, Jean wanted to borrow their kitchen. He prepared a warm drink with ginger and citrus syrup. When she tasted it, she was surprised to find that it was both spicy and sweet. Jean told her to take it easy and drink plenty of water. She apologized for worrying him and informed him that she was feeling better now. After hearing that, Jean immediately decided to go home. She stopped him and reminded him that he had promised to take him to the Bow of Spirit time and wanted to do it after she got over this hangover. Jean agreed to go with her, as he didn't have any pressing matters. That was one of the things she mentioned when they first met. The following day, Ash and Jean met up again and she was feeling much better. Jean also noticed that Azu was happy and enjoying himself while Ash was frowning like usual. She asked if that was his first time visiting the Bow of Spirits here in Canaan, and he responded that he had been here once to buy some water for use in medicine. She wondered if that was the place they went to remove the influence of Dean's sister's spirit, and it was. Shortly after they arrived, the Bow of Spirits was the most prominent building in the town plaza. This seemed to be the case in every major city, not just Canaan. Ash pointed at the workroom and the manager's room. She then said the courtyard was further in. Jean was amazed. He wondered if that branch near the fountain was the bow that this place was named after. Ash explained that the Bow of Spirits refers to a branch gifted from the king's bow. The place where this branch rests is called the Bow of Spirits. John wanted to ask more about this, but this seemed like common knowledge in this world. He hasn't done his further reading on the Bow of Spirits yet, as he had priorities for learning about spirits and the history of the world. Ash mentioned that Azel didn't have a king's bow, so the one here in Canaan was just a lesser bow. Azel was the country to which Canaan belongs, so Jean wondered if that meant this branch was an imitation or a fake. Seeing him so confused and lost in his thoughts, Ash explained that the king's bow was a sacred tree for spirits. After many hardships, people arrived at the tree, swore an oath, then placed the branch and created the foundations of a new nation. It was a place where good spirits came to stay safe from bad spirits. She seemed to find out about Jean's ignorance about spirits. Jin remembered that when they first met, he already made it known he had no idea about the Bow of Spirits. Ash continued to explain that the Bow of Spirits was less powerful than the King's Bow, but it had a similar effect. It was difficult to make it to the King's Bow and keep the subsequent oaths that you must take. Breaking your oath would result in both the King's Bow and the Bow of Spirits disappearing. Shlumtas, Pasteur, and Marina were the 3 nations that had inherited a King's Bow. John's older sister was sent there. He asked if Kanam's lesser bow could still function, and Ash responded that by offering magic stones, a field of magic that was comfortable for spirits was made, and a temple could create these branches. But it was quite taxing. As they were talking, Jin noticed a girl smiling at them. She placed magic stones inside the basin. He wondered how long those stones could sustain these spirits. He asked if they could just maintain the field without magic stones. Ash responded that the person and the type of stone offered would affect the spirits that appear, but without the stones, the magic would dissipate and the bow would disappear. Spirits started approaching. He now understands how that worked. Spirits playing in the water turn the water into holy water, which is then used elsewhere. Ash mentioned that at night, instead of a water basin, they light a fire. The cinders produced were great for smithing, and the ashes, once scattered over the earth, resulted in better harvests. He said she should see the bows of spirits at night. Ash's cheeks got red, and she said that she could show him around some other time as well. Jin left that to her and then realized that they just agreed to a night date. But it was Ash, so it didn't give off a feminine vibe. Suddenly, Azu fled over the water and started playing with it. Jin realized that even though he saw her as a boy, whenever she wasn't frowning, she was quite the beauty herself. A while later, we see Jin checking on his field. He was quite satisfied with his field coming along nicely. He planted a variety of different plants from both this world and the pantry. It was too bad the vegetables from the pantry only grow in the mountains. He wondered if he should crossbreed them, but he wasn't sure if he was proficient enough to artificially cross-pollinate. Spirits started coming for the peas, cabbages, and Italian parsley. Jean noticed Riche trying to eat onions, but he told him that dogs cannot eat onions. Rudal appeared out of nowhere and told him that Riche was not a dog. Jean wondered if he was acting like that because Riche used to be their leader. He must have a lot of thoughts to unpack about him. Pal and Ish were also there and praised how lovely his vegetables were. Ish had been watering the fields for a while now. Pal started walking past the strawberries and Jean watched them grow as she walked past. After 3 of them appeared, it became a scene out of a fantasy story. He wondered what Rudale had been doing this entire time. He was just standing near Riche. Jean remembered something and asked them to try some of the vegetables. They said that if they were interested in the subject matter, they would be able to taste it. He gathered some veggies and fruits and tried them. He waited patiently to get a good reaction from them. And he was not disappointed. They really liked the taste. He was really happy that his vegetable dishes were on the cards, and it seemed like Rudal liked the taste of onions. In the next scene, Jean's door knocked, and it was Letzi, Note, and Ash. Today was the housewarming party for the new house. He received a lot of help from everyone and finished the house quickly. While he was technically the owner, he had just asked Note to handle things. He vets any potential tenants for him, if only just for Ash's sake. Since his brother, the Duke, might make a move on them since they ended up escaping. They had left that country since that incident. And nothing happened since then, but he said he was targeted multiple times in that country. Letza gets to stay there for a reduced price. The butler immediately decided to rent it out to Letza. After the first expedition, the prices went up and he thought he was bones. Jean responded that it was cheaper there because it was near the outskirts, closer to the wild. Letza said if he were to buy a house, it would be one he would stay in for the rest of his life, so he was glad to have a cheaper rental until that happened. Jean asked if he was going to go wife hunting after buying a house, and he responded that he wasn't at that stage yet. Ash assumed that if he bought a house, that meant he was looking for a wife. They started exploring the house. The first floor had the living room, the bathroom, and a room for storage. He was amazed that this place had a bathtub and a walled-off bathroom. Jean hated that this world had its toilets out in the open. He reminded Letza of the conditions for renting out this house. He must bathe at least once a day and remember to clean the place twice a year. Letza promised to do that and then mentioned that he was amazing. They were working so hard at it, but then he went and completed it all by himself. Jean actually installed a bunch of things with storage and asked some spirits to help out, but he couldn't just say that, so he only said he was pretty fit. Moving on to the second floor, which had 3 rooms, Letza was shocked that there was a bed there. He seemed to be in love with that bed. Jean didn't want to put in a straw bed because that might attract insects. They found a door but couldn't open it when they pushed it. Jean told them to slide it instead of pushing it. Ash opened the door and she was amazed because it let them open the door from either side, and they could even see from room to room. Sliding doors could also be removed easily, so they were not very popular in this world. He said that there was no tenant on the 3rd floor, but it was the same as this one. The ground floor was a common area with some storage. Just like Letza asked, they came with locks so he could keep his weapons there. Now that the tour was over, he asked if they should have lunch now. They were all looking forward to what he was going to prepare for them. Seeing them so lively made him happy too. He prepared a delicious feast for them. This time he made a gratin with morel mushrooms. They were technically poisonous, but if you cooked them through, they were edible. It was amazing how passionate the Japanese were about their food, eating poisonous things like pufferfish and the like. He didn't think this world was ready for that yet. As they were eating, they kept complimenting the things they liked about the food. After they ate, Jin brought dessert, which was chiffon cake with maple cream. Everyone seemed to like that too. Sweets were usually preserved or cooked hard in there, so they were pretty surprised. Jin remembered that they were also surprised at the castella pancakes. Sweets were pretty rare, and they were usually quite heavy. Letza mentioned that they usually only get to have sweets made by artisans during special holidays, so it was a luxury for them. Ash said Khanum had had a recent influx of maple-flavored sweets, and she heard there was even a dedicated pastry chef in Naladid. It seemed that maple syrup was a specialty of the capital. Jin was wondering why they didn't just plant sugar maple trees in Khanum, but it wasn't that simple. He offered some more maple syrup, but Note and Letzi didn't want any, while Ash, who liked sweets a bit too much, said she wanted. In the next scene, somewhere in the forest, Donoso's daughter was trying to protect his brother from two grown men, and Jin was there too. It had been a while since he had seen the Donoso family, so he wondered what was going on. The men threatened them with their fathers and told them to come to them, but before they knew it, they were all passed out. Jin knocked them down and asked them if they were okay. They hugged him while crying their eyes out. He asked what was going on, and they said that a bunch of people came and something happened to their dad. He asked if that was the reason why they ran, and they confirmed him. She grabbed En and Baku and ran to the barn. While they were talking to their dad, their mom sneaked over and told them to run. But then they saw Baku and caught him. She started crying because she didn't know what to do. Jin patted her head to comfort her and told her that for now, they were going to find her father. But whatever happened, she must be quiet. Even so, a sister desperately protecting her brother made him feel a bit conflicted about this because of his own sister. At Donoso's house, they were captured. The situation seemed bad. Donoso was on the floor and his wife was being held hostage too. And on the other side, another person had the other twin. It was going to be hard to take care of all of them at the same time. When one of them asked if the king of wolves, Balmor, had gotten rusty, if he remembered right, Balmor was the adventurer Dean was talking about. When they hurt Donoso suddenly, the big sister couldn't help but call for her father. After that, Jin had to take action and punch one of them. The one who was holding the wife seemed shocked that she took this advantage and saved herself. She started attacking men one by one. Jin was shocked at how strong she was. As Shia started taking down and killing the people who captured them, Jin froze. He was shocked by how strong she was. The man had been skewered clean and quickly. Even though he saw the entire thing with his own eyes, he was still having a hard time believing what just happened. Shia's children went to their mom, crying their eyes out. Meanwhile, Donoso was still on the floor, tied up, and he screamed for Shia to untie him first. After that, Jin took care of Donoso. His wrist looked bad, so Jin thought it hurt so much, but he said that he was evading the worst of it, so it wasn't as bad as it looked. An odd silence followed this conversation, and Donoso figured that he wanted to say something. Jin wasn't sure if it would be okay, but he permitted him to say it. Jin took out a spare potion and gave it to him. Donoso apologized for dragging him into this. That came out of nowhere, but his face was looking pale. This was his second time seeing someone die, and in the middle of all this chaos, with his wife dispatching that attacker, Shia and the children were seemingly fine now. But he supposed that was common sense for that world. That's why they were okay with it. She showed a completely different level of resolve. He just knocked out that one guy because he didn't want to kill him. The best thing to do would probably have been to put them all to sleep with magic. It completely slipped his mind to use magic in that situation. While he was thinking that Donoso was calling him and asking if he was listening, Jin came back to reality and asked what he was saying. Donoso's face got serious. He said that En had storage skills. Jin was shocked but tried to keep it calm and listened to him. Donoso said that he could use storage, but Jin was still puzzled. The kids were peeking from the door, and seeing him so unbothered, they started explaining to him that En could fit an entire desk into his storage skill, and it was really rare to be able to use storage. Nobles would kidnap you in the blink of an eye if they knew. Jin did know that it was pretty convenient. It was fine for merchants, but it was dangerous when you considered that you could snuggle weapons and the like with impunity. Donoso continued and explained that when En was blessed by spirits and acquired the storage skill, they were in a temple, so people immediately found out. They had been after them ever since then. Jin asked if they were going to pack up and leave because it was a tough situation. Jin felt sad that they were leaving, but Donoso corrected him that they were not going to run anymore and they would head to Khanum. He asked why they chose Khanum, and he responded that Shiva and he used to be adventurers, and they were pretty famous. Come to think of it, it was the reason why the gods recommended him go to Kanam. It was a place with the least amount of interference from the aristocracy and the temples. Denoso mentioned that Shiva was from a noble family and then became an adventurer when they eloped. The story was pretty long, but he decided to explain. As adventurers, they could hold their own. They stopped 4 years ago when En acquired his storage skills. Adventurers work in the open, and it is easy for people to discover their whereabouts. So they had been staying in the remote areas for the past 4 years. He wanted the kids to be able to fend for themselves in case anything happened to Shiva and him. Jin asked if they were returning to their old line of work, and he confirmed that. The kids were more or less proficient at animal husbandry and hunting. En and Baku will be 8 soon, and he would like to expand their horizons. This was surprising information for Jin because he thought they were just an ordinary family of farmers. But Denoso was a great father. He took out a pot full of coins and asked what the going rate for potions was. Jin told him not to worry, but Denoso still wanted to pay for it. He started splitting the money into smaller bags to ensure they were safe there. If they split up, the kids could hire an adventurer to take them to Kanum. That was quite a lot of money, so Jin figured that must have been saved up over the years. He asked Denoso if he would like him to take them there. Shiva didn't want him to get hurt. She then noticed the potion on the table. Denoso explained that Jin gave it to him and asked her if she could make something to eat before they left. He then left the house to take care of something. Jin figured that he was talking about the bodies. It made sense to not leave any evidence behind. When Denoso left, Shiva apologized for all that and asked if it surprised him. He tried to be honest and said it did a little bit. He then got embarrassed and said he would handle the meal so she could help the kids pack up. Before he left, he asked if she could portion the food she was taking along. Shiva was surprised but then laughed and thanked him. After a while, Jin came up with lots of delicious food for them. They were all amazed by his cooking skills, as always. When Tina wanted to get better at cooking, En teased him by saying that her husband would be better at cooking than her. Hearing them teasing each other, Jin wondered if he would be able to hear this banter in Kanam. He asked how far away Kanam was from there, and Denoso said it was a month and a half with no setbacks. But they have gotten another horse from those guys, and En's storage skills would help a lot. Tina was worried that they would never see Jin again. Jin patted her head and comforted her. The other two wanted him to pat them too. Denoso said they would settle down in Kanam for a few years, then they would probably head out to a dungeon. Jin was surprised because he thought they were going to settle down for good. Come to think of it, the gods did mention dungeons at the start. After they ate, Ian complained that he couldn't fit any more inside. His storage was full and there were still lots of bags to pack. Jin wanted to take a look because he didn't know how the storage worked. He saw that a squirrel spirit was on En's shoulder, and it swallowed the bags one by one. When he looked closely, Denoso was followed by a fire dragon spirit. His wife Shiva was accompanied by a female ice spirit. It seemed these two and En had contracts with spirits. When it was time to go, Jin asked if they would like him to accompany them to Kanam, but Denoso turned him down because it was a good opportunity to travel as a family. And Jin would be in Kanam too. He was sure the Adventurers Guild would point to him and call him Mr. Luff. Jin was shocked. Denoso said he came to their place in the middle of nowhere without so much as a horse, which was pretty suspicious. Jean denied that he was no person of Luff, although he knew he was a bit suspicious. Denoso laughed and said that this might be a bit of a tough journey for the kids, but he believed they could handle it. He added that he had some idea of how strong Jin was, but he didn't want to depend on his strength when he could do it himself. Shiva joined the conversation and mentioned that they were friends after all. They ended their conversation there, and it was time to go. Before they left, Jin told Denoso to head to the streets near the back of the Fox when they got to Kanam. They said goodbye to each other. Denoso was right. It wouldn't be quite right to use his cheat there. He decided to make sure a great meal and a hot bath were waiting for them when they arrived in Kanam. He was looking forward to that. In the next scene, Jin was at Gil Rock to the southeast. They say there was an ancient archaeological site at the highest point of the abandoned city. He had encountered quite a few monsters on his way there. When he got to the place, he heard lots of surprised voices that were questioning how long it had been since the last human entered the place. It was too dark to see, but there was something out there. When the voice started talking about devouring Jin's heart, liver, and brain, he started to feel nervous. He used his light ability to see what he was around and encountered tons of pill bugs. When the place was a lot lighter, they started running away from him. He wondered if they were the ones who were talking and decided to poke them to confirm. When he poked one of them, he heard it talking again and stopped the bullying. They said that he had no idea who he was messing with, and they would devour him. He continued poking them after they threatened him. They told him that they were the descendants of spirits oppressed by the people of fire. To survive, they possessed these bodies. So they were black spirits that possessed these pill bugs. They continued to explain that they devoured the humans who came to this land. They didn't feel a thing until they ate their brains, and it gave them knowledge. Jin started thinking about exterminating them all, but they said that he was different and was wise like a sage. He asked if they had a leader. They responded that they were not just parts, they were one and whole. While they move as individuals, they think as one. But a different voice joined them and stated that if there was a leader, it would be him. Jin turned back and saw a massive and shiny bug. There were no tainted spots in its body like you would find on a monster. Its color was completely homogenized and free of imperfections. It was probably a higher-level monster. He asked if he was a pill bug too, and he responded that he was the mind, for the survival of them all, for a singular purpose. While he was explaining, Jane grabbed him. He asked what he was doing, and he explained that he just had to form a contract with him because he would feel bad just leaving them to themselves. He apologized for their hunger, but he asked them not to attack any humans. They had so many questions, so he explained that he was not saying they could not defend themselves. So if they come into their territory, they could do what they have to do. But at the same time, they didn't have to go out of their way to help them out either. The leader stated that even if they fall individually, as long as one remains, they will grow. Shen was surprised because this could mean those monsters were more dangerous than he thought. He would keep coming back unless you killed every last one. The leader told him that he should see one of them in the world. He told him to supply them with his magic power to sate their hunger. The hunger pangs were waning, and they didn't need to eat humans anymore. Jin wondered if that was thanks to his liberation skill or if it was also able to free spirits from other things. They said that if they could not eat humans, they would eat monsters. With that, they would continue to grow and become stronger. After that, they all disappeared. Jin wasn't sure if he just formed a contract with someone. He shouldn't have, but he estimated that he wouldn't see them ever again. When he returned to his home, Dean and Chris thanked him and called him a real savior. It was impossible to find a house that was fully furnished. The butler brought in Dean and Chris as new tenants, which he expected to happen. Jin remembered that a friend of his was bringing his family to Canaan sometime soon, so he asked if Letza could keep an eye out for them. Letza was pretty surprised that he had friends other than them. He thought he just disliked people, so he never thought he would have friends. It wasn't that he disliked people, he just disliked people his sister befriended. To be fair, most of the people he knew were his sisters, so he wasn't beating the allegations of disliking people. Seeing him lost in his thoughts like that, Ash and Chris started praising how good he was, and explained that people were dishonest and weren't repaying his goodwill in kind. Chris promised to show them around town when they got there. Note joined them and asked if he should leave the third floor vacant. Jin told him not to worry about that because they had kids, so they might want to stay in a place where they could make some new friends. Dean said this area was a bit inconvenient as there wasn't much around there. Note said 3 people from the gold-ranked party had decided to stay near the center of town. It seemed like a lot of people were looking to stay in the safer, more central parts of town. Monsters broke through the city walls near there after all. Ash said if there was an emergency, they could stay on the 3rd floor of their place. Jin thanked them and mentioned that his place was open too, so there was nothing to worry about. In that case, Note said they could empty the block behind them. As they looked at him confusedly, he said that he meant he was going to purchase the land. Jin couldn't help but wonder what he meant by empty out. As far as he knew, one couldn't purchase 2 houses around there. Note said Jin had already purchased his abode and this rental, so he would be buying it. He leaned on him and asked if he could ask for a favor later. Jin was puzzled, but he accepted. It had been about a month and a half since the Dinoso family left for Canaan. In the meantime, Jin had been renovating the new house. He has been doing many renovations lately. He did visit that library to read and hang out with Ash and the others, but in general, he had been working. In any case, he just hoped the Dinoso family liked their new house. Someone knocked on his door and asked if anyone was there. When he opened it, Dinoso was there and said a friend of his had referred him to Jin. Jin greeted him as if he didn't know him, and then he covered Jin's mouth and told Shiva and the kids to go inside before talking more. Shiva told the kids to keep their voices down, and they were visiting someone else's home. When they went inside, Dinoso reminded him that he told him to be careful, and asked if they weren't too suspicious. Jin responded that everyone he knew already knew about this. Once they arrived in Kanam, they would find out anyway. It was a pain to try and hide this from other people. They asked if that was his house, and he responded that it was one of them. Shiva asked when he first came to Kanam and how long they should pretend to have known him. Jin said he met them in the autumn of last year or spring, so it should be fine to say they had known him for about a year. She then told Tina, En, and Baku to tell people that they had known him for a long time. Jin asked Shiva if they had eaten. She said yes and felt bad because if they had known he would be here, they wouldn't have eaten in advance, but the kids said they would eat it if it was Jin's cooking. Dinoso joined them as the 4th kid. Jin decided to make a portion for one. He asked where their luggage was and if they had a place to stay. Dinoso said they had left the horse and their belongings at an inn for now, and he was looking to sign a 1-year lease on a home soon. Jin asked them to take a look next door. He said it was available to rent with a caveat, even if it was just brief until they found another place. He gave them the keys to look at the house while he cooked. Denoso wondered why he had the key to that house, and he said that it was his house too. This area is close to the demon forest and monsters have gotten the walls before, so he should take that into account too. Jin made them pinchos and small pies. It was easy to make with jarred marinated tomatoes and mozzarella. They came back just when he finished. He wanted to greet them and said their timing was good, but they were still in shock by the house next door. Shiva was amazed to see how much houses and furniture had improved. And compared to the inn, the rooms were so cute. There were 2 beds on top of each other. Jin was glad they liked it. He then noticed Denoso's face looking a bit uneasy about the house, so he changed the topic by suggesting eating, and he let Denoso pick the wine. While eating, Denoso asked if the caveat regarding the rental was about the attic. Apparently, Shiva was the one who found it. Denoso noticed Jin's deadly stare and asked what the caveat was about. Jin wondered if it could be his wife who was more skilled than the two. He said that the people living behind him had their own circumstances, and he figured it would be good to have an escape route in case of emergencies. He would like to have an escape route made in the attic. The butler, Note, consulted him about, and he obliged. After some discussion, he sold the house where Letsu and the others were staying and instead bought this house. If you're going to have an escape route, it would be best to have a different owner on the other side, so it's harder to discern. Jin said they would be home today, so he was going to go get them. Note and Ash arrived, and Denoso seemed shocked to see them. He called them the Shadow World. Note said he hadn't heard that name in years. Ash asked if he knew him, and he explained that back in the day, adventurers used to call him that. They met when Denoso first started out. The memories of Note working them to the bone outweighed any notion of him being a mere butler. Note didn't mind his shock, and thanked him for his help at that time, because it was hard to get help from outside the country. Jin wondered if Note had some kind of dirt on Denoso. He figured that Note wasn't always a butler. Note introduced Denoso as the Wolf King Balmor. He said that he might have disappeared for some time, but he was a gold-ranked adventurer. Jin was shocked that Denoso was Balmor. Denoso explained that he didn't recall the name his parents gave him, and Shiva gave him the name Denoso, so he goes by that now. He then told Ash that if Note was sticking with her, she must be that young lady. Jin was once again shocked that Denoso knew about Ash, and that her father used a spirit to make her more manly. It was a hassle to have them living behind them, but after seeing the house, it would be hard for the Denoso family to turn it down, so they made a deal. Ash and Denoso shook hands. After that, Jin asked Shiva how she knew there was a secret passage there. She asked him to tap the back of the shell, and then she tapped on a different part. The part she tapped made a different sound because it was hollow. There was also a slight draft because of the hole. The building was built without a crack at all, so Denoso wondered why that would be the case. Note said the wind must be from openings in their house, and they haven't touched the attic on their side since purchasing the house. While opening the secret passage, Jin said if they just sealed the gaps, the draft wasn't an issue. But if they closed the hole, there was no getting in or out. It would be nice if they could make the opening invisible with magic. He would like it to be a normal wall except when people pass through it. The hole started closing up and Jin seemed surprised. Denoso was shocked and believed that Note trained him to do this kind of stuff. But Note denied it, saying that he had no part in this. Denoso asked Jin if he still wanted to lay low and he said yes. But it didn't seem like it from how he acted. Shiv left the room to go check on the kids. Ash asked Jin what he was trying to hide and from whom. He responded that he was just concerned his abilities would catch the attention of someone troublesome. It was mostly about his sister, but he had separated himself from her. As long as the other gods were stronger than that ball of light, he believed he should be okay. Ash concluded that it would be okay for them to find out about it. She asked if he thought that the more people knew, the more likely someone else would find out about it. Jin seemed okay because rumors died off quickly anyway, and as long as he wasn't directly talking to them, they would forget about him. He had a special constitution for this kind of thing. To be more accurate, people have a hard time sustaining an interest or obsession with him. Ash figured that he'd just knocked out any people who were digging into his affairs. Jin disliked talking about this, but he didn't think he would be able to convince her otherwise. They asked if that was the reason why they could find no trace of him at the commercial guilds. Note did find it strange that only Ash and Note were noted concerning the medicine they had sold. Jin was lacking in a few areas, so he stayed away from group activities in general. Denoso said he knew from the start there was something off about his physical prowess and spirits don't go to him at all, to the point of absurdity. Jin was surprised that he could see spirits, but he said everyone here could. It was true that Ash and the butler could, so he guessed Denoso's wife could as well. He wondered if the kids could see them. Jin asked if it wasn't dangerous to have so many people around here who could see spirits. They told him no and added that he was the most dangerous person there and he should be more careful. Denoso had no doubt that he could fend for himself, but he wondered why he didn't let the spirits he had made a contract with accompany him. Like he said, it was strange that he was so strong without any spirits. Note said spirits liked adventurers in particular. Some people lose their ability to see spirits when they stop adventuring too. Jin had made a contract with a spirit, but he didn't want to expose it to any outside influences for now. He said he was so cute, so he didn't want it to be abducted by some weirdo or influenced by other strange spirits. Ash said Azu was doing fine. Note told him that normal people cannot touch spirits. He decided to ask this to Reach later. While he might not be able to give him a direct answer, he might be able to express his opinion in another way. When he returned to his home, the first thing he did was greet Reach. Reach ran towards him with happiness and smelled his hands. It started to circle him while sniffing. He was so cute no matter the time of day. Amongst all the spirits he had seen, Reach was definitely the cutest. He asked if he would be okay with following him out into the world. There would be a lot of people out there, so he wondered what he was thinking. But it looked like he was just talking to a wall. He would be happy to have him with him, but he also doesn't want to force it on him. He told him that if he didn't feel like it, he could give it a try some other time. But Rich's expression entailed nothing. In the next scene, Jean brought Riche. Chris and Dean were taken aback by how cute he was. Dean tried to pet the dog, but Jean stopped him and told him that they couldn't touch him. This regulation seemed to upset Chris, as he could not touch such a splendid creature. Jean was supposed to be cooking for Dean and the others today. He was doing this as thanks for the food they gifted him the other day and thought that maybe he could socialize with Rich at the same time. The door knocked and he said it was the neighbors coming to pick up some bread. Dean heard about the Donoso family. Note and Donoso went inside the house and Donoso started freaking out. Jean said he had got too many mushrooms, so he decided to invite some people over. Note mentioned that he had no part in this either. Donoso figured that this was his fault for what he had done. He agreed with him at the time, so he supposed they shared the blame, but this wasn't something they could have foreseen. Jean was so confused as to what they were talking about. He pointed at Rich and said it was the thing at his feet. He asked if he hadn't shown it to anyone else. Jean responded that he had just introduced him to Ash and the others. Donoso's reactions were puzzling to them, so Note tried to calm him down, saying that it was just Ash and the other three, so he was sure it was fine. Jean reminded him that he was the one who said to bring Spirit along with him. Dean didn't know Reach was a spirit, so he was kind of shocked, but they told him that there was no such thing as a dog that doesn't leave behind footprints. This also meant that there were spirits that were visible to people who couldn't see spirits. Jean just now realized that Reach was an incredibly strong spirit. He didn't realize it before because Reach had always just been there. Plus, he was so frail in the beginning. Jean said he probably shouldn't take him out in public, and Note agreed. That was okay because Reach didn't like crowded areas anyway. Jean asked what kind of spirit he should be taking around. Chris and Ash weren't sure if they should be here. Jean told them not to worry because it was his choice to invite them, and he would feel better if Azu was there to watch over her. Cheers promised to do his best to ensure his trust was not misplaced. Letza heard adventurers usually accompanied by fire spirits. Donoso had that dragon following him around. Jean then noticed that he hadn't introduced Letza and Donoso, so he did. The moment Letza looked closely at Donoso, he was shocked and asked if he was Balmor. When Donoso confirmed that he was, Chris and Dean were equally shocked too because they heard that Balmor, the King of Wolves, had gone missing in a dungeon. Donoso said they would be active again tomorrow and asked Letza to look out for them. Chris also tried to introduce himself and then Dean panicked and introduced himself. Jean told him that he was acting weird, but he said it was normal as there was a Balmor in the room. Balmor was just that famous. Only incredibly estranged people would have never heard of him before. However, the only people who knew him personally were usually people older than him. Jean didn't know about that because for him, Donoso was just Donoso, just a loving husband to his wife and father to his kids. He gave Donoso the bread and he said to Jean that he better not walk around town with those spirits if he had any inclination to stay low-key. Dean was so excited that he started acting like a fan. Letzi said it was going to get rowdy at the guild. He felt like someone from his caliber should have gone back to delving in dungeons instead of to this town. Jean told them that Donoso was thinking of training his kids. Dean was shocked that he had kids. Jean had to tell him that he was fangirling pretty hard and that it grossed him out. But Dean didn't think he should blame him because he was just a bit older than them, but he had really made a name for himself. Ash mentioned that his kids were a lovely set of siblings, twin boys and a girl. Dean asked if he would only be teaching the boys, and Jean said he intends to train all three. They asked if his wife was the Ice Queen Shiva, and he said he didn't know about this Ice Queen moniker, but Shiva was the name of his wife. Dean was once again amazed that even his wife was beautiful and strong. Jean agreed with him about this one. Ash asked if that was his type. He responded that he didn't know about a type per se, but he definitely envied the entire Donoso family. While they weren't the farming family, he thought they were. They were a good family. Rather than envying the members themselves, he envies their relationship. Balmor and Shiva should be perfectly fine, but they should keep an eye out for the kids. Jean was surprised and said he would appreciate it if they did that. They told him not to worry about something and leave it to them. Jin was sure those three would do a much better job than he ever could. Jin suggested getting ready to eat and asked Note if he could give him a hand. Chris stopped him before he left and said he wasn't sure if it was right to be holding Richa like a normal pet. He said he would try and rein it in a little. In the next scene, Zhang calls for Letza. He thanked him for keeping him company today. Letza told him not to worry and mentioned that if he was really looking for blacksmiths, he would find more in a larger city. Jin said they would all be Rosa's underlings, so he decided to pass on that. Letza wondered why he was treating Rosa like a massive villain because everyone said she was a compassionate healer. Jin stated that everything about her seemed like a pain to deal with. Letza didn't ask anything further and wondered if he would find an artisan to his liking. Jin wanted to make use of that magic ore Ash gave him a while back, and asked if it was processed like normal iron. Letza heard if the furnace was powered by spirits, the quality would improve a bit, but the process should be the same. He apologized for asking him to show him around because he decided to do it himself. Letza knew he was good at this kind of thing but asked if he had a setup for it. While eating his sandwich, he said he did. Letza said he wasn't going to bother asking about where he kept it. Jin was disgusted by the meat because it stinks. Letza realized that it did stink a little after he mentioned it. Jin would like some shichimi for this, but it didn't exist in this world. Letza said he had really gotten used to his cooking and that it was scary how he didn't want to eat out at most places these days. Jin said he could just copy his recipes. The butler made pizza with asparagus the other day. Letza said even though it wasn't something serious, he started grilling meat at home. He had barely left the house. That was a good thing, but he still reminded him to eat his vegetables too. In the next scene, Jin was at his house and got everything ready. He also wanted fire spirits to help out. He started working carefully and noticed that there were lots of sparks thanks to the fire spirits. He thanked every spirit that helped him after that. He had dabbled with knives and smaller items before, but this was his first time making something larger, hence he was unsure if he could do it himself. But thanks to all those spirits with him, it should be doable. When the sky got darker, he was done with his sword. The tip of the sword was colored differently from the rest of it. It was beautiful, like a morning dawn. He told Reach to stay away because he was going to try it. He swung the sword once and flames wrapped around the sword. It looked so cool, but it was obvious that he couldn't use this. He could already see Denoso telling him off. He asked Reach what they should do in panic, but Reach's face was so cute that he totally forgot what he had done for a moment. He then realized that wasn't the point and he would have to apologize for doing this to a gift. The next day, Jin knocked on Ash's door and gave them sweets and wine as his sincere apology. Ash didn't think he had done anything that warranted an apology. Jin said that he made a sword with the magic ore she gave him, but it was unusable now, and that's why he was apologizing. Ash told him that there was no need to do such a thing and it was a gift to him, so he was free to use it however he liked. Note that he had also trained as a smith, so he suggested melting it down and reforging it. That was a great idea that Jin couldn't think of. It was still steel after all, so if he melted it down he might be able to salvage it. While he was wondering if it was possible to do it with that, Note had an idea. He wanted to call Denoso and show him that failed sword. Jin went inside and offered the wine and the sweets to others. After everyone had eaten, Denoso asked Jin to show him the sword. He brought the sword, but Denoso was concerned about where he took it from. As Jin said, the sword was taken from the storage, but Denoso told him not to tell anyone about that. Note said he didn't believe that would be a problem since even the bags he made, which were more conspicuous, were handled through the guild. Jin confirmed that he was proud of himself as he covered his tracks well. There was the sword in question. Since it was a beautiful piece of work, Note didn't want Jin to melt that one down. Jin asked Ash if she liked it in that case. She said she didn't have a companion fire spirit, so it wouldn't be suitable for her as Azu was a green wind spirit. Then Jin turned back to Denoso and asked him if he would like it. He tried to encourage him by giving a speech. He told him not to be so ready to give away a sword like this that he couldn't easily show in public. He asked how much it cost him and what it was made of in the first place. The style of the blade resembled the ones made in the northern islands, where people didn't come into contact with other people. He said he thought those were usually made with molds, and he forged that one himself using the magic iron. Jin said those times around the spirits present helped him forge that into a spirit sword. He also had made regular knives, though those weren't made with the aid of spirits. Denoso told him there was nothing to be done about the fact it was a spirit sword, and as long as he didn't use that in public, everything seemed just fine. He got angry and tried to make him understand that even if the sword wasn't a spirit one, making a sword like that was not normal. Note, on the other hand, suggested Jin set his benchmarks a bit lower. However, Jin didn't want a weapon that would have broken easily and wasn't about to give up on quality of life, combat, or otherwise. Note was helpless. He had nothing left to do with Jin. Jin said he just wanted to be more comfortable. Note told him his level of culture and understanding dwarfed theirs. The door was knocked on by Dean and Jin told him to come in. Dean seemed surprised to see Denoso there and asked Jin what was going on. Jin said they were trying to come to an agreement. After Dean told him to take it easy, he handed him some white asparagus. Dean smelled the eclairs and said he wanted to taste some. Dean thought there was an incredible amount of vanilla beans and cacao, even though that thing inside was underheard. Denoso ignored Dean's appetite and told them a sword was something they entrust their life to, so he was fine with them making it to the highest standard. He ordered Jin to make a new sword, and he would keep that spirit sword and pretend he had obtained it elsewhere. He thought it would be preferable for other people to have words like that too, so Jin wouldn't have stood out for having one. Everything was clean for Jin, and he made up his mind to make some more swords. Note told Jin that he already had his own, so he didn't want Jin to be worried. When Dean said he didn't have any money on him, Jin initially decided to make a sword for Ash and Shiva each. Ash couldn't be sure if it was really okay, but Jin said she was the one who had given him the magic iron in the first place, and he said he would ask Chris and Letza later. Jin set to work making a sword and was thinking about what attribute he should have used for his own sword and what spirit he would have even taken with him. He wanted to go look for dragons and stuff. Letza was also there to help him since it was a lot of work to do solo for Jin, so he was glad to Letza and appreciated it. After a few hours of work, they had a cup of coffee together. Letza told Jin that the tea was delicious like he had always liked that. Jin told him that it was actually coffee and others didn't seem to like the bitterness, and he would personally add milk and sugar. He said black coffee was also fine too. Then Letza saw something different and Jin said these were lamps and offered him to take one of them as thanks for his help. Jin also said he could take a glass, a wine glass, a champagne flute, or even a beer jockey. Jin said he had to blow glass for the lamps, so he had made some other stuff while he was at it. He showed Letza one glass was made from harder glass, so they were good for daily use, which was not good for hot drinks though. He asked Letza what he would have liked to take, but he wanted to call Note over there. Jin asked the reason, and Letza said it was because Jin was pushing it, and he had never seen glass like that. He said he had bought a red glass before, and they said as long as it stayed inside it would be fine. Those were much opaque, but that one was so clear. He asked if he should have kept them away from the ground floor if they had guests. Jin told him that he would mull it over. Letza only focused on where to keep them and planned to add a door to the shelves to block them from view. While the conversation carried on, Letza informed Jin about Rosa's followers. He told him that Rosa's followers were starting to leave Canem and then asked him if he had thought about going on a hunt. Jin recalled that they had been rabid trying to recruit Denoso. If rumors kept spreading, Amadeo might have taken his way back there. Jin had been thinking about spreading information about the north, but Amadeo might have come back since Balmor was there. Jin then asked what he was thinking about the others going deeper into the woods so they could disappear for a while. Letza said they would work that out from there. Then Jin asked about Letza. It depended on what they would be doing for him. He might have been a liability after all. Jin believed that he would be a great role model, but Letza still turned him down because he would be the only person in danger. To convince him more, Jin suggested going hunting rabbits with the kids or just looking after them. But Letzi didn't even know they were taking the kids too. They were planning a Spartan training regime to head to a dungeon in 2 or 3 years, and they survived the long journey just to get to Canem. Jin said those kids were probably tougher than him if he was not careful. Letzi said he was more childish than he expected, and he made a lot of errors when they were around. He said he would probably be a real headache for Denoso. Jin was shocked by Letza's straightforward statements. After he had talked with Letza, Jin went to Denoso's house. The kids were so happy to see him as always. When Shiva thanked Jin for the gifts he gave them, Denoso seemed puzzled. Jin gave both Shiva and Note kitchen knives that he forged himself. It was his fault for them escaping the confinement of his own house though. Then he chose to give one to Shiva. Shiva invited Jin for dinner because Denoso went out and caught a deer. The kids were so happy to have deer because it had been so long. Jin agreed to stay, and he was excited as it had been a while since he had her cooking. While cooking, Shiva asked Denoso to carve the meat. When Denoso saw the knife, he seemed pretty shocked, but Shiva told him that the kids were waiting, so he had to hurry up. Jin encouraged him, but Denoso was just mad. The meal was ready, and they started eating. The cream sauce was great with this venison, and Jin loved it. Denoso bragged about his wife's cooking skills as always. Jin asked if the sides were beans with baked cheese on top, and she confirmed him. It was the first harvest of the season. The beans were a bit small, but they had a great color to them. With baked goat's cheese on top, it was a little bitter, but it was indeed delicious. When Jin said it made him want his own family when he was here, the kids volunteered to be his wife. Denoso once again objected to this idea. Jin was used to this kind of situation. They were just playing around, but they didn't understand what their father meant. Shiva asked if he did the tailoring for Ash's clothes because it was pretty hard to believe Ash was a girl this entire time. Ash had recently gotten thinner around the waist and had to adjust her clothing sizes. Since the spirit's curse had been lifted, Jin wondered if Ash would become more feminine from now on, though he knew she would probably have to work on that scary glare of hers first. Denoso asked Jin why he was there because he knew he hadn't just come to have dinner. Jin remembered now and asked if he would like to accompany them for monster extermination with Ash and him. Denoso asked if they should go deeper into the forest. They would need to prepare so that if the weather permits, they could leave in 5 days. Dean, Chris, and Letza all declined to join them, but he was planning to ask them one more time. When Denoso said they were going to head out on horseback together, Jin was surprised and excited that they would be riding horses. In the next scene, Jin went to Letza and said he was going to ride a horse. It made sense that Ash and Note were skilled horsemen, but Chris and Dean also said they knew how to ride. Letza seemed surprised that he didn't know how to ride a horse. Jin realized that it was just him who didn't know how. Letza explained to him that this was how adventurers need to be. Even the guilds call for adventurers when it comes to monster subjugation. When they were looking to make a living, sometimes they had to move fast. Before coming here, Letza traveled around a lot to a bunch of towns and cities just to make a name for himself so people would be comfortable with his face. He asked Jin if he really never tried before. Jin said he had ridden a deer before, but that didn't count, apparently. Letza said he hadn't ridden a deer before, but hoped that if he had experience in that, a horse shouldn't be too far off. He said he would take him to a local stable and he could pick out a horse. Worst case scenario, he could just ride with En or Baku. That was a bit lame, but it could work. He then remembered that he knew a horse. Letza was surprised and asked if he really knew a horse that was willing to have him on its back. He wasn't sure if he would let him up on his back, but he did make that contract with him. It would be too much to ask of him. Then he thought about the deer or the snow leopard that he met on the same day. He said if the horse refuses, he would ask the snow leopard. Letza told him that he was going a bit fast for him. Jin responded that there was no need to worry. They were going into the forest so he would be able to keep up. Letza wasn't talking about that. He said he must be heading to an abandoned mine. Jean asked if Peek was interested and told him that he would throw in this bottle of wine if he decided to tag along. He tried to convince Letza by saying Denoso said he would be inviting Dean and Chris out tomorrow. Letza decided to tag along, but only because he knew Jin would mess something up. But he told him that he still needs to learn how to ride a horse. If the roster is confirmed, he should go hire the horses in advance and take the opportunity to learn while he is there. Plus, he could just take a horse he was used to out on the day. When Letza said his backside would have a real nasty story to tell if he didn't get used to it fast, Jin started to feel nervous. This horse riding thing sounded a lot harder than hunting monsters at this point. The next day, he went to pick a horse. There were so many different horses that he was surprised. Ash said some of them were bred for pulling carriages or to be pack horses. Ash and Note decided to join them today to help teach him the ropes. It looked like Ash liked horses. She was quite knowledgeable. Note stated that since they would be heading to the forest, a war horse may be suitable, but considering their temperament, a smaller, more tame horse would be better for Jin. Jin agreed because it was all for naught if he ended up not being able to ride it at all. And hiring out a war horse was expensive. While he was thinking about that, one of the horses approached him. The horseman apologized to Jin and explained that they had just started looking after this one, and it had gotten a bad habit of escaping and running away. They tried to get the horse, but he loved Jean so much that he didn't want to leave. On the other hand, Jean didn't want to be popular with a rowdy horse. Letza suggested giving him a go. They had never put a saddle on this one yet, but Jin would need something to hold on to. The man asked if he would like stirrups, and Jin was clueless, so he asked if there were people who rode without stirrups. He said some people find it embarrassing to be seen using them. Ash suggested using that because stirrups allow him to use a sword or bow on horseback. Ash didn't use them unless she was going into combat. The horse's name was Luther. Jin told Luther that he had never ridden a horse before, so he wanted him to listen to what he said and act accordingly. Note said he would hold the reins, so he could try and get on first. Jin didn't expect things to go this fast. Note told him that he was athletic, so he would be fine. They started off slow, then Note decided to pick up the pace. Jin realized that he could see so much from the top of a horse. Note told him that he would never be able to ride another horse if he let him do all the work. He also said that he was quite a fast learner. He thought it was because Luther was patient, but he went berserk when Jin tried to get on another horse. Jin's thighs hurts even more than his butt, and he decided to try again tomorrow. Ash asked him to go for a ride tomorrow, and he agreed. He decided to wake up early tomorrow and prepare a bento box or 3. The next day, they had a nice day with the horses and decided to take a break near a tree. Ash's talent in horse riding impressed Jin once again as she rushed there. When he got off, Jin thanked Luther because he was only keeping up thanks to Luther's calm behavior. He then noticed that the others tied their horses to the tree, but he was sure Luther would listen to him calling for him. As they sat, Jin took out the lunch he had prepared for them. He made 3 types of sandwiches for them. He noticed that Ash went for the egg sandwiches, and Note preferred roast beef. He also gave them white wine. He also brought fried chicken, fried onions, and shrimp spring rolls as an appetizer. They were all the ingredients he bought in town. He decided to keep quiet about the anchovies and the egg sandwiches. He would really like to do some more adventurous recipes like wrapping food in meat or with tomatoes. but he should probably see how they react to rice first. It would be tough for them to have something they didn't recognize as a staple for a main dish. In Naladid, they had a dish similar to paella, but he had not seen anything like it near Kanem. Ash suddenly told Jean to make what he liked. She looked pretty angry all of a sudden. Jean didn't ask why she said that and just said okay. After eating their lunch, it was about time they headed back. Ash suddenly told Jean that she was going to become strong in the future, strong enough that he could do the things he liked without fear. Jean was shocked and embarrassed by her incredibly manly declaration. Even Note was impressed and couldn't stop himself from tearing up a bit, but Jean was thinking otherwise, as if he wasn't strong enough. In the next scene, Jean was at Naladide to sell potatoes to the Alloway family. If he can't use ingredients not found in this world, he decided to introduce the world's denizens to them. So he decided to start with potatoes. It had the color of a sweet potato, but the overall shape looked more like a potato. Mr. Alloway said wheat could be unreliable as it was easily targeted in wars and conflicts. So a crop like those potatoes grown underground should be much more resilient and easily stored. Farmers had begun to grow more of those. Jean heard that they usually grew them for their flowers, but he didn't think they were being considered a foodstuff now. He wasn't a fan of the main motivator being war, but it was good that fewer people would go hungry. Up until now, they had only seen smaller ones, so the size of the ones he brought was amazing. However, there was a problem that had been popping up about those. Some say that those were poisonous. The sprout of the potato and any parts that had gone green weren't edible, so he asked if those people cut corners on their food prep. Mr. Alloway didn't know this information and asked if he knew the cause, and he called him Soleil. Here in Naladid, Jean goes by the name Soleil. It was also the same he had used to register the guilds. If anyone takes notice of his name, he could just drop it entirely. In the worst-case scenario, he could ditch Jean too, but he had grown a bit attached to that name since it was what he first used upon coming to this world. Mr. Alloway asked him if he would share his information about this crop with them, but he said he would do that under certain conditions. He requested a house on this island. Here in Nalade, many countries were vying for position and power, and had built their own trading posts here. So even if someone wanted to buy property here, there were no vacancies in the first place. But for the Alloway family, who made their fortune in shipping goods by sea, they could easily accomplish that. There was nothing to it, he just wanted an address for his Soleil persona. Mr. Alloway said it was a difficult thing to do, and even if they didn't know the reason right now, they could just trace it back to the source. Jean started packing up and said this would mean their cooking methods would be limited. Alloway asked him to give him some time and he would bring it up with the family head. Even with the concern about poison, Jean's potatoes were just too enticing, so he was sure he couldn't stand the thought of other merchants getting hold of them. He wanted to have a sample of the crop to show them, and Jean gave him some. He said those had been boiled and were safe to eat. The man thanked him, but he knew Jean had boiled so that they couldn't use to grow a new crop. He then showed a place on the map, asking if this area would be okay. Some small islands weren't shown on maps, but they could help him attain residency there. Jean said it was fine. An island meant he would need to boat around, but he had his transfer skill, and if it wasn't on the main Naladid island, he could even get a garden. He showed him their contract and said they would like to assist him if he ever needed assistance in business negotiations. In some circumstances, they would even allow him to use their family name for backing. Jean decided to tell him about the potential causes of the toxicity. He explained that they could be toxic if immature or unripe, if they were exposed to light for too long, or if they were damaged. Any parts that were sprouting, green, or darkened were dangerous too. There were also trace amounts of toxin in the skin, so it would be best to peel them. And he mentioned that if it ever tastes bitter, that was the toxin in question, and they should spit it out if they notice it. He was half cheating by reading out what he saw with his appraisal skill, but he didn't want to leave it to chance and go purely from memory. He gave him the initial sample and said that as soon as he received the payment and the permit for the land residence, he would bring around the remaining 3 barrels of potatoes. The yield would gradually decline because of repeated plantings, but that was for another time. He would tell them about it if they maintain a business relationship. For the next 2 or 3 years, their yields would be unaffected. Now he decided to take a look at the surrounding islands and then head home. When Jean went back home, he told the guys about what Ash said to him. He asked if that would mean he was weak and what was the standard. Note told him that it was because Ash had been a knight for too long, but Jean said if he gave it his all, he could probably level the town in an instant. Letza told him that he didn't look weak, and it was just that he didn't seem like someone who would take a life. He seemed like someone who would work in the kitchens or near the town well, or keep a house clean and tidy. Unfortunately, Jean couldn't even deny their evaluations of him at all. It was true that he didn't do things that weren't necessary. He had hunted birds for their down, though. Note teased him, saying he wasn't even giving off a sense of danger, even after saying he was going to destroy the town. While they were playing cards, Denoso asked Jin if it would be okay to push forward their departure date by a day. Jin asked if something had happened, and he said one of the people he mentioned before arrived in town. It was Nina the archer. It was earlier than expected. Denoso said the fastest one in their party got there first, and the rest of them would be here in 2 or 3 days. He then asked Jin if he had heard about how heroes were summoned. They say 4 heroes were summoned, but one of them was a changeling. Jin wondered if they were a kid swapped as an infant. He had read about them in books a long time ago. Changeling was when a spirit took the place of a child. In the stories, holy spirits with incomplete bodies were swapped with real children. Once they had grown enough, they would disappear off on their own. There had been cases where the spirit directly imitated the child, but that wasn't how it was with the changeling that was part of those heroes. It seemed it might be a replica of a loved one that was left behind in their previous world. Human memories were fickle and unstable. It was impossible to keep using those memories to maintain its appearance. Denoso heard incomplete changelings devour spirits in order to keep their bodies stable. There had apparently been witnesses of sightings of it consuming spirits. But according to Nina, the eyewitnesses were dealt with so fast, they had no idea who the changeling was. When they talked about 4 heroes, he thought someone else might have been dragged into this. He wondered who they could have recreated. He would be able to tell who, since the other 3 would be his sister and her 2 friends. He asked Denoso if people wouldn't end up dealing with them, but Denoso said no. Countries would think they were beneficial and any rogue spirits would appear away from their lands. Spirits like that were hunted out here on the frontier too. Letzi told Denoso that he was saying that because he was strong. The thought of stronger monsters appearing gave Letzi goosebumps. Note mentioned that they said heroes helped to nurture gods, and it was true that the god of wind's influence was quite strong now. It was unlikely that countries, even the citizens, would give up on their heroes so easily. While it looked like Nina wanted to do something about this changeling, combined with the other rumors floating around, it seemed like Rosa and the others wanted to barge into the capital and drag down the royal family to exterminate the changeling. But there was very little justification to do such a thing, unless those heroes kept stirring the pot. It was best to deal with that as soon as possible, but it was the country's own fault for letting this happen. Denoso just wanted to make sure N didn't get swept in this. For Denoso, his family came first, above the country or anything else. It was quite different from him, who just thought that someone would deal with all the heroes if they were not sure about the changeling. Letza asked if they could tell who was the changeling just by seeing who was acting lovey-dovey, since they said it was a loved one. Denoso explained that they didn't know if their relationship was as it was in their former world, if it was changed since coming to their world, or if it was different than what people see on the surface. It seemed like it was 2 pairs of siblings, one with an older brother and one with an older sister. Denoso stated that they actually know their names: Haruka, Hisatsugu, Yuka, and last but not least, Jin's former name Jin. One of those 4 was a changeling, but no one was sure who it was. Calmly, Jin said it would be the little brother. Letza was surprised. He said he had never seen them, but the names confirm it. It was a body created in his likeness, someone who was left behind in Japan, or rather a recreation from the memories of his sister and her friends. He was also sure his sister didn't love him. She was just obsessed with him. She thought he belonged to her, and it was disgusting that their vision of him was being turned into a subservient being. Denoso asked him if there were 4 from the get-go when the heroes were summoned. He said only 3 were summoned, and he was dragged along against his will. He didn't know much about his sister's friends. The brother was outwardly confident, while his sister was a stop-and-start kind of person. They might have changed their appearance after arriving in this world. His sister, narcissistic as she was, probably changed nothing about herself, but she might have asked for beauty, youth, or something similar. Note asked that they would be about equal to him in ability. Jean said all he was good for was making things. The gods who blessed them were different, so he couldn't say anything about their power. Letza recalled Rish, the god, and Jean said it wasn't just Risha that gave him blessing and their original conditions were different. Denoso concluded that if they received combat-related skills, they would be stronger than he. He asked if it would be bad if no one stopped them before they started ramping up their activities. He had heard that unless something really bad happens, those heroes would continue to protect that changeling. Note asked Jean if he was content with leaving those heroes alone. Jean stated that he wasn't going anywhere near them. This world seemed to be designed in a way where nothing actually hinges on how heroes develop. He read about this in the library in Thelmist. Letza said he was hoping that the world wouldn't completely change as a result of 3 or 4 people. As they continued playing, Jean started thinking about what Denoso said. He thought Denoso was right. There was a folklore about heroes all over the place, but the original country where that library belonged was destroyed in the same year as the first hero summoning. It seemed like this world, technology speaking, hadn't advanced because heroes were summoned time and time again and they reduced everything back to ashes. The fact that those stories had been passed down at all must be a result of the spirits themselves. He said summoning heroes was to help stabilize spirits, not people, though he guessed unstable spirits could affect people as well. If there were too many spirits or too many of one kind, things would be unbalanced. Summoning heroes to consume spirits was probably just spring cleaning to make sure the world didn't crumble from the imbalance. In any case, he couldn't believe their hands were so good. But this time he had the best cards. Letzi told him that if he compares it to something they get, it kind of trivializes the problem, so he asked him to use a stronger example. Jin thought about it, but he couldn't find anything, so he just told them that as long as the spirits are somewhat balanced, there is no problem. It was all about the balance between spirits and matter, but this balance didn't seem to be present right now. It seemed like there was a lot of wind and light spirits around, and there was a surprising number of people who could see spirits. To balance that out, you either need fewer spirits or more matter. Those heroes were doing the former while he was doing the latter. Jin wasn't sure if what he was doing was better overall, but this empire had a varied history of places popping up all over the place, so he wasn't worried. According to one book, when a spirit becomes too powerful, the spirit itself becomes physical matter and petrifies itself to maintain this balance. This physical stone was imbued with their powers. The only other way to stop this petrification was to be aided by a spirit of a different element. It was in their instincts to take in other spirits and become more powerful themselves, so this wasn't something they could solve by themselves. So from all his research, he decided that he would work hard to make stuff, form contracts with certain spirits, and ultimately leave the heroes alone. He figured if there was more matter in the world, summoning heroes wouldn't be necessary. He had to be careful to ensure Reach didn't end up petrifying, but they had been interacting with other great spirits often, so he should be fine, as he thought. Jin asked Denoso what would happen to heroes after the god that blessed them disappeared, but Denoso wasn't sure. And if he didn't know, he could still infer about how they might have been treated by their nations after the fact. Those were people who were great healers, or defended their nations to the extent that records exist about them after all. They probably lived incredibly lavish lives after the fact. Jin started making a really scary face and intimidated the others at the table. Denoso said they should probably leave those heroes alone. Note agreed, and added that unless they were directly affected, it would be best not to get involved. He said they had circled right back around to Denoso's earlier topic. Letza squeezed his cheeks and told him that they were back to a former topic, but they had learned a lot that they would rather not have, so they would need some potent medicine to get over the stress of having a stray hero in their minds. Jin was offended, and he said he wasn't a stray hero. Note had one further question. He asked what his relationship to those heroes was, but Jin responded that he would rather not reveal their relationship. In the next scene, Jin asked Kadal if there were any signs before a spirit starts to petrify. Kadal responded that they would start acting strangely first, and they would become unable to conceal their presence. Worried, Jin asked if Mishto and Halalfa were going to be okay. Those two weren't any old light spirits, but he was concerned they might petrify faster than that ball of light. Suddenly, Halalfa came hugging Jin, teasing him for being concerned about them. Jin immediately put a distance between them because of embarrassment. The old spirit said he had formed contracts with more spirits than they had expected, and their own subordinate spirits have increased as a result. The more followers meant the larger the vessel. At the very least, they wouldn't be petrified before Namina did. So basically, spirits he formed contracts with would find themselves associated with those great spirits. He then wondered how the balance between spirits and matter. Kadal explained that there were still too many spirits and it would be good if he continued to create matter. Also, the link between buildings could use some work. He advised him to consider using ashes that spirits had lived in, or a combination of honey and flour. Jin was confused at first, but then figured he meant the building mortar. He thought he saw a note in one of the books that they used to use honey and flour as building moritar. Those spirits might be happy with that, but so will the ants, so Jin didn't want to do that. He thanked Kadal for sharing this with him, and Kadal disappeared. Halalfa said that Prude was feeling embarrassed. Jin didn't want to be alone with her, so he excused himself, saying that he had to get ready for tomorrow. From tomorrow, they were going to be busy hunting monsters. He probably wouldn't be able to have Japanese food for a while, so tonight, he decided to make ramen. He made himself a delicious ramen with a mixed soup of pork, chicken, and fish broth, seasoned with soy sauce and served with straight noodles. These gyoza were still nice and crispy even after taking them out of his storage skill. After finishing his dinner, he started playing with Riche. He opened up to Denoso and the others, but they were more accepting of it than he expected. He thought they would be more surprised. Denoso told him that he could create new things, he could see spirits, and he was strong, but he was still a bit emotionally immature. He said that if he was not careful, he would end up being taken advantage of by bad people. Rather than being surprised at the new revelations, they were concerned for Jin. There were already 3 heroes out there, so he was thinking of continuing to make new things. But he knew there was no need for him to reveal himself. Letza said everything he learned today was stuff he didn't want to know. But the thing he was spooked the most about was the theoretical act of transferring a contracted spirit to someone else. He finished playing with Rich and patted his head for being a good boy. They said that the wind god Lenoro was originally not going to be petrified, but Rich fought against him. Their battle hastened the petrification of the wind god. With Rich's victory, he became much more powerful, and he was chosen to summon the next set of heroes. Rich consumed a lot of his power in summoning heroes, and even then, he ultimately failed. This made him realize that he might be failing on purpose. He felt like that might be the case because his little puppy was smart after all. The next day, Jin prepared his bag and went to the place they were going to meet. Everyone was waiting for him in there. Denoso's family was also there. Jin noticed that everyone had a sack on their bag and teased them. Dean said it was out of their control. If they didn't get these laundered while they were away, they would go moldy. Denoso checked everyone and said it was time to head out now. In the next scene, Jin patted Luther's head and told him to take care of them. He then took out a sugar cube and gave it to him. Horses loved sweet things, so this should hopefully ensure he didn't look like an amateur horseman. Dean, on the other hand, mocked him for offering bribes to a horse. Jin tried not to say anything because the only way he could look competent in front of Tina and the twins was to leave it up to Luther. Denoso said they had plenty of horses, so they would split the kids up. Dean and Denoso were heavy, and Jin was a beginner rider, so they would have the 3 of them with the others. Tina was going to ride with Shiva, En would go with Letzi, and Baku would go with Chris. Baku was so amazed by Chris and he just laughed it off. His chin was turning red from all the rubbing though. Jin suddenly wondered what that chin spirit was doing right now. He wanted to take a quick look. He saw that they were somehow competing. He wondered why they were competing like this and how the other people who could see spirits dealt with this kind of behavior. Denoso told him that he told Baku off, but Chris said that for some reason, he felt at ease when he played with his chin. Jin didn't really relate to him. He looked so cool, so Tina wanted to ride with him later, but Denoso opposed this idea immediately. He said he wouldn't let her take a ride with any man who was not himself. When Jin was involved, it felt like the whole family lost their minds. Ash agreed, saying it was easy to relax around Jin. This made him wonder if this was a side effect of his liberation skill. Letza told him that there was no end to the number of things he had to worry about. They had passed over into proper monster territory. There were a lot of ape monsters around here, and they move in packs of 15 or so at most. Shiva and his spirits have been scaring monsters away, but they need to stay alert. Speaking of the devil, their first monster appeared. Denoso was the first to act, and the other joined him. The number of monsters increased, so Jin joined too. He was about to kill one with his sword, but they ran away. Denoso told him to watch out because if he took down one of the black ones, the entire pack would rush him until the very end. Chris asked the kids if they knew about the characteristics of the pink monkeys further south. He explained that if they took down the one with the lightest shade of fur, they would all get confused. They decided to pick up the pace so they could set up before it got dark. At the next scene, Denoso came and asked what he was doing. Jin explained that he made a hammock. The kids were having fun with it. Denoso reminded them that they were out in the open in a dangerous place, so having fun was good only at the proper time. He also told them that if they thought of using Jin as a role model, they would never be normal. Note was inclined to agree, but added that when it comes to this, it was okay to make an exception. Jin was glad he had made enough lizard hide sheets for all of them. Hunter-gatherer team Dean, Shiva, and Chris came back. They caught a black deer and a load of fish. They prepared a delicious dinner and ate together. Jin combined ham and cheese together and gave it to the children. Denoso reminded everyone to stay alert, especially Jin. He was so absorbed in his work he didn't even think Jin would notice even if a monster appeared right next to him. Jin could just leave his search skill active the entire time, but he would be useless without it. So he should take the opportunity to learn properly while there were people around. In any case, Denoso reminded everyone that this was not the kind of camp he was familiar with. Shiva said a lot had improved since they had been away from the adventuring world. It was her first time seeing the kinds of beds that Jin had set up earlier. Note said he could call this a recent trend, one that started with Jin. Denoso was shocked that it was Jin again. He said that the hammocks were made with horned giant lizard hiding. He was just thinking that sleeping in these would end up being safer. Letza said that monster apes had been known to use fire, so it wasn't completely safe, but these would buy them time to fight back or run. He also told them to stop talking about horned giant lizards. Dean said they had been trying their best not to think too much about it. The amount didn't match what they had hunted in the past after all. Shiva said it was fine. They looked comfortable after all. But it seemed like he was less vigilant than the kids, so she asked him to look after himself. Jin said okay and took out some marshmallows. Ash wondered what that was, and he told her what it was. Jin made her try one, and it looked like it was going down well. He figured that Ash likes sweet and sour flavors. Strawberries and cream seemed to be my favorites. He really wanted to bring out chocolate and bananas as well, but he refrained since he thought he would get yelled at. Letza teased Jin for constantly dropping surprise revelations, but wouldn't even look them in the eye. After that, they had spent a few more days getting to the abandoned mine that all the adventurers had been venturing to. He thought it was just an abandoned mine, but there was a fort there as well. Letza explained that it was built back when the mine was still operational, but now it was being used as a toll booth. The mine used to have a decent yield of minerals, but the yield eventually dried up and monsters moved in. With their presence, the ore left in the mine became magical in nature. Now adventurers come here to try and mine those magical ores. He then said they were going to leave their horses and luggage here. Jin turned to Luther and asked him to hold down the fort here. He said that this horse might be a bit rowdy. Dean said it was just a rental horse, so he didn't need to spoil him that much. With that, they were ready to take on this abandoned mine. Inside the place, Donoso explained that the main monsters that inhabit this place were worms, beetles, and rats. There were some other outlier monsters, but that should be all for now. Monsters could sometimes dig through the ground beneath them, so there could be some unstable patches. And then he asked Jin why he was holding a stick. He said he got it from the guy who sold them the torches. He asked what he was going to do with it, and he responded that he could tap on the ground to check before walking. They could also use it to hold the lantern he gifted to Letza. Donoso could not stop being surprised at Jin. The monster here eats dirt and rock, which could sometimes hold magic ores inside. Adventurers gather here to hunt them as they could coalesce inside their stomachs. Jin didn't expect this place to be this humid. Ash agreed, saying it was completely different from outside. Letza said they got a bit unlucky with rain, so a few passages were probably flooded. This mine was underground after all. He suddenly kneeled and found a stone. Jin asked what he was going to do with that, but before he could finish his sentence, Letza threw the rock somewhere and killed something. Jin was confused because he couldn't see anything in this darkness. It was a rat he killed. It wasn't a horned monster, but it lumped its forehead. Letza said they could use this as bait. Nor asked if they should hunt a few more so the bait would be more appealing. Letza wanted to check if there was a stone in its stomach. Donoso told the kids to watch carefully. The kids watched Letza cutting out a rat's insides pretty comfortably. It was fitting for a family that ran a farm, though. Jin had mostly gotten used to it, but he still hesitated a little on anything other than livestock and fantasy creatures in this world. After a while, they had set up a few rats as baits, and Donoso suggested taking a break until they lure in something bigger. Jin gave everyone some cheesecake as a snack. He said it was a simple cake with a cream cheese filling. He had cut them into small bite-sized pieces for convenience. Even Letza liked it. Ash didn't seem so into it, though. It was still going down a treat, but not as much as the ones with sweet cream. Donoso told everyone to be quiet because something was coming for the bait. It looked like there were 7 or 8 of them, the same kind of rat as before. Donoso asked Tina, En, and Baku if they were up to this. They were all ready and attacked the rats. Everyone except Baku killed one. The last rat jumped on him from behind, but Shiva killed it in an instant. Worried, Donoso asked what she was holding. Shiva was confused and said they were in close quarters and there were a lot of them. Plus, if she uses her sword, it will drop the temperature a lot and affect everyone else. She said she wouldn't use this one for cooking. Donoso started staring at Jin because he was the one who made it. Letzi checked, and it didn't look like rats have much magic ore in them. Those guys back at the fort nearby said that Amadeo and his crew were in here a few times. He started considering going deeper to get to the larger monsters. Jin figured it must take a decent amount of time for the ore to coalesce inside their body. Everyone was okay with going deeper. Dean was the same as ever, but Chris seemed to be taking this more seriously. Jin assumed they really admired Donoso. Letzi found it normal because Donoso was a legend after all. But Jin said he was more normal about this compared to the two of them. He responded that any excitement he felt just faded away when he saw those two. Letza took out the lantern and suggested trying it. Dean asked what that was, and he said Jin made it. It wasn't as bright as a torch, but it was quite easy to use. Note noticed that there was no candle inside. Letza said it was harder to extinguish than a candle, so it was good for outdoor use. They couldn't use it to intimidate or burn monsters, though. He gave it to the kids for a try. Jin had enough lanterns in his storage for everyone here, but it might be too much to bring them out, and he confirmed that from Donoso's glare. They arrived where the larvae and worms were. Donoso explained that the dry spots on the ground were more likely to collapse than the wet ones. Jin noticed holes in the wall and asked what they were. Before anyone could explain it, a huge bug jumped right at him. He caught the bug with his stick. Chris asked how he broke through its skin. They were pretty sturdy in general, but they shifted their insides to lessen the impact too. Ash said it would depend on how sharp his stick was and how fast he swung it. Denoso explained that those larval monsters wait inside their holes. Then when their prey is nearby, they poke their head out and spray acid. He told Jin to bait them out to spew their acid and they would finish them off. Jin started throwing the bug around and said he took it out before it could spew acid at all. Letzi told him to stop doing everything with that stick. That was great and all, but it was harder to dismantle them when the acid was still in their bodies. Note and Dean were whispering about Jin creating a stick as a new weapon. Jin said he was going to bait out the acid attack and then take it down, but this time his stick broke. Jin looked like his world was coming to an end when he saw his stick broken. Letza handed him his sword. While they discussed the bug, the kids saw a huge rat. It was as big as a bear, but that was not normal. Chris told Jin that this was a tri-horned monster. Denoso took his sword and took that down in a flash. He really lives up to his Wolf King title. Denoso said he could not let himself be shown up by the young ones that easily. In any case, he heard rumors of this, but there really had been an influx of stronger monsters out in the world. Now it was time to take it apart. Jin thought it was going to be really tough taking this thing apart. While they were doing it, Tina seemed worried, so Jin asked what was wrong. She was worried about her parents. Denoso and Shiva disappeared out of nowhere and no one saw them. Letza said, "Note, Denoso and Shiva went further in, and they were going to head back first." Jin asked the reason, but Letza stepped on his foot, so he shut up questioning. Tina knew that when her parents disappeared like this, that meant there was something dangerous they had to take care of. Ash told Tina that if she cried here and made a fuss, monsters would know that they were here. So if she didn't want her parents to worry, she should hold it in. Jin realized that they were meant to keep it quiet so that they wouldn't panic. He was really slow on the uptake. The fact that a tri-horned monster appeared could be a sign that there may be an even greater threat. It would be manageable if only a single monster like that appeared, but they couldn't be sure about that. The three of them probably went to investigate further. Seeing as how they didn't say anything to them, they probably assumed they would drag them down in a worst-case scenario. Even if they were gold-ranked adventurers, it was going to be tough to navigate and fight in a narrow, pitch-black tunnel. Letza gave them the lantern so they could see better in the dark. Jin used his search ability and detected the three of them and a large number of monsters ahead of them. The boys started to panic, so Tina told them that they were going to be fine. She reminded her siblings that their parents were strong. The more Jin spent time with Tina, the more he started to realize kind sisters really did exist. Jin repeated what Tina said and then jumped into that tunnel too, saying he was pretty strong too. He said he would be back in a second. The others tried to stop him, but it was of no use. He used wind spirits and all slaying blades. He asked fire spirits to lend him their strength. He had to hurry because the three of them had just encountered a large group of monsters. He figured that they made Letza mantle the monster in detail, just so they could slip away without making a scene. He could sense three people up ahead. He used his mana to light up the tunnel and saw the three of them fighting with a tri-horned rat again. He said he was stronger than they thought, and they were not allowed to leave him behind while slicing a monster in half. Denoso was pretty impressed. Now that they were not fumbling in the dark, this would be a piece of cake. It had been a real hassle not being able to see their own feet. Jin was actually strong but was so careless and full of openings. Jin told the others that the path ahead of them was full of monsters too. They fought with a lot of monsters, and after a while Denoso felt sleepy. Note figured that there must be a sleep-related spirit nearby. It was affecting the monsters too. They could barely stay awake. Note was right. The further they went in, the more sluggishly the monsters moved. Jin wondered if he was unaffected because of his mental fortitude skill or his healing skill. While checking if they killed all the monsters, Jin saw Daifuku. Denoso asked what that was, and he said it was nothing. It was just a person and a cat. The cat seemed to be spirit. The fact that they could see meant it was either very strong or it might be doing it on purpose. And it must be the source of drowsiness. Shiva asked the person if they could hear them. The drowsiness suddenly amplified. There was also a barrier between them. Jin wanted to try something out and took out a box. The cat woke up and saw the box. It started walking towards it and sat inside it. Jin asked what they were going to do now, but Denoso was clueless too. Note told him to think about what happens afterwards if he decides to capture it. It was just an impulse decision though. The person woke up and asked what they had done with Heil. Denoso said she meant the cat, which was in the box over there. The girl was shocked because he had never left her side before this. Shiva asked who she was and why she was here. She said her name was Sarah and it was just too noisy outside to sleep. She was so sleepy that she asked Heil to take her there. Heil's ability to make barriers meant that they could make it here. Denoso asked if it wasn't noisy here, and she responded that almost no sound passes through Heil's barrier. The loudest person was one Miss Rosa who wanted to borrow Heil. Jin couldn't believe she was scouting in a place like this. Sarah said she would only be happy if she had her 3 meals a day, naps in between, and a nice long sleep during the night. Based on what she was saying, she wouldn't get that, so she turned her away. Denoso asked if she wasn't mostly asleep. She could only stay awake for about 2 hours a day, and even then she would be sleepy. She was only away right now because Hyle stepped away. Thankfully, she was blessed with a lovely appearance. Her life aspiration was to become a mistress who could just stay in bed. Jin confirmed that she had a few screws loose. Note asked if she couldn't find a job relating to this barrier skill. Sarah responded that when Hyle sleeps, she is the only one allowed to be inside the barrier. And she might look like this, but she was still a spirit's bud. In the next scene, Jin took everyone to meet Sarah. He told them on their way that she was a seedy lady who had this spirit accompanying her. Dean thought he was being a bit too harsh. Letza said it must be lingering trauma from those 3 confessions he received that turned out not to be genuine. That was none of Jin's business, but regardless of gender, he didn't trust people. Denoso and the others were handling it right now, and he just doubled back to lead them here. When they arrived, Jin showed Dean and Chris the girl and said she wanted to be a wife, but also that she was not one for housework and child-rearing, so if that was fine, they could have her. Dean and Chris seemed pretty interested, and Chris was willing to do all the housework if it was for the person he loved. Ash wondered about Jin's opinion about finding a wife, and he said he would pass. It looked like they couldn't agree on things, so Jin asked if they were up to speed. Sarah asked them for something to eat, and Jin gave her a sandwich. She said she hadn't eaten in a week, so he was a lifesaver. It might be a side effect of Hyle's barrier, but she didn't sustain herself to survive while inside. She still got hungry, though. Jin gave her some leftover supplies. Shocked, she asked if he was sure and thanked him. Denoso asked what she was planning to do now. She said she would make her way back while Hyle was sleeping. Shocked, Denoso asked if she was going to leave Hyle here. She explained that Hyle wasn't contracted to her, and besides, this wasn't the first time he had taken a rest like this. It might have taken 3 days or even a year for him to wake up. In the meantime, she should be able to have her 3 meals a day and frequent naps. Dean asked if she had the money to sustain that lifestyle. She said she was the spirit's bud. If it weren't for Hyle, she would probably be a blossom by now. She said it before, but Jin was still curious about what that spirit's bud title was all about. While Jin was asking that, Letza interrupted and asked her if she had to keep eating and sleeping like this. Jin wondered if he was about to ask something bad. Sarah responded to Letza that she had always enjoyed sleeping, and because of Hyle's influence, she had also grown to really enjoy eating. Let's get the gist of it. Sarah thanked everyone and said that if they ever became capable of providing for her, they could feel free to get in touch. When she left, Letzi explained to Jin that a spirit's bud was a healer who works at spirit boughs or temples. A spirit's blossom was a healer who had shown exceptional ability and had received recommendations from multiple temples. This was common knowledge in this world, so he should be careful. Dean added that they dance in the temples and town squares during festivals too. Ash forgot to explain it to Jin before and asked if they should head to a spirit's bough some other time. Speaking of which, ever since Jin came to this world and met Ash, he had made it pretty clear he knew nothing about this world. Letzi asked if Hyle was still in the box. Ash opened it and found the cat pretty cute. Letza was confused because Ash could see it looked like a cat, but he couldn't. Note told Jin to consider the consequences before taking action. He said all he did was put a box on the floor. Letza asked where the hell he got the box from, but he averted his gaze. Once again, Jin changed the topic and asked what they should do about Hyle. He also said there was nothing they could do, but Jin didn't want to abandon a poor cat. Letza reminded him that it was a spirit, not a cat, and most people, including him, couldn't see them. Jin would take it in, but he was already looking after a dog. It would be wrong of him to take in more than he could handle. He had an idea and suggested letting it stay in Letza's room. Letza immediately opposed this idea. He thought it would be a good idea to balance out the presence of spirits in Letza's favor. Dean said it sounded like a fairly powerful spirit, so it was a bit of a waste. Denoso responded that it was not the kind of spirit they could just move without specifically preparing for it. It was best to leave it alone. Jin started yelling at the cat that if he got tired of this place, he could come to their place in Canham and gave him the full address of Letza's room. After that, Denoso said they should dismantle the monsters they had taken down and head home. Dean said they saw them take down a bunch of monsters on the way here. When they got out of the mine, Jin seemed to miss Luther. He was so good with the horse that they decided to give him away to him. Dean commented that he had a soft spot for animals. Jin said they were just open about how they feel without ulterior motives. When they were finally at home, he saw Hyle at the door. The cat went inside and Letza asked if it was already in his room. He said he would get a mattress and some blankets ready. Letza still insisted that he didn't want the cat, but Jin said it would be fine. Shiva suggested settling down and talking a bit, but Jin wanted to take a bath first. Letza grabbed his shirt and told him to take it out of here. He said he wasn't suited for this because he didn't mess with things out of his control. They ended up taking Hyle with them. He left Hyle at the Canham house, but he wondered if it would come with him to the other house. The more he looked at Hly, the more he looked like a massive daifuku. He did ask him if he wanted to tag along, but he didn't respond. The next day, Jin greeted Letzi and asked if he would like some bread he had baked. He said that would be great. Jin noticed that Heil was sleeping in his lap, but he didn't tell him that. He asked if he should bring over a small mattress after all. He started patting Heil and Letzi freaked out. Jin handed him the bread and the eggs. When breakfast was ready, Chris came and commented that it smelled great. The moment he and Letzi started having a conversation, Heil disappeared. So Jin figured he didn't like noisy places. After breakfast, he wondered if he should head back to the mountain house to make daifuku, but he needs to figure out what to do with Luther first. He then saw Note with someone. The atmosphere was a bit threatening, so he interrupted them. He said he would leave right away and left them alone since Note seemed surprised too. Note had it rough with his butler's duties. When he was finished, he came and apologized for troubling him like this, but there was another way to get past. Jin responded that he was fighting in front of his house. He then noticed that the guy he had fought off was lying on the street. A spirit came and took the man. Note smiled and stated that any normal person would see the situation and stay away. He said Note had it under control, so he was busy thinking about Luther after all. He then asked if he knew someone who could negotiate with merchants and craftsmen for him. If they were someone light-lipped, that would be even better. Note had someone in his mind. In the next scene, someone was asking Keel about who he thought this new client of his was. He turned his back and responded that it did not interest him at all. That is the end of the recap at chapter 35. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.